From shinobi to volleyball ace. What if Naruto played in Haikyu?
Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Was Star Player in Haikyu movie. Before we start, please go support Dragneel Slayer for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Naruto is a male. An ordinary boy with outstanding grades, a cheerful personality, and endless energy on a volleyball team. When Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto takes a dream seriously, he makes it a reality. And his dream now is to become the ace, the best volleyball player in the world. Karasuno will be pushed by a wind full of green leaves. Chapter 1. Shouts. Exclamations. Curses. The athletic center where the second round of the junior high athletics meet was being held was packed with people. Between family members, classmates, cheerleaders, and even TV crews who came to film the games for the local channels, the number of people inside probably exceeded 100 or even reached 200, always taking into account the members of the teams that were going to play. Although it was truly unusual for anyone to go watch unimportant games because the kids playing weren't in high school. These games were the starting point for many young people because if they achieved significant increases in their scores, they could get into good high schools if they loved the sport they played. Well, they were participating in volleyball games. But the shouts, the sound of the teenagers' footsteps was completely drowned out, muffled. Many of the 15-year-old boys participating would be observed by the various scouts sent by high schools. Even several boys from these high school teams would be watching to send a request to those boys. One of those kids who was in the eyes of many was Kageyama Tobio, a member of the Kitagawa Daiichi High School team, the favorite to win the tournament. The youngster had proven to be one of the best point guards in the tournament and was nicknamed the king of the court by his teammates as he led the team and sent the ball where it needed to go. Unfortunately, although they had dispatched a rookie team in the first round, Kageyama's own weaknesses were evident to those who understood the sport. Being the king of the court wasn't working out well for Kageyama himself, as it was a nickname truly meant to harm. Stubborn and eager to win, Kageyama had been putting too much pressure on his teammates throughout many matches, and this was being reflected in the current tournament. Kageyama's teammates' faces grew increasingly angry, tired, and eager for Kageyama to understand what was eluding him. The Muas. Can someone grab Lee? We'll end up in trouble again. It's a good thing Guy-sensei isn't around. The Muas. Seriously, someone stop him. Appearing at the side of the court, a group of young men wearing dark green uniforms bearing the name Konoha High School stood in full view of all the spectators. This was a young team from a high school that had only been established for 3 years, and their team had reached the second round of the tournament, something truly surprising, as the first match seemed almost lost for those boys. Yum yum. Joji. Can you stop eating? Yum, I need yum calories. Ha. We'll crush these guys with my Fang style. Don't start, Kiba. We don't have time for your ego. HMPH. Not for your emotions either. Letting out a sigh, the captain of that team of teenagers slapped his face, looking at his teammates with laziness and exhaustion. Did they really think about winning that junior tournament? With such a mismatched team, everything was going to end worse than anyone could realistically expect. And it would be annoying for him to be the cause of such a disaster. But even as captain, he couldn't control his teammates' emotions, much less get all their personalities to mesh together for that match. Again, he let a sigh escape his mouth. They weren't really the problem. They could all work together when the need arose. The real problem was the last of their companions, the one they were there for, and the most troublesome. Has anyone seen Naruto? Without him, this game can't start. The energetic boy stopped his run across the stadium, asking the question his teammates were asking each other from the stands. The captain even thought he heard one of the girls slapping her forehead. And another thing, why aren't you excited? We're playing against the king of the court, Yos. Lee, control your emotions. The captain hit the boy's back, knocking him to the ground. Or you'll get us kicked out. I'll control myself. Rock Lee. Excited. Energetic. Powerful. Among the students at Konoha High School and on his volleyball team, Lee was the most energetic of all. When the others were tired, choking from lack of air, Lee would always carry the team to the front, carrying it on his shoulders. He never lost his footing, and his energy seemed endless. Yum yum. Can you give me one? Akamichi Choji. With a plump body and a huge heart. While Choji didn't have the athletic build that many volleyball players had, who were thin and muscular, Choji had shown unmatched spike power. His body was built for hitting hard while flying like a butterfly. I already finished them. His veracity could only be compared to the cardinal sin of gluttony. He was one of those diners who could ruin a restaurant if he was having a good day. Fortunately, his days were generally normal. DSK. Inyazuka Kiba. Barking like a dog, he generally stuffed more into his jaws than he could chew, driven by an alpha male ego, even greater than that usually exhibited by men of his ilk. Luckily, his older sister, along with their mother, began to tone down his precious ego, although it was still excessive. HMPH. Uchiha Sasuke. Cold. Quiet. He was the cold, emo guy who usually attracted female attention at his school, always withdrawn and trying to stay apart from everyone, like the bad boy. Surprisingly, the boy managed to make friends unlike his character, with his best friend being the complete opposite of him. Soon after, he joined the volleyball team and ended up being one of its best players, a member of the golden duo of Konoha High School. Where is this troublesome blonde? Nara Shikamaru. Calm. Lazy. With a quick mind and capable of devising 1,000 tactics, Shikamaru had been named captain by the team's coach. Among the boys, he was the most capable of keeping a cool head when the situation was tight. Analytical, Shikamaru would always make the best decision for his teammates, even if it affected him. He said he was going to the bathroom, Choji pointed out as he rummaged through his bag. Something about bad ramen came out of his mouth and then he just walked away. DSK. Flicking his tongue in annoyance, Sasuke began tugging at the zipper of his sports jacket. If Naruto didn't hurry, they'd be completely disqualified and that wasn't something the Uchiha was really going to allow. Even if it did happen, he'd beat his. I'm here. Happy. Smiling. Holding a straw with a number written on it in pen. That's how Uzumaki Naruto introduced himself to his teammates, wearing, like everyone else, the tracksuit that would soon disappear to reveal the team's uniform hidden beneath the simple fabric of the tracksuit. You're a little late. A straw? Seriously? Shikamaru asked calmly, raising his eyebrow at the cheeky number engraved on the container his friend and companion was holding. Did they draw a fox on you? Looking more closely at the packaging, Uzumaki's companions could see a chibi fox drawn on the packaging, with 9 tails waving behind it in an attempt to look fierce. Haha, I couldn't stop the saleswoman. She was really kind of giving me this. He tried to hit on you. He even gave you his number. Kiba pointed out, completely jealous of the blonde getting all the female attention. Between him and the Uchiha, there wasn't a girl in the school who hadn't fallen for them. He's so annoying. Arg. Kiba's constipated again. Pulling out a bag of chips, Choji flashed a huge grin. Finally. I thought I'd left it at home. Luckily, I didn't. Choji. What? I'm hungry, Shikamaru. Smacking his face with his hand, Shikamaru found this impossible. Why did Guy-sensei have to make him captain? Carrying the weight of the entire team, as well as their actions, was truly annoying for someone like him. He just wanted some peace and quiet, for God's sake. Well, Naruto set his straw aside on the bench, stepping forward, unzipping his jacket and standing next to Sasuke. The Daiichi, huh? I guess we'll get to see how Kageyama Tobio performs firsthand. Do you think he's that good, Sasuke? He has good eyes. He must have them if he wants to be a setter. Sasuke's face remained flat, calm. With thick black locks framing his face, the teenager kept his onyx eyes on the boy in question. Kageyama, like most volleyball players, was tall, lanky, slender, and agile in his jumps. His feet moved with coordination and he jumped to pass to the spiker. He has good positioning. However, he is so skilled that his teammates can't keep up with his positioning, being too powerful and ending up off the court. How do you want to act? Kakashi technique. Playing like lazy, bad players and then showing off in the second half and earning a spot among one of the schools watching. Sasuke asked, looking at the blonde out of the corner of his eye. That might work. But it'll make Kageyama and Daiichi in general get complacent. Well, Naruto pulled the cloth and placed a fingerless glove over his right hand, that would just be a way to create openings for our game. Like a leaf, we'll move over them to beat them. Are you really going to take this as a game? Kageyama has the potential to completely overthrow us. Are you aware of that, Naruto? Or are you just thinking about your own interest in beating the best? Sasuke asked directly, keeping his dark eyes on the figure of the king of the track. After a few seconds without getting an answer from his friend, he just let out a sigh. This will really be a pain in the ass in the future. Before the Uzumaki could respond, both boys felt a shove on their backs, forcing them to walk toward the field. Shikamaru had had enough and was actually a little annoyed, wanting to get home as soon as possible. He'd made his bed nice and soft, and a nap didn't hurt. You can talk about your things while you play, the captain declared, giving one last push. Both boys stared at Shikamaru for a few seconds before focusing on the Daiichi players. Naruto felt the suppressed anger in Kageyama's eyes, as if he hadn't yet found what he was looking for. Just needs a fast player. That's what he realized when he saw Kageyama's moves. As a setter, he was an extraordinary player with rarely seen potential. But that was where his problem lay. He needed a player who could coordinate with him in speed and jumping, something few could truly do. Except for that boy. While Daiichi's first match was a breeze, one young man on the opposing team stood out for his physical prowess. Although he was short, the boy seemed to be able to run at speeds greater than any other player, and he could jump higher than any other player so far. Being a fast and agile player himself, he was able to appreciate even more fully what the orange-haired boy had achieved. When he leaped and spiked the ball, scoring his team's only point, it was a complete spectacle. No one expected it. Everyone had already seen Daiichi's point, but the little player moved swiftly and reached with his hand, scoring a spectacular point that, although it was useless, brought the entire stadium to its feet, cheering the boy and being amazed. They ultimately lost, as everyone expected it, but the boy left a lasting impression with his point. Can you focus, Naruto? They're going to take out. Tight. No, they've already taken out. Splash. Point for Daiichi with a quick serve that breaks the score. Weren't you defending, Choji? I was with my parents. And so, the confrontation between Konoha High School and Kitagawa Daiichi High School had begun with the powerful and swift serve of one of the Daiichi players, taking advantage of the weak point that Choji himself had left behind when he was focused on his food, as he often did during training. It was actually good. Sasuke twisted his lips, but not that good. Did you expect more? Naruto admired the opponent's serve. It was fast, powerful, and went deep, leaving a point too important for them, at least for the opponent. I want to see what Kageyama does. Movios. Watching Daiichi's next serve, the Konoha boys reacted. Quickly watching the ball curve upward and then downward, Kiba used his arms to act as a receiver, catching the ball. Someone take it. Leave it here. Pushing his body, Naruto took a stride and kicked the ball towards Rock Lee, just as he pushed forward with his leg, an oddly coordinated move pulled out of the hat. I'll do my best. Yush. Pam. Point for Konoha High School, who managed to tie the game in a few seconds. That wasn't part of the plan, but good finish, Lee, Naruto said, praising his friend's hit. For his part, Lee gave a thumbs up and a wide smile, something that reminded the boys on the team of their volleyball coach, well, the coach of every sports team in school. Mido Guy really was a sports god. On the other side, things were a little worse. Wait, they really did that? How did they coordinate like that? They're supposed to be a rookie team. Just because they're beginners, Kageyama shifted his eyes to the blonde, narrowing them, doesn't mean they're incompetent. We're going to have to step up our game. With Konoha Middle School now out after a rotation, Daiichi Middle School launched an attack, returning the ball. As the point guard, Kageyama kept his eyes on the opponents, observing how they moved. No member of Konoha Middle School seemed truly nervous, least of all the blue-eyed boy with the marks on his cheeks. Responding to the serve, Lee received the ball with his forearms, sending it high. Shikamaru moved and struck, sending the ball into Daiichi's court. Watching the ball, one of the defenders moved to receive it, lifting it high enough for Kageyama to act. Seeing an opening, he placed the ball so that it could be hit by one of his teammates, but it didn't work. Shit. Venting his frustration with that curse, Kageyama glared at the teammate who sent the pass. The latter backed away, not responding. It was a normal occurrence between them and Kageyama. No one at Daiichi was capable of taking Kageyama's passes. Are you going to take advantage of it? Watching this event, Sasuke spoke to his partner, now both moving to the right. Oh, well. That's kind of obvious, Naruto admitted with a foxy grin. One thing he was known for was exploiting his opponent's weaknesses and gaps, and Kitagawa Daiichi had one obvious gap that even a child could see right through. The gap between the other team members and their prized king of the track was beginning to widen too much. Shall we continue with the game? Sasuke asked again, now letting his voice sound completely cold, as if it were a dagger running through his rival's neck. Letting out a laugh hidden in a sigh, Naruto scratched the back of his neck. Be my outfitter, Sasuke. We're going to have the Daiichi scouted. Now snorting, Sasuke braced himself. He was the starting point guard, the only one at Konoha High. His eyes had adapted to the speeds, and after spending years alongside Naruto, he knew how the Uzumaki moved and acted, knowing what he could accomplish with his contribution as a point guard. No, it's actually me who improves with Naruto on the field. And without further ado, Lee served directly after passing to the backcourt. The dark-skinned player struck the ball and sent it bouncing toward Kitagawa Daiichi's half. The ball was received by one of the defenders, who slammed his forearms onto the ball, sending it toward Kageyama. Tobio breathed calmly. Seeing the ball, he knew what to do with it and placed it. On this occasion, the striker did hit the ball. Moving with speed, Lee caught the ball, quickly lifting it with his hand and spinning it on the ground. Someone. Following the move, Shikamaru took that pass and hit the ball, deflecting it slightly towards Choji, who received the ball and hit it towards Sasuke. Sasuke took a deep breath. He scanned the Kitagawa Daiichi players, watching their movements. He shifted his weight and bent his knees to stand up, leaning slightly to the left, making his opponents think he was going to pass Kiba. Idiots. Quickly, Sasuke stepped back. Watching Konoha's play, Kageyama opened his eyes when Uchiha Sasuke made that fake pass to the left and then pass to the right. But that wasn't what surprised him. Cloak. Height. Swift, like a gazelle escaping from a tiger, Uzumaki Naruto leaped and received Sasuke Uchiha's placement as if it were a moving leaf, striking the ball with force and crashing the sphere into the Daiichi field. Silence fell for a few seconds. Labored breaths. Beads of sweat falling onto the gym floor. Those small sounds were drowned out by the cheers after the blonde's point as he jumped energetically. Of course they were going to, Shikamaru admitted, smiling at that. Oh, yeah. They weren't going to just stand there and do nothing for the entire first set. With Naruto being as nervous as he is, they were clearly going to take over. After that point, things got complicated for Kitagawa Daiichi. Gaining strength and using their golden duo, Konoha pressured the Kitagawa boys to respond. Following the pressure, Kageyama Tobio began to move faster. If his teammates needed everything they had to keep up with their teammate, now they really needed everything and more to connect with their setter. At the end of the first set the difference was 25 points for Konoha and 15 for Kitagawa Daiichi, who was dragging a sweaty, pressured and irritated Kageyama. None of his passes reached where he wanted them to go. They all slipped through his teammates' hands, the ones that just hit the air without even touching the ball. They really move in a coordinated manner. Kageyama raised his head. The Konoha high school team remained calm, chatting with laughter and accompanied by some girls they seemed to know. For him, a setter, seeing another setter copy his moves and do it perfectly was strange. Even more so when that opposing setter was able to coordinate with another player who hit the ball without fear, as if he knew where it was going to be. I can't understand it. How did they do it? They force me to move faster. Hearing the whistle, both teams got going. What Kageyama didn't know was that this match was going to be too complicated for him. Chapter 2. Wiping the sweat from his haggard face, Kageyama Tobio kept his attention completely on the scoreboard. 25-0 in the second set, giving Konoha High School a victory over them, Kitagawa Daiichi, effectively eliminating them from the junior tournament with no chance of playing another match. It was their second match after defeating the rookie team, and a rookie team was defeating them. Don't buck with me. Tobio gritted his teeth. He felt anger, helplessness. Every dark and nauseating feeling was within him in those moments, and his eyes couldn't tear themselves away from that scoreboard that was burning him internally, making him remain completely static on that bench, while his teammates, equally disappointed, began to enter the tunnel back to the locker room. How is this possible? Konoha didn't seem like much. They hadn't had a volleyball team for a long time. In fact, they'd only had that team for a few months, so prioritizing that team wasn't something Kitagawa Daiichi or Kageyama himself thought. However, that choice was a mistake on their part. From the very first point of the first set, Konoha went all out against them, and Kageyama felt the pressure on his shoulders as they forced him to play much faster, much quicker, and to try to coordinate with his teammates practically by force, which put even more pressure on him. His passes were failing, his teammates weren't coordinating with him, and slowly he felt the gap between himself and his team begin to grow and leave him behind. And that was taken advantage of by Konoha. Before their eyes, Konoha's golden duo had pushed them point after point, making them work harder, sweat harder until they couldn't give any more. The image of the blonde man hitting the ball and himself falling backwards was repeated like a striped tape. It was in that instant, when his mind wasn't connected to his body, that a blow to his back finally made him move. He swallowed hard. He used the back of his hand to wipe the sweat running down his face and, with tired eyes, looked at the cause of his defeat, the boy who had brought him out of his stupor with that movement. You look a little out of it, Kageyama Tobio, Uzumaki Naruto pointed out with a slight smile. In his right hand, still containing some liquid, the paper cup that the clerk had drawn and signed with her phone number, stood out in all its glory, as an ugly reminder to the men that he got the number from the beautiful clerk. You're a little sweaty. Naruto pointed at a thick drop that had fallen down his forehead. Kageyama waved it away. You're pretty good at setter. Good eyes. Good movements. It's a shame your teammates can't keep up with the ball your arms are sending skyward. Taking the straw between his teeth, Naruto took a sip of his drink. If anyone could have kept up with you, the match would have ended differently. Sasuke and I have been playing volleyball since we were kids, and we're perfectly suited to each other. But your eyes are actually better. I saw that thanks to your height, you far outperformed the passes Sasuke threw at me during the match. But breaking your stability was what gave us the pass. Your coach was watching you. I know you felt the man's eyes, just as your team was slowly falling apart. And you did nothing. Naruto stood before Kageyama. Backing away from those blunt words, the king of the court looked at the shorter boy, as if he were a much taller man. You have a hot temper. If you had backed down and calculated everything, you would have put up a better fight without the need for a fast and powerful player, because that's what you lack, right? Someone who can track the balls you pass, someone who can hit them hard to score slowly, the blonde lowered the tone of his speech. Many of the Daiichi players had stopped and began to watch them directly. It wasn't as if they were being very discreet, either. Or rather, Uzumaki Naruto wasn't discreet at all in their conversation. His powerful and energetic voice struck every person within a 20-meter radius, reaching almost 30. Kageyama himself realized that his ears were being completely filled with that reverberating voice. And one that you can completely connect with. Coordination between setter and player must be perfect, even more so if it's on the attack or if it's the ace himself. Naruto twisted his lips. He could see how Kageyama was being overwhelmed by his speech. But he was finding it entertaining and strangely wanted to see the boy in all his splendor. Facing him with a partner to coordinate with. That would bring out much more in him than playing alone on that court. Naruto then moved. Kageyama swallowed the saliva that had been resting in his mouth and felt a tap on his right shoulder. With that simple gesture, he was able to break out of the trance he'd been in throughout the one-sided conversation created by his opponent, and he was able to move, staring at the back of the boy who was shorter than him. Not too much, but a few inches. You. Uzumaki Naruto raised his arm. Kageyama closed his mouth and gritted his teeth as he watched the boy wave his hand without turning around, as if he were nothing to him. Was he that proud? Was he that much more despising him than if he were a mere ant? It hadn't been enough that his former mentor had despised him when he was just a junior. Now that kid from the rookie team was despising him too. And he was so hateful. Kageyama Tobio? That voice made him look up. Naruto had stopped and turned slightly. Tobio saw that bright blue eye staring at him, as if he was the only one in the gym and no one else. See you in a year. I hope you find some good players to train by then, king of the court. It was true. After that tournament in a year, I'd be going to a high school. I'd take any school with a good volleyball team and rise to the top, leaving that behind. And? Kageyama Tobio finally decided to abandon that path. His rival's words echoed in his mind, and the memory of that orange-haired boy returned like wildfire. Naruto. Now, Naruto scratched the back of his neck as he was being lightly scolded by one of the team's assistants. This girl with platinum blonde hair and blue eyes seemed to have a really strange taste for purple. Sorry. Naruto bowed to the girl and classmate, bowing forward. I just wanted to give you a pep talk, Ino. Yamanaka Ino. Like her classmates Haruno Sakura and Hyuga Hinata, Ino joined the newly formed Konoha High School volleyball team as one of its assistants, thus becoming part of the team alongside all the other teenagers. Ah. Exasperated by her partner's behavior, Ino placed her hand on her head and let out a sigh. She wasn't the only one to do this, and the Uzumaki could only lean his body further. You shouldn't give speeches to every opponent you defeat. It's a bit awkward, and you could end up sending one of them into a post-match funk. Don't make them feel worse than they already do, idiot. And with a completely straight hand, Ino hit the Uzumaki's head. We can't do anything now, Shikamaru interceded. Like Ino, he found this extreme and unnecessary. His rivals didn't need a speech. They already knew what they'd done wrong and what they needed to improve. We must prepare for the next matches. Oh? There's going to be more. Toji expressed horror at the mention of more matches. He had joined the team himself when they couldn't find more players, but only for that one match. No one had mentioned more than one match to him. I told you, Choji. We're in a youth tournament. We're not just going to play one match and win. Grabbing Akimichi, the team captain pushed him toward the hallway leading to the locker room. When have you ever seen a tournament end in just one match? Toji was pushed by Shikamaru toward the hallway. Slowly, the entire Konoha High School team made their way toward the locker room, except for two boys. It's really good. Recognizing that he was outmatched, Uchiha Sasuke kept his eyes on the hallway entrance where Kageyama Tobio had disappeared after the completely one-sided conversation on the blonde side. And? Uzumaki Naruto had imitated his companion. Like the Uchiha, he kept his eyes on the entrance to the hallway where Daiichi had disappeared a few seconds before. Putting his hands in the pockets of his tracksuit jacket, Sasuke finally turned around. He just needs a player like you, someone who can follow his movements, who can take his passes and return them to score. Only with someone like that will he be able to reach the heights his spirit seems to crave. Oh? Naruto whipped his head around. Blinking in confusion, he weakly raised his arm. You? What did you say? Did you acknowledge that Kageyama has a spirit? More importantly, since when do you care about something like spirit? Since when is that word even in your vocabulary? Sasuke. Can you hear me? DSK. We haven't even left the place yet, idiot. Sasuke slammed his hand against the Uzumaki's face, causing the blonde teen's skin to turn a little red from the blow itself. Moving his hand, he grabbed the blonde by the head and began dragging him, hearing him complain. Shut up. You always end up making a spectacle of yourself wherever you go. That's true. Sasuke pulled his partner along. Resigned, Konoha's ace followed his teammate toward the locker room, whining and complaining about the poor treatment he was receiving. Without showing that he was listening, Uchiha Sasuke pushed the Uzumaki into the hallway. Naruto stumbled and watched as the doors closed behind his partner. Those onyx eyes looked straight at him. "Naruto," Sasuke began in a thick voice. Slowly, Naruto stood up and stopped his own words that would have come out on their own. "I'm going to Shiratorizawa. They offered me a scholarship and I accepted." Naruto didn't respond immediately. He remained silent for a total of 20 seconds, his eyes always on his companion. After that pause, he opened his mouth, thinking about a response. "Shiratorizawa, eh?" He savored that name. Shiratorizawa Academy had a volleyball team that was recognized as one of the top 8 teams in the entire country. Its offense and defense led it to participate in national tournaments several times and to surpass other renowned academies like Aoba Josei, a rival Shiratorizawa had defeated countless times. It wasn't strange, at least to him, that Sasuke had been awarded a scholarship to enter that academy. People like him and Kageyama could be called upon and would be pushed to a truly high level if they entered that academy. "That's a good place to go," he acknowledged. Smiling, Naruto kept his head high as he looked at his companion. "Shiratorizawa is truly good for you, Sasuke." Sensing those words, Uchiha Sasuke narrowed his eyes. He wasn't an idiot. He knew perfectly well that Naruto had also been called to Shiratorizawa and he was surprised why he hadn't accepted, as his scholarship would be much more comprehensive than his own. Crush. Naruto didn't make a move. Sasuke grabbed him by the collar and faced him directly. Black against blue. "Don't buck with me, Naruto. I know perfectly well that Shiratorizawa has called you up. Why haven't you accepted?" Sasuke gritted his teeth and gripped the fabric of the Uzumaki's uniform tighter. Slowly, Naruto placed his hand over the Uchiha's, causing him to back away slightly and loosen his own grip. Even so, Sasuke remained glued to the Uzumaki. "Will you calm down? I don't necessarily have to go to Shiratorizawa, right? I have my own choices to make, Sasuke," she replied calmly. Sasuke finally let go of his partner. Naruto sighed and tried to move, but the Uchiha's hand stopped him in place, pinning him against the wall. "Why did you deny it, Naruto? Why did you deny the scholarship?" Naruto lowered his face slightly. He looked at the Uchiha's pale hand, his fingers pressed against his chest, his back pressed against the wall. He raised his head. "Because I wanted to, Sasuke." TSK. Flicking his tongue, Sasuke finally released the Uzumaki and allowed him to pass by as he stood there, head bowed. He wanted to give up the scholarship. Was he joking? From what he remembered, the two of them had always wanted to team up at Shiratorizawa, but suddenly, Naruto had just dropped that and there was only one reason why he wouldn't go to Shiratorizawa with him. "Little idiot," Sasuke shook his head and watched his friend's back as he walked into the locker room. Letting out a low growl, he began to stand up. Airhead. Always carrying everything. So next to the Uchiha, Shikamaru showed a worried face, the same one Sasuke had. "Is that why?" "Yes. Just because of that, Naruto wouldn't have to go far, so I think he could go to Karasuno. It's the closest academy to his house, and it doesn't take him too long to get there," Sasuke replied, wiping away with the back of his hand a few small tears that Shikamaru would never say he saw, although he was tempted to let his own fall. "It'll destroy his dream." "There's nothing we can do," Sasuke, Shikamaru muttered, punching his partner's shoulder. Even his mother told him so, but you see how stubborn he can be. I can understand how frustrating it is for Ino or Sakura to deal with him sometimes. He's a whirlwind of energy who won't stop when he sets his mind to something. Stopping his words, the Nara now looked at the Uchiha. "I didn't know you cared so much about him. We are childhood friends." "Ah," Shikamaru looked back at Naruto. He shoved his hands in his pants pockets and took several steps away from the wall. "Shiratorizawa has a room system, right? And?" Shikamaru didn't respond to that monosyllable. It was clear Sasuke would take the dorm option and Naruto could have, but he didn't. He wasn't going to take the Shiratorizawa scholarship either and he'd head off to Karasuno if he couldn't find another academy closer to home. The blonde was truly stubborn and a real pain in the ass that they had to deal with most of the time. "Stupid troublemaker," Shikamaru clicked his tongue. After a while, he let out a resigned sigh that Sasuke identified with all too well. "Sakura can't find out. You know how she is. They're both very good friends." The Nara looked at the Uchiha. Sasuke only nodded slightly at that, understanding what Shikamaru meant. If they told the girls about this, they would probably do everything they could to get Naruto to Shiratorizawa, which would slowly destroy him and ultimately affect all of them. And their teammate was already in enough trouble without them putting more pressure on him. "Let's go," Shikamaru started walking. "Let's keep this between us for now." As always, Naruto will be giving his cheerful smile, that mask he uses to hide his problems. If he doesn't talk about it, neither do we, okay? I know. Sasu clicked his tongue for the third time and followed his captain back to the locker room. Within a year, they would all be separated and enrolled in different academies. Within a year, the Black Wings would fly again. Chapter 3. Karasuno High School had been recognized a few years earlier by a short student who had made it to the volleyball nationals with his team, standing out for his enormous skill despite his height and the ridicule that others could throw at him, being an inspiration that increased the flight of the crows with much more intensity, generating a call within players and fans. But that era had passed and as if it were a sports manga, the Karasuno team never again made it to the nationals or achieved any extremely important achievement for the school or for people to put an eye on the players of Karasuno High School, being simply ordinary players who let their opportunity slip away a few years ago, in their golden age. This used to happen with various teams, even professional ones, calling such moments a crisis they needed to resolve. But professional teams had the money to buy players to strengthen their team, improve it to a certain extent, or start over with a completely new roster. This wasn't the case with high schools, where players came from admitted students or from scholarships awarded by the school itself. And Karasuno didn't have the financial power to award athletic scholarships to its students and attract good players. They didn't even have significant achievements to attract these players' attention and give them a chance at the nationals. And yet, the goddess of fortune seemed to have smiled on Karasuno with a last-minute entry and a name written on said registration form that soon reached the hands of the Karasuno team. Daichi Samura was the current captain of Karasuno and had been on the team for 3 years, currently a third-year player who remained active within the team despite the recent problems, and past he was carrying as captain and as an injured team member, being better known as the Winged Crows than those crows who raise their wings and fly. This is that boy. Daichi's dark eyes were fixed on the photo on the volleyball team's application form. He'd recently received a total of 4, including Kageyamas from Daichi and the short boy who played against them. But he never expected an application from a boy like the one they seemed to have on the team. What's up, Daichi? Ashi Sugawara was the setter for the Karasuno team and, like Daichi, was a third-year high school student, his last year as a member of the volleyball team. This year we may have a chance. The team captain's eyes shone with an uncharacteristic intensity, according to Sugawara, who looked over his shoulder at the sheet of paper his teammate was holding. It held a picture of a boy in place with a paperclip. He seemed like a nice guy, with truly brilliant eyes on his face, like 2 enormous glittering sapphires that never went out. Is it another candidate? No. Daichi wasn't going to take a test. No test would take him. He's a full-fledged member of the team. He won't have a test like Hinata or Kageyama and the other guys. Didn't you see him play in the tournament where Kageyama and Daichi lost to an unknown team? This is the ace of that team. And he has overwhelming physical power. The match between Kitagawa Daichi and Konoha was a showdown worth rewatching, even though it had been a year since that duel between the volleyball teams. And Daichi had to admit that Konoha's players demonstrated things he didn't think he'd ever seen from rookies or high schoolers. How did they manage to pull off coordinated plays? How did the setter and the ace move so in sync as if they were the same person? Even each team member's serves seemed like bombs they unleashed against the court at all times, forcing Kitagawa to keep up with them and thus forcing Kageyama to tighten his own. And few players were able to see the weaknesses of an opposing team and exploit them for victory, as the boy who was going to Karasuno that year did. And I intended to take him on the team. The boy could feel the sweat on his forehead, or rather, the nerves running through his body and mind. He was just a few feet away from his team's next ace, a player so complete that he could be known as an all-rounder on the court for his physical condition and skills. Although that was a lot to say about a kid who showed nothing in high school, but whom Daichi always viewed favorably. The ace of a winning team didn't always appear on the doorstep, and he couldn't let it go, even if it sounded completely selfish on his part. I had to seize the opportunity. Are you going to pressure the boy, Daichi? Have you become that cruel? What? No. Sugawara. A soft laugh escaped Sugawara's lips. The boy saw his captain's enthusiasm at the new student's arrival. And it wasn't normal. It had never happened to him before. He himself had been present during the match between Daichi and Konoha, but he didn't pay much attention to any of the players established by either team. To him, they were the same as the previous teams. Although he had to admit that he didn't even pay enough attention to the entire match to be able to draw the same conclusions as his teammate, the one who seemed to be drooling over the paper in his hands. But he could give the new student a chance, see what he was capable of once he showed up on the court. Just kidding, Captain Sugawara's hand slapped Daichi's back, causing him to grunt, grumbling at the implications of the setter's words. But he seems too good to get that reaction. What did you see in him? What didn't I see, Suga? It would be easier to answer you. Skill, power, speed, flexibility. The boy seemed to have everything a player needed to play volleyball, but at a completely unusual level. He seemed to possess all the skills of all the field players and I couldn't see where to position him without it being perfect. He was such a complete player, he'd fill any position just by positioning it. And he wouldn't even need another player to teach him what position to play. I could swear to that. Is it that good? Sugawara found himself feeling an interest in the boy even though he hadn't met him. Usually, when he asked Daichi about a negative point, he would readily point it out without even needing to bring it up. That had happened with Hinata and Kageyama, who were undergoing strict training for their initial test. But Daichi didn't see a weak or negative point in the new boy. It was strange, and it made him feel even more interested in the new addition. I've seen him move, plan, and play perfectly, Suga. You might think the moves or plans were the point guards doing, but they weren't. You could see, if you looked closely, how the kid was the one moving the others like simple puppets, like extensions of his body to execute his moves, and Shiratorizawa didn't have a kid like that. I hadn't seen another player move like the new signing I was hoping to introduce to the other Karasuno players. How could I test him when he'd already passed the tests before entering middle school? He really is an athletic marvel who could give us a win this year. I have faith. Faith is the last thing to be lost, or so they say, Daichi. Are you sure you won't have to take on another self-centered man like Kageyama? Because with just one, we have enough. I don't know how we're going to deal with him during the matches and the dynamic with Hinata. Ah. That's if both of them passed the proposed test, right? Daichi's lips curved into an amused smile, which Sugawara returned as he looked at his captain. If they really prove to be good teammates, I'll have no problem bringing them in. But if they can't work together, then we don't need them. Hinata and Kageyama had proven themselves skilled. Hinata was an inexperienced physical prodigy, but possessed the strength and speed to keep up with Kageyama's plays. Kageyama, on the other hand, was one of the best junior setters, with potential only overshadowed by his self-centeredness and self-interest, which was truly annoying when it clashed with Hinata's intensity and inexperience, having only participated in one tournament. Together they could give Karasuno a weapon. A weapon that would take them to the threshold of the nationals, and Daichi could see it. He saw it only in that small tournament. They had a perfect duo to push them to take flight. But for the crow to fly, both Kageyama and Hinata had to work as a team to move together, rowing toward the same summit, something they weren't currently doing. Uzumaki Naruto. Yeah? Daichi and Sugawara turned around when a male voice came from behind them. A boy with messy hair, blue eyes, and a calm smile stood in the gym doorway, staring at them as if he had two enormous blue spotlights for eyes. Ah. Excuse me, senpais. Naruto bowed his head as soon as he realized his mistake and forced a bow towards the two older boys, showing them both the respect they deserved. Both Daichi and Sugawara returned the bow, the captain being the one who did so much more effusively. Some classmates showed me the way, although I believe my application has already been submitted. I would like to join the Karasuno volleyball team. Please. Once again, the boy bowed to both older teenagers. Sugawara then took the liberty of looking at him, seeing his physique. And he had to say that not even the former Karasuno ace had that kind of physical shape. What sports had he played to have such an athletic build that was so unusual for a first-year teenager? Was that match against Daichi really only his second match in high school? Confusion filled his mind, and Sugawara couldn't understand where Naruto had been all that time. Hadn't any other team offered him a scholarship? Hahaha. Daichi was the first to break the silence resulting from that request and looked at the boy standing there. His height was, in his eyes, about 6 feet 8 inches, maybe a little less, and he seemed to be a boy physically coordinated with his own body. No need to be so formal, Uzumaki. We received your application form for the Karasuno team, maybe a little late. But it doesn't matter. From what we discussed with the teacher, we accepted the form. And seeing as you were on another team, I take it you have experience, right? Yes. I've been playing volleyball for as long as I can remember. My parents were both professional players, so I have a broad knowledge of sports in general. You shouldn't worry about that aspect, senpai. Yes, that's perfect for us. It's a pleasure to hear. Daichi extended his hand to the newest member of the team, showing him a wide smile. I'm the captain, Samura Daichi. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Naruto took Daichi's hand and felt his captain's squeeze, letting him know he was testing him. Accepting that, he returned the squeeze with a huge foxy grin. It's a pleasure to join Karasuno, Captain. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, from Konoha High School. I hope I can be of service and learn alongside you. Sugawara was the next to reach out to the blonde, feeling his grip. Not only did his muscles back up his strength, but his strength backed up his strength, making him feel inferior to the boy in front of him. Sugawara Kashi, Karasuno's setter and third-year student. I hope we can get along, Uzumaki-san. I hope so too, Sugawara-senpai. Daichi's intention was to truly see what Naruto was capable of. He'd accepted him onto the team without any proof, but he had to do something to see which of the rookies was the best, the one with the greatest potential. And tomorrow, Tanaka's team would face him and the other two boys who had arrived. And with Tanaka were Hinata and Kageyama, the explosive duo. We have a 3-on-3 match tomorrow. Do you think you could join one of the teams? We're just short of one more player for practice, and I want to see what you're capable of, Uzumaki. Oh. The fox-like grin appeared again, wider, much more intense. The eyes formed two slits, and Daichi swore he saw a fox's face where the Karasuno rookie's face had been. That seems perfect to me. Happy to help. Tomorrow, two teams were going to face each other. Tanaka's team and Naruto's. If Daichi had to bet, he wouldn't hesitate to back Tanaka's team due to their experience, but he had no doubt that Naruto would push for victory, even with Kageyama on the other side of the net. And how would the king of the track react to the presence of his rival? Chapter 4. It was a Saturday in early April, the sun had already risen over the horizon a few hours earlier, and at Karasuno High School, more specifically in the school sports hall, the boys of the volleyball club had gathered with the team's assistant for the 3-versus-3 match that would take place to test the first-year boys and see their coordination. Initially, the team captain was going to enter the team formed by Tsukushi Mikei and Yamaguchi Tadashi, the two other first-year boys who had joined the team. However, the entry of another player had made Daichi decide to step aside and let a team with 3 first-years face the team of Tanaka, Kageyama, and Hinata, the latter two being the boys Daichi really wanted to try out and see if they had improved enough to be teammates. Kageyama Tobio's dark eyes had widened in surprise at the last member of Karasuno. The same surprise that was fully reflected on his face and that he couldn't hide from his classmates. But there was a reason for it. Well, he couldn't get into Shiratorizawa Academy because he was rejected. Kageyama doubted that would have happened to the boy in front of him, the same one who had defeated him a year ago without even breaking a sweat. What is he doing here? The haired teenager's mind was in turmoil. If Hinata had set his sights on defeating him, he'd set his sights on defeating the boy across the net, waving his hand in his direction in a completely casual nod, as if they were lifelong friends. And he had him on the other team. How was he going to get Tanaka and Hinata past the ace across the court? How would he navigate his moves? He didn't know the skills of Tsukushima and Yamaguchi, but he knew exactly the level of the blonde with scars on his cheeks, who was grinning at him like a fox. He was the very definition of an ace. A well-rounded player with the skills and all-around physique that gave him a huge range of possibilities. I think Kageyama has broken down. Hinata had been poking Kageyama's cheek for a while now, trying to get his attention, but the boy had even dropped the ball from his hand and kept his eyes fixed on Naruto the entire time, generating even more intrigue and interest for his teammates. After a few minutes, the scream came out of his mouth. What are you doing here? A sense of deja vu crept into both Kageyama and Hinata's minds. A week ago, they had recreated that same scene, and now the brunette was reenacting it with a blue-eyed blonde, though the latter laughed at his new teammate's bewilderment. We haven't seen each other for a year, Kageyama. Who is he, Kageyama? Do you know him? Hinata's questions were completely valid for all the team members, since except for Sugawara and Daichi, none of them had seen him at any of the practices or interacted with him at any time, but Kageyama seemed to know him, and the captain and the Karasuno point guard were not surprised by the presence of a stranger. Ah, my fault. The application for your new partner arrived yesterday, who will be playing against you, as Kageyama has discovered. Daichi called attention to themselves. This is Uzumaki Naruto, from Konoha High School, who recently joined Karasuno and has applied to join the team. I thought it would be fair for him to be teamed up with Tsukushima and Yamaguchi. Originally, I was going to be the one to take his place, but I'm looking forward to this. A pleasure. The blonde bowed to the veterans and the rest of his companions. I hope we get along. But that doesn't explain why Kageyama knows him, Hinata chimed in, frowning. Have they been teammates or something? Because Kageyama is giving him a look that could be 2 daggers. And it's creepy. Kageyama reacted to Hinata's last words. Who do you say is scary, shorty? I'm not a shorty. Naruto laughed amusedly at the interaction between the two teenagers, finding it enlightening. Just by watching the two boys, the blonde discovered the chemistry that good duos had in any sport. Different personalities attracted each other, and this was a good example, especially when you add that they both had some interests in common, as seemed to be the case from the looks of both of them. They are very intense. Tsukushima didn't share the same view as the Uzumaki. For him, who was going at a quarter of the speed or less, the fact that they were putting so much effort into simple practice was very annoying. It gave him a headache and put him in a bad mood. Oh. Well, Kageyama and I have a history. The teenager's eyes narrowed, and his foxy grin came to life in just a few seconds. A romantic one, of course. That. No way. Kageyama pointed an accusing finger at Naruto while holding Hinata with his other hand. Don't come with that shit, idiot. Haha, you can't even be teased yet, huh? The blonde shrugged and reduced his smile to a much calmer one, while frustration remained on his teammate's face. It's a shame you don't want me as a partner. But you're an idiot. Kageyama and I met at a tournament last year, I think the same one you were in, Hinata. The Uzumaki's attention shifted to the shortest player on the team, who stared back. I was the one who destroyed his team and beat him and completely brought down his house of cards. They were direct words that displayed a startling calm. Naruto had mentioned what had happened with Kageyama a year ago, as if it had been nothing, as if it were just a casual get-together or an argument between two good friends. But anyone could see Kageyama's dark eyes moving over the blonde like two daggers about to be thrown. So, you put an end to the king. Following his own example, Tsukishima tried to rub salt in the wound, drawing Naruto's attention to the nearly 6'6" boy on the team. He had to admit that the boy was indeed tall and would be terrifying to fight in a match, but he had faced other boys just as tall, some of whom were 6 feet tall or maybe a little taller. And he outclassed them all. You can call it an ending, yes, she nodded, smiling at Kageyama, who pressed his lips together. I guess my friend's words and karma mizo made me end up here, with you, Kageyama Tobio. She reached out to her partner, who looked at her with slightly wider eyes. I hope to receive your passes if you make it through this challenge. Because I'm not going to hold back just to give you the chance. Those words were sincere. He wasn't going to hold back against Kageyama or anyone else. Just as he had done from a young age, learning the roles, strengths and weaknesses of each position, Naruto was going to follow the same path in this practice and all the others. Holding back wasn't something he usually did unless asked to. And even then, he usually ended up spiraling out of control due to the attempted manipulation. He was a beast who preferred to be free than bound by chains. I don't want you to hold back. Kageyama accepted Naruto's hand and shook it tightly, making the blonde one of the few people he had accepted and acknowledged in his life. I want to beat you, show you that I'm not like last time. I'm not going to lose to you, Uzumaki. Naruto's smile widened as the energetic voice hit him. It was exactly what he wanted, what Ino had warned him about. Kageyama Tobio was in the process of change, he could see it, and he wanted to be a part of the results, even if it meant being partners, something neither he nor Sasuke had ever expected. Hey. Jumping up and down, Hinata drew the boy's attention to himself. Keep me in mind too. I'm going to be the leader of Karasuno. Tsukishima laughed. Are you going with that, tadpole? I'm not a tadpole, you repulsive guy. Naruto's eyes scanned Hinata's body and his mind snapped to life in just a few seconds. He remembered the boy. He'd been the only one to follow Kageyama's moves a year ago. He was an inexperienced spiker, greener than the grass itself, with many weaknesses and deficiencies that needed to be filled. But if the boy was trained well, Naruto had no doubt he could become an excellent spiker with an incredible game. At least, in his opinion, since he dismissed the height factor as a real issue. Sometimes, being small and agile was the best way to play. And as long as the player could jump to create a gap, he could keep playing. Of course I'll keep you in mind. Those words made Hinata put Tsukishima aside. Hinata Shoyo, right. I saw your match against Kageyama's team. I saw how you moved and followed Kageyama's incredible movements or a back pass from your teammate. Few players could generate a quick play, but you're on the list. I want to see what both of you are capable of in this practice match. The teenager looked over his shoulder. Captain. Daichi looked at him, along with the rest of the third years. Even if they lose, will you let Kageyama be the setter? Because I'm not going to hold back if it gets me fired up. One of the premises of that match was the defeat of Kageyama's team. If that happened, the boy wouldn't be able to play point guard and would play any other position he could fill with his innate talent. That's why Kageyama had worked hard and helped Hinata, even though there were other factors involved. But now Naruto was asking him to remove that factor, and Daichi only thought about it for a few seconds, nodding at the request. But I don't want you to hold anything back, Uzumaki. If I allow Kageyama to play setter even after his loss, it's because I saw Hinata and Kageyama's chemistry and because I saw that you play completely seriously, without restraint. Am I being clear enough? Crystalino, Captain, he twirled the ball in his hands and fixed his eyes on his rival team. I suppose it would be rude of me to start this. Do you mind, Tsukishima, Yamaguchi? After all, I'm going to give them the first serve. Although I assure you of victory. After the last word, he smiled. No, it doesn't matter, Tsukishima shook his head. Let the intense ones take it out. Otherwise, they could be a pain in the ass worse than a pimple. No problem for me either. If you say we'll win and that you've already defeated Kageyama, then give them the first serve. Naruto nodded and threw the ball directly towards his rival team, where it was caught by Tanaka, who looked at this with a frown marked by confusion and explosive rage, feeling that they were being looked down upon and was about to explode. But the Karasuno spiker stopped, feeling the pressure on his shoulders, and when he looked at the team of 3 first-year students, he saw a huge figure growing behind the Uzumaki. "We're screwed, right, Kami?" 3-on-3 practices were common among smaller volleyball teams and much more popular among teams that didn't have the reputation to train with other teams. The passing of 4 years and the decline led Karasuno to train that way and, at times, to beg for practice matches with other teams. However, Daichi saw the potential that year. They had Kageyama, a talented setter with enormous skill. They had Hinata, a diamond in the rough. And finally, they had a player too complete to waste. And in Tsukishima, they had someone who was truly a wall to defend. That year, Karasuno had some very promising future players who could thrive under pressure and become the shining stars of some matches. Daichi was pinning his hopes on that team, and victories could be seen before his eyes, but he still had to discover whether it was all his imagination or not, whether they could actually win anything more than just a few practice games. On the left side of the court were Tsukishima, Yamaguchi, and Naruto. On the right side were Hinata, Kageyama, and Tanaka, who was serving in that round. The 3-on-3 was about to begin, and the rest of the teammates' eyes were fixed on the rookies and Tanaka, waiting in anticipation to see what would happen. Would Kageyama and Hinata's team win, or would the rookie team? Would Uzumaki Naruto really be as good as Daichi saw him during the junior tournament? The captain brought the whistle to his lips and blew it. Let the game begin. Chapter 5. The sun streamed in through the small windows of the Karasuno gymnasium, providing the perfect lighting for the teenagers on the volleyball court. On the left side, Tsukishima was on the right and Yamaguchi on the left, with Naruto in the center and slightly behind his teammates, so he could be the best defender on the occasion. On the left side of the court, Kageyama was on the right, Hinata on the left, and Tanaka had copied the Uzumaki's position by being in the center and slightly behind, indicating that both he and Naruto were the ones serving, although this time it was Tanaka who was serving and who would do the initial serve, so if Naruto's team recovered the ball, it would be Tsukishima who would serve and they would rotate like in an official volleyball match. I don't know Tanaka or if he's a good server, but Kageyama is pretty good at serving, although slightly below the average high school level. And Hinata is still very green. He's a good spiker and has a great physicality, but that's as far as he goes. Naruto analyzed his opponents with the information he had. He knew Kageyama's skills because they had faced each other before, and he could tell Hinata's average level because he saw it in the match against Tobio's team. But he hadn't seen anyone from Karasuno play until now, and he didn't even know the level of his 2 teammates, although he could tell that Tsukishima was far above Yamaguchi's level. He could see it only in his eyes, his posture, and his body language. The 6'6" blonde's confidence was greater than that of the green-haired boy, who looked like he was about to be split by the wind. He let the air out of his lungs and bent his knees slightly when he saw Tanaka move his arm. His eyes moved, waited, followed the movement of the teenager's limb until he hit the ball and started the game, the ball sailing across the gymnasium ceiling in a perfect arc toward him. He had seen the trajectory even before Tanaka struck the ball. Tight. The word left his lips alone. He brought his arms together and dropped a little lower, receiving the ball without any problem, putting it in play for Yamaguchi to place it. Tsukishima was the spiker this time, sending the ball directly at Hinata, which was a plus because the blonde hit it harder to destabilize the orange-haired boy, causing the ball to hit his shoulder. Surprisingly, the ball was launched into the sky and Kageyama placed it with good precision. The only one who was able to hit it was Tanaka, who hit the ball hard and it went through Yamaguchi's arms. I've seen this before. Naruto moved in the direction of the ball, following only his instinct. He didn't need much more. He reached the spot and hit the ball back into play, making Tanaka purse his lips and look somewhat surprised to see that his shot hadn't resulted in a point. Even Tanaka's teammates, his own teammates, and the rest of the team were somewhat surprised to have seen him reach for the ball. But again, Tsukishima hit it with a soft hit and Hinata couldn't reach the ball, which was a point for them. It was their turn to rotate. They're pretty good at receiving, Yamaguchi's words made Naruto give a small smile. How did you see that ball? Tsukishima couldn't help me on defense, and you caught it like you knew it was there. I just got carried away, he murmured, massaging his neck. I've coached catches for a long time, as well as most of the basics of volleyball. You can consider me a complete player. I know every player's position, their strengths and weaknesses, because I've played every position before. I'm an all-rounder. There were no more words. Tsukishima served the ball with a direct serve, trying to score a point and surprise the opposing team. Unfortunately, Tanaka received the ball well and placed it so that Kageyama could set it up and have Hinata hit the ball, but he missed miserably and the boy hit his face. Oh, she formed an O with her mouth and laughed softly. They're not fully coordinated yet. There was a lot of chemistry between the 2 first-year teenagers, and that was something Naruto had noticed when he saw them walk through the door. They were a complete match, 2 sides that made up a whole. With Kageyama's perfect positioning and Hinata's physical prowess, they could pull off quick plays with overwhelming power. However, if Hinata was polished enough, he could be a finisher and an ace for any other team. Kageyama. Why don't you try pairing up with Hinata? Sugawara intervened in the two first years' discussion, drawing the dark-haired boys' attention to themselves. Several stages of the match had passed, and it was becoming increasingly clear that the two boys could do something good together. He's still too green to move where you're asking him to, Kageyama. He has the potential, but he needs time to achieve what you want. Use Hinata and take advantage of his abilities. Naruto watched as Kageyama's face twisted as he thought about his senior's words, his eyebrows knitting together and his frown creasing at what Sugawara had given him, and then he looked at Hinata. The setter had come up with a solution in his mind and shared it with the short first year, which meant they were going to try to put together quick attacks and move at a much higher intensity than they had a few points back. That means we've raised the bar. He let the air enter his body for several seconds before letting it out and renewing it with another immense breath. He hadn't broken into a sweat or felt tired, and his legs were functioning as normally as they should have. When Yamaguchi served on that occasion, he watched the movement of the ball and how Tanaka received it without any problem, serving it so that Kageyama could place it with a pass backwards towards Hinata, who had changed his movement, surprising Tsukishima, and he hit the ball, scoring a high kick that resonated throughout the four walls of the gym. That had been a quick move. He did it with his eyes closed and following his instinct. Where did this kid come from? Where was he in middle school or kindergarten for 3 years? Showing a predatory smile, Naruto had already analyzed Hinata and Kageyama's movements. After 3 points, he had absorbed the first-year boy's quick play into his mind and had adapted his body to it, as well as his eyes. He was ready to react to his opponent's quick plays, and he did so when Hinata moved for another. His body reacted. He let his instincts flood his mind and body and let all his years of experience act as he received the quick play with a 75% reception, feeling the ball hit his shoulders and fly upwards, which surprised everyone, especially Kageyama, and they couldn't react when Tsukishima spiked the ball, generating their 24th point, leaving the lead at 20-24. That stings. Are you okay? Naruto nodded fervently when Shimizu Kyoko, the club's beautiful manager, asked him about his condition after Hinata's swift and powerful shot hit the ball. Although it bounced, it hadn't been anything to worry about, and it had given him an idea of what to do to receive it with a perfect flawless reception. The first set was already his, though. It's my turn to serve. Naruto caught the ball Tsukishima threw him and took a deep breath. I hope you're ready, Kageyama. He tossed the ball toward the ceiling. He took a deep breath. He took a few steps and jumped, swinging his legs back and assuming the best possible stance for a perfect serve. He let his arm move swiftly and his hand hit the ball with all the power of his arm muscles and the ball traveled through the boys, leaving a stunned Kageyama as the ball hit the court, scoring the 25th point and leaving Tobio's team with 20 points and ending the first set. Naruto had to admit that Kageyama and Hinata were an exceptional duo, but only when they surprised their opponent. There were no plays that could surprise him anymore. The fast break had been suicidal for them. Once they used it so much, his body learned to counter it, adapting to the ball's movement and the reactions of both boys. Now his body was 100% ready to receive the ball on those plays, not 75% as it had been the last time. They could no longer catch him off guard unless they used more complex plays or played with timing, something that didn't seem possible given his lack of experience. 10. He caught a bottled Aichi threw to him and looked at it gratefully before taking a drink that refreshed his mind and body for a few seconds. Running in the mornings and afternoons had given him stamina comparable to Hinata's, although his increased time spent playing sports placed him above the first year. It was surprising to see a 15-year-old play in such good physical condition and keep up with someone like Kageyama or Tanaka, who had been playing volleyball for much longer than him. What do you think? I'm referring to Hinata and Kageyama's performance. It seems their chemistry is better than I expected. It's surprising how you can handle a fast attack without flinching. You seem to have given them a margin of 20 points, but you got the last point with a perfect serve that scored it. I've worked hard for it, much more than other kids my age, he admitted, looking at the hand he'd hit the ball with at the last moment. As for Hinata and Kageyama, they can build a powerful offense for Karasuno, but the receptions are the holes in this gruyere cheese, Captain. I don't think we can go very far no matter how good our offense is, both with Tanaka and the intense duo, as Tsukishima has called them. Even I on defense couldn't take everything although I could try. It's been a while since I've held a defensive position. What has usually been your position? I'd say spiker, the team's ace position. Though I suppose Karasuno will have its own ace, wherever they are. He took another swig from the bottle and looked toward Kageyama's team. Doesn't matter. Any position is fine with me, Captain. Even if it's middle blocker. I've played every position. His sapphire eyes sparkled with amusement. My father made me play every basic volleyball position for a year, so I could understand them all. I even took courses on specific defensive positions during some vacations. You could count on me at any position, and I'll cover it perfectly. He might have sounded like an egomaniac, and Naruto knew it. But he wasn't lying when he said his father had forced him to train in every position in volleyball. Ever since he entered elementary school and joined the youth team, his father had made it his mission to make him understand the importance and role of each position on the court, which had helped him develop his mastery of that position for some time. Some took him months and others a year to understand, but he did, and now he could consider himself a complete player who was capable of seeing the weaknesses of the players he faced. And if he added his own interest and competitiveness, there was no opponent who could be a true wall if his body allowed it. An example was Hinata and Kageyama's quick play. He had already dismantled it and understood Karasuno's game in just a few minutes of the match, leaving a 5-point margin on the scoreboard. If he was in a match, the chances of anyone surprising him were completely zero. Good, Daichi patted the Uzumaki on the back, giving him a radiant smile. If anyone had looked into his eyes, they would have seen two enormous stars form and replace the young teenager's eyes. I think this year is going to be much better than the previous ones, Naruto. With you and those two, I think we can take the nationals. Naruto chuckles softly. My goal is to completely take the nationals, Captain. I didn't come to Karasuno to waste my time at the high school. Even if we faced the best, my intention was always to make Karasuno a benchmark in volleyball. Is that why you came to Karasuno? 4 years ago, I saw a game where a boy of a similar height to Hinata played. The little giant. When he jumped, I swear I saw his arms were crow's wings. It was a golden age for this school, Captain, a time of greatness for the crows. He set the water bottle aside on the bench. He wiped his face with a wet towel and stretched out his arms with a smile. Hinata reminds me of that boy. I came to Karasuno because where a promising player shines is on the team they should be leading. It sounds self-centered and maybe a little wrong coming from a first year, but I think that in order to see myself as a truly valuable player, I have to have been able to win it all with the worst possible team, under the worst possible circumstances, and against all odds. That's how I believe the best players are made. And I want to be a great player with all of you, Captain. Chapter 6. The match between Hinata's team and Naruto's continued throughout the second set. In said set, the two first-year teenagers from the opposing team had tried to perfect the fast play, something that Kageyama had found comforting when Hinata could do it, even with his eyes closed, leaving all the work and trust placed on the figure of the setter, which had demonstrated the goodwill of the orange-haired teenager. Despite all the attempts of Kageyama and Hinata to break the streak, the second set fell in a score of 25-10 to Naruto's team, who had taken care to keep the fast play as inefficient as possible throughout the set, demonstrating that he had learned from the two boys' play. But the growth of Kageyama and Hinata during the 3 vs 3 had surprised the blonde greatly. As Kageyama's every pass became more precise and placed toward the spiker's hand, Hinata had begun to fine-tune his aim even with his eyes closed, scoring some pretty good points that made the difference in the first set, proving his worth to the team. However, the efforts of the intense duo, as Tsukishima had dubbed them, had managed to awaken the Uzumaki's own interest in improving, growing and learning Hinata's movement patterns, and following him with his eyes at all times, not missing a detail. Because of that, most of the quick attacks brought about by Kageyama and Hinata's work came to nothing, and increasingly perfect and defined receptions from the blue-eyed blonde, who smiled like a predator finding prey that wanted to bite. Naruto had recognized with that match that both first-year students were good, very good at working together, but they also had their own weaknesses. While they weren't very noticeable in Kageyama's case, Hinata needed to improve in all the basic aspects that define a volleyball player, starting with his receiving. The short student was a huge defensive gap, and any spiker could break his defense with a simple spike, which could make the difference in an official match, and something he told the team captain right after the match. Receptions. Do you want to put Hinata through receptions training? The volleyball boys had begun to pick up their gear and clean the gym after the 3-on-3, mopping up the players' sweat, which demonstrated the intensity of the practice. Even Tsukishima had ditched his hoodie, proving he was starting to warm up to the practice. Not just Hinata, he murmured, though not wanting to hurt the team too much. We all need intensive training and receiving. While Hinata is the weakest, I've noticed that Tanaka and Yamaguchi are far below what I expected, especially Tanaka. Though being a spiker, it's understandable. Though I don't want to sound rude either, Captain. Daichi blinked at those words and cupped his chin as he looked up at the gym ceiling, thinking. It was true that receiving was never his strong suit, but they'd had Nishinoya to make the difference on defense, being considered the protector god of Karasuno, though he'd never been told so. And now the best players they had were first stringers, and aside from Naruto, they were all very green when it came to receiving a shot directly, as demonstrated by Hinata and even Kageyama, when Naruto himself sent a shot directly into his chest, which destabilized him and made him lose control of the ball, giving the point to the opposing team. "No, don't worry," the captain nodded and dismissed any visible discomfort on the player's face with a smile. "Well, I have more experience in official matches. I think you're better than me in other aspects despite being a first year, Naruto. It's fine to have other points of view, and I agree about the receptions training. Although what exactly made you think that? I doubt you're telling me this because it simply came to mind. I've been thinking about Aoba Josei High School, where they have good throwers. I seem to remember Akawa being one of the team's best servers, and he has an overwhelming power that could break through our defense. If they break through our catches, I'm afraid the gap would be huge for us, even if we have the team's golden duo, captain." Akawa Toru was the captain of Aoba Josei and the team's main setter. As one of the best setters in high school, and as a member of one of the top 4 teams in the prefecture, Akawa was being touted as a professional player with massive untapped potential. And if Karasuno wanted to make it to the nationals, they would have to defeat Akawa's Aoba Josei and prove they were better than them, something that even Daichi currently viewed as a barrier. "Well, compared to them, our receptions are a bit mediocre," Daichi agreed with a rueful smile. "I suppose you've also considered other national level teams for your request, haven't you?" Naruto nodded, his mind turning to Ushijima Wakatashi's Shiratorizawa team, the best player in the entire prefecture and a renowned national player, despite being a third-year student. Ushiwaka, as he was colloquially known, had consistently outclassed Akawa, effectively taking away every chance he had at the national championship so far, and Naruto had no doubt that Ushiwaka would beat them at their current level, which was far below what a team associated with the national tournament would be like. If they wanted to win, they needed to increase their receptions and leave far fewer gaps. And besides, Sasuke will be on the team. And he'll probably be following the strict training at Shiratorizawa. The thought of his former teammate made him shudder slightly. He still remembered their argument a year ago and how they'd stopped talking after all that time, putting their brotherhood on hold. Was Sasuke still angry at him for rejecting a school like Shiratorizawa? What will he think when he sees him across the net? All the words he gave about his motive for joining Karasuno were largely true, they had also been a very secondary motive in his intention to join Karasuno, although the information should not have been something that mattered much to his teammates. "I've mainly been keeping in mind that we could still face Ushijima Wakatashi, the best spiker in the prefecture, and one of the players we'll be facing to secure a spot in the nationals," he admitted, looking directly at Daichi. Ushiwaka is a world-class player, having signed for the U19 team where he's made his debut and shown his full potential. "We'll be facing one or more players of that caliber, so I doubt our team can emerge unscathed from such clashes without the proper defense." He nodded, pleased with his own words. "I understand all the points you've raised, and I do, Naruto. But do you think that training is necessary? We haven't gelled as a team yet, and the cogs aren't properly locked into the machine. I don't know if I'm making myself clear." "I understand, Captain. I'll follow your orders given your greater experience, but I believe increased training in this area is necessary for all team members. I'm sorry if my contribution has." No, calm down, Naruto. I appreciate your point and I share it, but first I want to see what we can do in an official match together, including you. Do you mind if you can be a defensive pillar for us until we're well oiled?" Aichi had seen the difference in skill between them and the Uzumaki. While he himself had a strong point in his receptions after 3 years of playing and with all the experience under his belt, he wasn't at Naruto's level when it came to receiving the ball. During the 3 vs 3, the blonde had always shown he could get to the ideal spot to intercept a ball, receiving it with any part of his body, adapting to the Uzumaki's power and speed. They could also count on Nishinoya in the near future. But those two at the back, Daichi had no doubt they would have 2 enormous pillars of defense and, at the same time, a sword ready for a vicious thrust. I also have to consider Naruto's serve. It was strong and decisive against Hinata's team. At best, Naruto is an ace up our sleeve that we can unleash when necessary. The Karasuno captain had already made his own decision about his first-year teammate. Uzumaki Naruto was destined to be a defensive specialist during the early stages, although Daichi had already seen him as an ace, as an offensive specialist, which was known as the opposite position, a position that suited the boy like a glove. But that would make the first-year student unable to make any catches, and that was precisely what they should do. Have him take all the catches along with Nishinoya, which could make Naruto a second libero, if such a thing could exist. But at least for them, that was the current position for their teammate with the messy hair and the fox-like smile. I don't care much. I know the team is currently a sieve at receiving, something you haven't fully seen yet because we haven't played official matches. But if the lineup includes Tsukishima, Hinata, and Kageyama, we'll undoubtedly have a lot of holes. Their first baseman. Tsukishima is tall, a textbook middle blocker, so he won't have the agility of a libero. That's why the receptions will go against him, and with overwhelming power. They'll also go against Hinata, who's greener than the grass. That leaves us with two huge holes to fill. And while Kageyama is a prodigy, he's more of a setter than a receiver, so keeping him from being disabled is the key. Although if that happens and I'm on the field, I can be a competent setter. Why haven't you mentioned me or Tanaka? They're both veterans, so they already know each other very well. This is Karasuno's strongest formation right now, but not the most experienced, as you well know. Therefore, I know we'll play with this formation in the training matches we'll have before the interscholastic tournament. He had done his homework too well. Daichi had to admit that all of Naruto's information was completely true and they would play with that formation in the following training matches, although they would only have a few, not enough to form something like a real team. Despite that, when the captain looked at the golden-haired player, he saw determination shining in his sapphire eyes and knew he was willing to pull the team forward. Forgive me. Akita Itetsu was the teacher assigned to the Karasuno team, their advisor. He was a brown-haired man in his late 20s, wearing wire-framed glasses. His inexperience on the subject was evident, especially when one looked at the magazine the teacher carried in his pocket, which covered the basics of volleyball. Teacher? I'm sorry I couldn't be at the 3-on-3 match you organized, Daichi. The teacher looked at the team captain with an apologetic smile, which the teenager accepted with a nod. But I've managed this. We have a training match against Aoba Josai. The eyes of all the teenagers widened at the counselor's announcement, which was met with a few cheers from the team's players. Naruto looked at Daichi for a split second, and the captain nodded at the first-year student's unspoken thought. They were about to face, in a practice match, one of the 4 best teams in the prefecture, and even the national team. It was Shiratorizawa's most direct rival. But they have one request, though I don't think it's too big. They want Kageyama to be the setter for the entire match. I assume it's because some of their players went to Kitagawa Daiichi and want to analyze their teammate, see if there are any changes. They haven't given me much clarity. Naruto looked straight at Kageyama as Tanaka shouted. It seemed there was something else going on. Perhaps a senior wanting to see how his junior was doing, or was it pure resentment between senior and junior? If it was one of the two, Naruto didn't know, but he didn't care. They were going to have a practice match against Aoba Josai, and he was going to use it to learn from all the players on the opposing team, picking up their routines. He took a deep breath, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and looked at the Karasuno members talking amongst themselves. It was the first practice match before the interscholastic tournament and they were going to face Aoba. Clearly, everyone was excited. Let's see how good you are, Akawatoru. Chapter 7. The match against Aoba Josai was on Tuesday of that week, right after school. Having mentioned Kageyama in the application had inflamed the Karasuno players, as if they had completely changed their behavior and had become energetic powder kegs, like Hinata. The short Karasuno player hadn't been offended like Tanaka or Tsukishima, although the latter hadn't shown it. The young, short Karasuno player had shown interest in Akawatoru's team when he found out that the Daiichi players were playing there, which seemed like a strange coincidence that Kageyama had ended up on Karasuno. However, the interest and enthusiasm of one of the first-year players prevailed over the others. Uzumaki Naruto spent the entire Sunday glued to the computer monitor in his room, his headphones hanging from his neck and his face resting on his left hand while he used his right to guide the ramen noodles directly into his mouth. It was Monday night and he had continued studying Aoba Josai's game, though more specifically, he had devoted himself to watching Akawa. The boy with messy blonde hair learned everything about the third-year player. Apparently, Akawa had been Kageyama's senior during middle school, which seemed to have contributed to the relationship between the two students. They were both point guards, although Naruto quickly understood something after watching some high school videos. Akawatoru was jealous of his junior setter's ability to set up, of the talent he had for positioning the ball and putting together the best possible plays, knowing where the ball could be the most lethal. And there was the difference. Naruto stared at the second monitor, watching Kageyama play, while also watching Akawa on the center monitor. He leaned back in his seat and stared at the two setters with his hands behind his head. Kageyama Tobio was a setter capable of placing balls in the hands of his fellow spiker, but he lacked the experience and sociability of his senior, which was truly a stark difference. While Kageyama was the best setter in the first year, Akawa was the best in the third year and also knew how to take advantage of his ability and make the spikers on his team multiply their power and skill by 100%, something that young players like Kageyama couldn't achieve due to their lack of experience. And that, in an official match, would be a fatal mistake. On Tuesday, they would compete against Aoba Josai in a training match that would reveal the strengths and weaknesses of both teams. Naruto already knew Karasuno's weaknesses, but he didn't know Aoba Josai's. While he could understand and see the weaknesses of individuals, he hadn't seen the weaknesses of the team as a whole. However, he had already identified the weaknesses of some of the second and third year students. I suppose Hinata and Tsukishima's instability when receiving direct serves will be a pain when Ikawa takes Karasuno seriously when he serves to score. As a setter, Ikawa focused on analyzing opponents and creating the best plays and setups with his team, moving players like puppets and fitting them into the machine like cogs. He couldn't be excluded from the game due to his importance, as was the case with Kageyama. Therefore, the only way for him to score points was through two avenues. Feinting a pass to a teammate or using serve points, which were particularly powerful coming from Ikawa. Naruto had already identified the third-year student's strengths when he threw the second bowl of instant ramen into the trash can in his room and began to open the third. He had to admit the boy was really good. If someone like him had been in Konoha, they probably would have grown a lot more and understood a lot. At 100% huh? He moved his chopsticks around in the bowl, stirring the noodles and breaking up the egg. Even though he was watching Ikawa's plays, he couldn't truly see the power of his serves just by watching videos he'd pulled from the internet or obtained from his contacts. To understand Ikawa's level, he had to see it with his own eyes, to see his body react to it. It'll all come down to the receptions, I guess. Being a defensive player wasn't in his plans, just as being a decoy player to clear the way for Karasuno's spikers wasn't in Hinata's plans, the best position being someone like the orange-haired boy. But there was no place for them on the team unless they adapted to what the captain decided to do, replacing the coach. Although, as a player, he hoped they would soon have a coach to help them improve. Having only the school counselor and a third-year captain left many gaps in the learning process for students like them. What I wouldn't give for some good homemade ramen. Out of the corner of his eye, the young man glanced at his completely empty third bowl. While his eyes had been wandering around observing Aoba Josai's movements and moves during the previous season, he had finished his daily meal. Surprisingly, he wouldn't gain weight just by eating 3 bowls of ramen at night, as he would burn them off within 2 hours at the home gym. Today, Dad will also sleep in the office, huh? He shook his head and tossed a bowl into the wastebasket under his desk. He sat back and leaned against the chair. He let a moan of pleasure escape his mouth as he stretched his entire body and completely decompressed his spine, making it creak slightly. The Namikaze Uzumaki family was not in the best of times at the moment, and that was evident in the family home and in the loneliness that surrounded the young Uzumaki as he studied his opponents and spent his free time in front of the computer, watching all the volleyball matches possible, analyzing some of the best players in high school that he would have found interesting. His mother, Uzumaki Kushina, was diagnosed with cancer a couple of years earlier, a situation she couldn't seem to recover from despite countless treatments for the disease, which was a hard blow for the family. On the other hand, having abandoned his career as an athlete, Namikaze Minato now focused on the companies his parents left him. After learning of his wife's illness, the man's personality changed radically. Where once he had been a sports-loving father, now there was a man who despised the thing that had accompanied him for many years of his life. And he tried to pass that on to his son. Kushina and Minato had been legally separated for a year and a half and hadn't seen each other for exactly a year, ever since their last argument over Naruto's custody and his interest in becoming a professional volleyball player. Of course, Kushina prevailed over her ex-husband despite her illness, which had kept her bedridden for the last year, and her son under her ex-husband's care, which was hell for the young man. While Minato never said anything to him about volleyball, the man's eyes told him everything the boy needed to know, everything he thought about what he was doing. And it was frustrating for him. He massaged his neck and reached out to turn off the monitor. He'd been watching Ikawa's movements throughout the past day and learned a lot about the third-year student. Things that made him wonder. Could they beat a team ranked among the top 4 in the country? Aoba Josai didn't only count on Ikawa as a great player, and the blonde had already confirmed that when he watched those videos. Ikawa's right-hand man, Iwazumi Hajime, was a problem to be reckoned with. In general, all third-year students were a problem for them, regardless of which team they belonged to. But this time, Ikawa and Iwazumi were like two men. Well, one was the point guard, the other was Aoba Josai's ace, with his shots and points earned thanks to Ikawa's passes. I guess we just have to wait until tomorrow, huh? There's not much more I can do with just some videos off the internet. I need to see them play. I need to see them move in sync to understand their movements. Uzumaki Naruto was an all-rounder thanks to the teachings of his private teachers, who instilled in him the mindset of a player who wanted to learn everything about the sport he played, reducing his weaknesses to as few as possible, never leaving his established training for a moment. But there was one thing that made him stand out from his peers. He dedicated hours to watching volleyball matches, mentally preparing himself for the opponents he would face, understanding plays that could cost them victory. He not only analyzed the players who stood out, but also stared at those who didn't stand out in any particular way, those who went unnoticed by their opponents, because they were the ones one should be most wary of. The play of volleyball match, Naruto not only prepared his body, but his mind was bombarded with knowledge about the matches his rival had played, which is exactly what he did when he learned all of Aoba Josai's plays that Sunday at home, spending almost 24 hours watching all the matches in which Ikawa worked or any player they might come across in tomorrow's match, seeing their weaknesses. To stop Aoba, we're going to need good receivers capable of taking Ikawa's battering rams. But even I doubt he'd be stupid enough to start the game himself. He kept his eyes on the black computer screen. Even I would sit and watch the opponent play through the first set, learning everything about them. Is this Ikawa's strategy? Or are they just thinking about Kageyama's ego during middle school? He crossed his arms, looked up at the ceiling, and leaned back in his desk chair. If I were Ikawa, what would I do? What would I look for to defeat my opponents beyond their weaknesses? The team's morale was important. When morale dropped, victory could swing to one side of the court, giving the opposing team the win. And the odds of Ikawa going after Karasuno's morale were even higher, now that Naruto finally understood his opponent's mind. Ikawa Toru was going to destroy the crow's morale. I guess then, Ikawa, I'll have to take one of your serves. Chapter 8. Aoba Josai High School was also known as Seijo, one of the best in Miyagi Prefecture, perhaps second only to Shiratorizawa Academy, thanks to the prodigy that was the ace of the Shiratorizawa team. But Seijo's skills weren't to be underestimated. The team had finished senior year as one of the top 4 teams in the prefecture, able to keep up with the best in all of Miyagi, and that was when Ikawa Toru was in charge as the setter, able to make his teammates give 100%. Ikawa may have been the best known setter in the prefecture, but Seijo didn't only count on him to intimidate their opponents. Unlike their opponents in that training match, Karasuno was arriving as the wingless rivals the Fallen Crows. They had gone from being one of the best teams in the prefecture and the country to being just another run-of-the-mill team, one of those mid-table teams without making a real impact in tournaments. And 4 years had already passed since Karasuno's golden age, leaving the team as one that no one could take seriously. The Seijo player's eyes widened as the latest member of Karasuno entered the hall. The eyes of Kageyama's former teammates widened when they saw him. Average height, athletic build, messy golden hair, and a confident cheeky smile that some would have taken as a mockery of them. Such was the impression that Kendechi lost the ball during the warm-up, dropping it from his hands when his teammate passed it to him. The ball reached the Uzumaki's feet, who bent down and picked it up with one hand and returned it to the first-year boys with a smile, this time showing real shamelessness and mockery towards Kendechi and Kinimi, making both of them press their lips together when they felt that smile, seeing the boy who humiliated them in the tournament a year ago. That smile was wiped away by a punch from Sugawara. "You're smiling too much, Naruto." The golden-haired boy shrugged at the third-year point guard's words and unzipped his sports jacket. His tan-toned arms were fully visible to everyone. The Uzumaki was a physical prodigy, which only increased and was maintained through pure training, keeping him in the best condition the boy could achieve. "It's not my fault," he muttered, feeling a little scolded by his senior teammate. "They were crushed by me. Kitagawa Daiichi usually sends its boys to Seijo, so it's only fitting that they have guys I've defeated." Out of the corner of his eye, he glanced at his thin, dark-haired teammate, almost all of the ones I've beaten last year. It had been a surprise to Karasuno that the relationship between Kageyama and Naruto wasn't as strained as it initially seemed to be between the young Hinata and the setter. The 2 first-year students knew each other, and one beat the other, a cycle similar to that between Hinata and Kageyama, but there was no resentment from Kageyama's side or mockery from Uzumaki. Both seemed to respect each other for having played volleyball for so long. So, everyone has the lineup in mind. This time, they'd opted to have a team with mostly first-year students. Tsukishima, Kageyama, and Hinata would be in the front row, leaving Tanaka, Daichi, and Naruto in the back row. Tanaka would be on the left and Naruto on the right, with Daichi in the center. 2. The back racers and workout clothes appeared in just a few minutes. Naruto began stretching his arms, loosening his muscles and even his bones, hearing a few crunching sounds as he twisted his torso. It doesn't look like Ikawa is going to play. The Karasuno captain's words made Naruto frown. He had hoped that the school's official setter, Aoba Josai, would participate in the match. It would help him understand Ikawa's game and see how he moved. But if the third year wasn't going to play, then there would be no point in getting intense. That thought made Naruto slump his shoulders and take a relaxed stance as they settled in, taking small steps to reposition their shoes and get the soles to grip the court. "Are you relaxing?" "Oh. A little," the boy nodded at his captain's question. It was his turn to serve, being the right back, so the ball was in his hands. "Hinata's already too nervous, Captain. I have to be the life of the party." "Good serve, Naruto." Naruto nodded at Tanaka's shout and took a deep breath. He took a step back and extended his left arm with the ball in his palm. He had done this millions of times literally. He had served a million times, coming to understand how his own body worked when serving. He had understood how to make the best possible serve, and by getting to know his opponent, he learned where to place it most effectively. The whistle blew, and blue eyes stared straight at Iwazumi, Akawa's right-hand man, his best friend, and his most loyal companion. He lifted the ball with that thought. He took one step, then another and jumped like any expert serve taker would. He sent the ball powerfully straight towards Seijo's unofficial ace, Iwazumi, who tried to receive the shot, but his arms were shattered, and his catch split open upon impact, causing the third year to stumble backward, landing on his butt, the ball going wide, and scoring Karasuno's first point. The silence was broken by the referee's whistle. The spectators and players were amazed at the powerful serve, as Iwazumi fell to the Karasuno first-year player's powerful shot, something they thought only Ushiwaka could replicate without using his full strength. But even Ushiwaka wouldn't have knocked me down, because I'd have it in my mind. This is crazy. I didn't take it seriously and he knocked me down like I was a beginner. Iwazumi's mind was in turmoil, and his arms were shaking. That was pure power, with no technique beyond that used to execute a perfect serve that broke his reception, that nullified him as a player. What was the intention? To prevent him from touching the ball? Or to score that initial point, shattering his mental stability? He pressed his lips together and stood up, staring at the player with the number 14 on his chest and back. I had underestimated him. No. Hinata's eyes turned into stars as he looked at his teammate and classmate, almost as if the Uzumaki were God to him, perhaps with the same gaze that the blonde constantly looked at his ramen bowls. That was great, Uzumaki. The ball hit the ground, and a smile appeared on his lips. Oh. Thank you, Mr. Tanaka. He raised the ball again and fixed his eyes on Kanemi, who was diagonally across from him in the same position. I can do better. The hand hit the ball again. There was more power. It wasn't a pass or a shot meant to loosen the ball, but rather a shot to score a point, but it was headed straight for Kanemi Akira without impacting the other Seijo players, and the ball struck the first year's chest with force, sending the ball careening off and giving Karasuno the second point, with Kanemi lying flat on his back. Now Seijo's attention was fixed on the Uzumaki, who pointed directly at Iwazumi, showing him a smile that in another context could have been grim. I don't know where your captain is, Seijo Sr. But to underestimate Karasuno and ask us to only play this match for Kageyama-kun, well, it's going to cost you guys a lot. Because I'm going to score as many points as I want. There was arrogance in those words, but also an overwhelming confidence. The Karasuno boys then sensed their teammate's aura. He was trying to reassure them, being a pillar of strength that could be considered like another captain, something that made Hinata lose his temper. Naruto said it. It's a training match to see the team's weaknesses, to learn. I'm not alone. I have the rest of them to support me, and I shouldn't apologize until the match is over. I just have to do my best and not regret it. You sound great. And all because of Hinata. It's his second official match. I'm not going to let the kid throw up again, hahaha. Seijo was focused on Akawa, so their spikers only gave their full potential when the third year was on the court with them. It was an opportunity they had to seize. Undermining their opponent's mentality with perfect serves was a risky goal. But Naruto had been practicing serves for as long as he could remember. Serves and catches. From that point on, everything else was much easier. Let's go for the third one. Do. Not if I can help it, shit. Iwazumi braced himself. He bent his body slightly and put his strength into his legs. He looked at Karasuno's number 14 and pressed his lips together, sharpening the glare he was giving him. It was almost like playing against Akawa. Both boys seemed capable of hitting the best serves, but this boy was better at it, almost as if he was born to do it. Naruto kicked a third time, powerfully, into Seijo's half, and Iwazumi was waiting for him. He was about to move, but the ball spun slightly to the right. It was a floating serve that veered off course and landed in the center of Seijo's formation, leaving everyone's eyes wide open. Wait. That guy can do those throws. Another third year stared at the blonde intensely, feeling his shoulders sag. Did Karasuno have a serving expert? How did he go from a powerful serve to a floating one? Was he playing them? It's much better than that, Iwazumi murmured, taking a deep breath. It's undermining our morale. For some reason, he went after me and Kanemi, but only he knows why, and I can only guess. What are you talking about? Iwazumi looked at Karasuno's number 14 again with the ball. He was looking at him. He knows I'm second only to Akawa, and he knows Kanemi is a player who holds his own. For some reason, he's read us and understood our role in the match. The third shot would have been Kanemi's. He would have served to Akawa, then to me, then to Kanemi. He would have followed that order if he'd been with us, but since he wasn't, he went for me first. He's basically made it known that he knows of our existence, that he knows us and takes us into account, that we won't fool him. So, he's playing like it's an official match, like a wolf on his prey. Number 14 isn't showing his teeth and is biting us. That simple match for Aoba Josei had become complicated because of number 14. Naruto had become a predator for the Seijo boys and was showing himself to them as if he were a player with 40 years of experience in volleyball, as if he were a university student at a world-class level when he was only a first-year high school boy. Iwazumi's mind flashed to Ushiwaka. The ace of Shiratorizawa and the number 14 of Karasuno were similar, yet different figures. The blonde boy might not have been as serious and reserved as Ushiwaka, but they both had a powerful ball-striking ability that would disarm their opponents. But it was unheard of in a first year. Sorry. Iwazumi blinked. Had number 14 just hit the net and given them a point? Was it intentional, or was it actually a mistake on the blue-eyed boy's part? We have to seize this opportunity. We're going to come back and win, even if it's just a training match. Damn Ikawa. Where are you when you're needed? Chapter 9. Sweat trickled down the faces of the Seijo students as they watched the scoreboard of the first set of the match. 25-14, giving the victory to the visitors, Karasuno, better known as the Wingless Crows, the fallen rivals. Both Kageyama Tobio and Hinata Soyo's lightning-fast plays were a weapon that the Aoba Josei boys didn't count on. But that wasn't the factor that was causing them to lose ground. The boy with the number 14, Uzumaki Naruto, took control of the match as if they didn't matter. He started as a right back, taking the opening serve, scoring 3 points in a humiliating manner, or at least that's how Iwazumi felt. As a third year, he was being outplayed and humiliated by a first year from a team that hadn't made it to the nationals in 3 or 4 years. And he was putting the pressure on him. Both the Seijo coach and assistant coach looked at their players with incomprehensible looks. Despite it being a practice match to observe Kageyama, their plan had backfired. A virtually unknown player, known only for beating Daiichi, was using them like a puppeteer. He didn't just act as a defender. The positions of middle blocker, setter, and ace seemed to be made for the first year, as if they had been created for him, each one fitting him better than the last. Coach Irahata stared at the boys with a blank, uncomprehending stare before looking at the boy in number 14. He seemed to be being pressured by his teammate, the puny boy in number 5 who had demonstrated almost unbeatable speed, beating most of the blocks. Looking at the situation, Karasuno had the makings of a formidable foe in the interscholastic tournament. If they ironed out the flaws of the other first, second, and third-year students, the number 14 probably wouldn't have to carry the team in matches. But if they relied solely on the blonde boy, he'd grow weary. They had to put pressure. The girls' screams made the two coaches and the Seijo boys look toward the door, where a boy was walking toward them with his hands in his pockets. They weren't the only ones to notice the third-year boy's presence. Across the court, Naruto's blue eyes followed Ikawa Toru's every step as he approached his teammates. Therefore, Karasuno's number 14 didn't miss the twitch on the boy's lips when he saw the scoreboard and the huge gap between the two teams. "You're finally here." Hitting the captain's back, Iwazumi showed his stress by hitting his best friend, earning a groan from Ikawa at the blow from the Seijo ace. "But what's that for?" You wanted to analyze Kageyama, Ikawa, but the trick ended up being too expensive. Karasuno's number 14 is better than one might estimate from a first year. If I had to choose someone to compare him to, I'm afraid it would be your biggest rival to date. Ikawa's eyes widened slightly, though his expression quickly returned to normal. If Iwazumi was actually saying those words, it only meant that Karasuno's 14th was on par with Ushiwaka, his sworn enemy number 1, whom he was eager to destroy in the interscholastic tournament. However, that also sparked his interest in the blue-eyed boy. "Do you mean? No red? To what extent do you compare it to him?" Iwazumi looked slightly embarrassed. "He managed to knock me to the floor on my ass with an initial serve and did the same to Kinemi and then hit a jump serve that emulated a third-point right in the middle of the court between all of us where you should have been as the team setter." It had been like that, but Iwazumi knew he would have gone for Ikawa first since he was the team captain and then in the order indicated, leaving Kinemi after the third years, as if implying that he knew about all their qualities, as if he'd known them all his life. As if he'd watched them play throughout their entire junior careers. That doesn't have to be a bad thing, Ikawa looked directly at Naruto. He was talking to Kageyama calmly, as if nothing was happening, as if he hadn't set his own pace for the match to move it at will. Now we know his greatest weapon, his trump card. And knowing him will give us the best chance of beating him. Ikawa wasn't entirely convinced by his own words. He kept his eyes on the kid for a few seconds before turning his attention to the coach. It seemed like they weren't going to take him off yet and were going to try to pressure the number 14 and see how far he could go or how far he could push them. It was basically a complete study of his skills, his capabilities on the court. He wasn't a player they'd ever seen play before, just like the kid with the number 5, but in that practice match, both coaches weren't thinking about winning, but rather about gathering information. And that was something Akawa welcomed. He needed information, needed to know all the strengths and weaknesses of the kid who was taking advantage of them, as if he'd watched them play his whole life. He's watched our games. I don't know how far back, but he's watched them and knows our games. Akawa came to the conclusion so quickly it surprised him. Could he be wrong? Yes, he could be, but the only way a first year at Karasuno could understand their game was to have watched videos of them playing online. And this kid, number 14, seemed to have been doing just that before that match. How long had he been studying them? To what extent had he seen them grow as players? Doubts gnawed at Akawa as he sat on the bench, beginning the second set of that practice match. Observe, wait, analyze. As the team's captain and point guard, Akawa should know his opponents well. But within Karasuno, there were currently several players he didn't know. The first-year players, except for Kageyama Tobio. His junior might have changed a bit, but he could still see how he played, how he carried himself, and what plays he made. On the other hand, those 3 remaining first years were a complete mystery to him, and he couldn't see a pattern in their game or any characteristic that could help him devise a plan to deceive them. At least, not yet. His mind had already grasped the play of number 5, who was the one supporting Kageyama in his game. The blonde with glasses was a mystery, and the number 14 player was constantly looking at him with a strange gleam, as if waiting for him to score. Point. The score was 3-4 in favor of Seijo, and they had completed a full rotation. That last point fell to Karasuno, and the serve fell into the hands of the Ravens' number 14, Uzumaki Naruto, who was glancing slightly toward the opposing team's bench. Akawa had finally arrived, but he wasn't going to let the third-year kid gloat too much. Make a good serve, Naruto. Hi, Mr. Tanaka. Naruto had proven to be a key piece in Karasuno's offense and defense. He proved to be one of the best servers in Miyagi Prefecture, despite being only 15 years old and a freshman in high school. He was on a completely different level than his teammates, and he didn't seem to care. The boy seemed to pull the team along and slowly grow, or so Daichi felt. Not even in his wildest dreams did the captain expect them to get a player like the first year. He relaxed his shoulders and sent that feeling through the rest of his body. He reminded himself that he'd done this a million times, maybe a few thousand times more than a million, but he had the experience and the training. He placed his forehead against the ball and gulped in a breath that filled his lungs and calmed his mind. No, he wasn't nervous. Naruto lifted the ball and slammed it back to Iwazumi with a direct serve, something the boy seemed to have expected as he fell into catcher's pose, claiming the ball as his own. But something was different, something that went unnoticed by the rest, but not Iwazumi, who watched as the ball fell short, falling slowly, something that forced him to lunge forward. But it was too late. The ball fell at Iwazumi's feet as it hit the court, circling toward his sneakers. I didn't know you could have that much control over a serve, Daichi admitted, congratulating his partner. Naruto just curled his lip into a small, modest smile. Honestly, I didn't even think we could win a single set against Seijo, let alone by such a huge margin. For many, it seemed strange that a mid to lower table team was facing Seijo and winning by a huge margin. And it wasn't surprising. Karasuno had stopped being a gold team 4 years earlier when they lost the nationals and the team completely fell apart. Now, with just 1 player, or rather 3, the team seemed to have completely changed and looked too much like a prefectural powerhouse. Another point. The ball soared toward the roof of the arena. The player's legs moved by inertia, flexing, and his feet propelled the player in the same direction as the ball. Facing the Seijo side of the court, Naruto hit the ball with all the power of his arm, causing it to crack through the air, making a cracking sound as it traveled from one side of the court to the other and hitting Kanemi again, sending him rolling across the court. The ball landed on the Seijo side of the court, scoring a 5-4 in favor of Karasuno, who cheered their teammate for another good serve. Seijo's surprise was further compounded when Naruto pointed at Akawa again, ball in hand. His sapphire eyes glittered at the intrigued gaze of Aoba Josai's setter, but those blue eyes didn't flinch when another point fell for Karasuno and the Seijo libero was brought down. Naruto had defeated the libero, the opposing team's defensive expert. And he had dismantled the team's best players behind Akawa, or at least those he considered dangerous and worth considering for an official match. All that remained was to beat Seijo's starting setter, Akawa Toru, with a single serve. Toru looked into those blue eyes as the points continued. When Seijo finally reacted, the scoreboard read 15-5 in favor of Karasuno, points obtained with serves that disarmed the opposing team's players, with impeccable reception by Uzumaki, and super fast attacks by Karasuno by Kageyama and Hinata. Akawa, the coach's voice broke the third year's train of thought. Get warmed up. I want you to go out there. I want you to show that first year that Seijo is one of the best teams in the prefecture. Show him you're the best point guard. Do. Naruto vs Akawa. The third year might have wanted to investigate his former junior, but now things had taken a completely different turn. The two best players from both teams were finally going to face each other on the court. Chapter 10. Karasuno vs Aoba Josei. The Wingless Crows against one of the four best teams in Miyagi Prefecture. The result should have been obvious to everyone. Aoba Josei should have been winning the match by a huge margin, a setup. But this time, that wasn't the case. Surprising the Seijo students and those watching the practice match, Karasuno was a set ahead over the fourth best team in the prefecture, with a 10-point lead in the second set, putting Karasuno on a level above what was stipulated and what the Seijo boys themselves had expected. The emergence of another star player, and one who could track Kageyama's placements, was a bittersweet discovery for Seijo, to the point that it forced Okawa, the captain, to enter the second set when they were serving after scoring the next point, giving the third-year student the opportunity to finish and earn a service point. Okawa stood in the service box with the ball in his hand, his eyes fixed on the other side of the court. He was one of the best setters in the country and, as such, had gained impressive strength in his serves, making them much firmer and more effective in the court. He was becoming an expert on serves and was one of the few who could execute such a firm serve in high school, surpassed only by Ushiwaka. The student let the air leave his mouth. He tossed the ball up and took 2 strides, leaping toward the ball and swinging his arm to fire a direct serve. His lips twisted as the referee blew his whistle for the point, which he scored and recovered the ball. With a hint of mockery, he shifted his gaze toward the boy wearing number 14 and flashed his mocking smile. But the Karasuno player's blue eyes never blinked, nor did they show any sign of shock or fear, nor did he even seem surprised or disorganized like his teammates. He stood his ground and let his muscles relax as he raised a single finger. "Captain," the Uzumaki shouted, attracting the attention of his Karasuno teammates. "I'll take care of it." This might have offended third-year students at any other school. Daichi himself should have been bothered by the first year's statement, but he simply nodded and accepted the request. "It's yours, Naruto." Both Okawa and Seijo watched this interaction with some confusion. The captain shook his head and tossed the ball up again, leaping after 2 strides, hitting the ball like before. Karasuno's defense wasn't important. Their receptions were the worst Okawa had ever seen in his career, and he wasn't the only one with those powerful serves, but they were just testing Tobio. Those selfish thoughts turned upside down when the ball fell directly toward Naruto. The first year positioned himself, arms ready to receive it, and took Okawa's serve as if it had been any other player. He showed no hesitation, no fear. His blue eyes shone, and he unconsciously ran his tongue over his upper lip as if he had just tasted blood. This boy. Kageyama. That had been a perfectly firm and perfect catch. The ball passed over the top of the Karasuno side of the court, allowing Kageyama to place the ball perfectly, which is exactly what he did. Once his eyes caught the small number 5's movement, Kageyama placed the ball back and the ball exploded onto the ground as Hinata finished off that placement like so many others. Tamaya Yaya. Karasuno's golden duo showed that dissatisfied gleam in their eyes. The 2 first-year students wanted more, much more to keep scoring, to win, to stay on the court. Like 2 growing wolves, Hinata and Kageyama were hungry for more spikes and were willing to deliver them to their opponent. And it was terrifying. The cold sensation, like ice falling inside his shirt right on his spine, made Okawa shudder and open his eyes to stare at those 3 first-year students as if they were from another planet and not ordinary humans. Had Tom Thumb followed Kageyama's movements as if it were the most normal thing in the world. And number 14 received his serve as if he had received worse ones. Okawa was confused, puzzled, and annoyed by his junior's growth and the fact that his plans weren't working out. "I'll take care of the receiving," Naruto said, wiping the first drops of sweat with the back of his hand over Tanaka's cheers of victory. "He's no pushover, and he really hits the ball. Are you going to be able to hold him off for long?" The blonde sapphire eyes briefly glanced at his captain before flashing with amusement, and he nodded in acknowledgement to her words, giving his yes non-verbally. "Good, guys. This is going great. But don't let your concentration drop. Keep your mind on the game. Even though we're 10 points ahead, we're fighting against Seijo, one of the top 4 teams in Miyagi." Daichi was the team's pillar, the force of will that pushed the rest of the team forward when they lacked strength. But even Daichi himself spent time on the ground, now being lifted by the first years. And in his mind, he had created the perfect image for a victory at the Nationals. "These kids are pushing us. We must take advantage and show that we're not just wingless crows." The tension was palpable. Daichi served the ball directly to the opposing team's libero, causing him to purse his lips. The ball sailed over Okawa's head, and he positioned it perfectly for Iwazumi to smash it with all his might, sending the ball to an unprotected spot on the court. He took a deep breath. He let it out. He relaxed his leg muscles and moved according to his instincts, just as he had done 100 times before. He stretched out his arm as he lunged and punched the ball with just enough force to keep it from going over the net or falling out of bounds. Tight. Tanaka moved in front of Naruto's pass and prepared to place the ball with his reception. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Kageyama, who was staring at him. Without knowing why, when he received the ball, he sent it into his junior's hands with a feeling of satisfaction, as if he were about to do something amazing, which is what he did. Kageyama performed a fake instead of a powerful spike and went through the Seijo blockers as if they were just supporting actors. You don't have to be just a setter, Kageyama. Even someone like you should know that all that matters is scoring. When no one can hit it, the spiker doesn't need to be powerful, just smart enough to fool the blockers. Kageyama looked at the Uzumaki with his dark eyes. Dark blue against sapphire blue and bright. Both shades stared at each other for a moment and then the connection was completely cut off, their owners turning back to look at the opposing team that was waiting for them. They still had possession of the ball, and once again Daichi served to continue the match, and that unpleasant situation for Seijo, who couldn't believe they were currently losing to a very low-level team like Karasuno. This must be a nightmare. Yes, that's it. The Kawa groaned internally as he lined up to receive. It was hard to imagine a team below his own level pressuring them in a practice match, especially when said team wasn't on par with the best in the prefecture. To Akawa's annoyance, the three Karasuno first years were the stars of the practice match and were bullying them. Calm down, Tantawa, his right eyebrow twitched at Iwazumi's voice, who was looking at him over his shoulder. This is just for practice, to learn from them. In an official match they'll have no chance. The Kawa nodded and relaxed his shoulders as his teammates' words reached his mind. He was learning everything he could from Kageyama and number 14. That match was pure information for him and he didn't need any more. By the time practice was over, they would have everything they needed to beat them in the inter-school tournament. But one detail eluded Akawa due to his ignorance. He wasn't the only one analyzing someone or the one who had already done so. The sapphire blue orbs hadn't left the Seijo point guard side at any point since he stepped onto the court, boring into him as if deciphering him, as if constantly learning from the opposing team's captain. And this was crucial for the match they would have at the interscholastic games if the two teams ever faced each other in any of the matches. Naruto had already learned everything he needed to know about the Seijo captain in the 5 minutes he'd been on the court. With a score at 20-12 for Karasuno, the Uzumaki had understood just how good a point guard Akawa was and how he functioned on the court, making him the key player for the opposing team. It's no surprise. He's the captain, the setter, and the key player for all the team's attackers and the rest of the players. He hasn't wasted a single position and the rest of his teammates trust him. If we want to beat Seijo in the interscholastic tournament, we just need to stop Akawa before he overworks himself. Naruto tossed the ball up. It was his turn to serve. He took 2 steps and jumped, sending his hand slamming into the ball with all the strength of his arm, making the ball more of a projectile than just a volleyball. And this one went straight to Akawa. The Seijo captain's eyes widened slightly when the ball hit him. The sheer force, so overwhelming and so similar to Ushiwaka's, disconcerted him and made him stumble, falling on his backside when he finally lost his footing, not understanding what had happened until the point was added. He's come for me. As he had done with Iwazumi and Kinimi before Akawa, Naruto made a statement with that direct serve into the arms of the Seijo point guard, declaring that he had him marked, that he knew everything about him, and that he was his prey. Chapter 11. A win in a practice match meant nothing to teams like Seijo, but for teams like Karasuno, it was a morale boost that boosted their spirits to new levels. After a few years without a win or such a spectacular result, beating Seijo was a turning point for all the players on the team, and you could see it in their eyes and faces as they tried to hide their joy at the victory, even though it was merely a practice match between the two schools. That overwhelming result wasn't something either team expected. Daichi had thought that with Kageyama, Hinata, and Naruto, they would achieve a completely exponential increase in level and growth, but he didn't expect the Uzumaki team's level to be above them and on par with teams like Seijo. Because he wasn't fooling himself. They had obtained those results thanks to Naruto's work as a receiver and his serves, which were added to the combined efforts of the other 2 first-year boys. And if Tsukishima hadn't been acting as a middle blocker who was too competent for a first year, which made it clear to their rivals the level of the first-year boys. Of course, these results were like a bucket of cold water for the Aoba Josei students. Akawa had hoped to undo the steady confident gaze of the number 14 boy with his serves, or at least make him tremble with his first when he scored a point. But the first-year boy remained steadfast and grounded, his mind on the match, and became one of the few who could receive his serves without flinching even a little. This was really frustrating when the boy beating him happened to be a first year, bringing back memories of when he was Kageyama's senior, making it all that much more annoying and frustrating. But their spirits renewed by that victory and their souls filled with pride, the Karasuno boys changed into their tracksuits and packed their sports uniforms in their bags. Since it was Tuesday afternoon, they couldn't play any more matches with the Seijo boys, who were looking at them with a certain resentment. At those looks, Naruto only twisted his lips and gave his best sweet and chilling smile, so the Seijo boys could only tear their eyes away from the teenager and focus on their own bags. "I suppose you've seen our weaknesses in his," the Karasuno captain murmured as he stood next to the blonde. Daichi was a third-year student, but he wasn't one to pass up the chance to perform better out of pride. The third-year students the previous 2 years at Karasuno hadn't been the best role models due to the dark times they'd gone through, but that hadn't discouraged him. Now he had the chance to build a better team to prepare his teammates for the upcoming matches. "I'm not fooling myself, Naruto. You're better than me, with a mind for this. You've trained for many years, probably harder than me and the other third-year students. You're one of the best on the team, even now." The boy looked at his captain with a strange gleam in his blue eyes, but in a second, a calm smile spread across his lips. Naruto had trained for years in volleyball, going through junior high school and high school. That made him at least 10 years of playing the sport, and his body and mind had already learned everything there was to know. Including the rules. "Receiving is going to be a huge weakness for us in both our defense and offense. I'd say Kawa has already learned all of our weaknesses, and our best defense against his serves, at least right now, is the two of us," he said calmly. "Hinata is too raw to be able to perform any better than he does now, and Kageyama's strong suit is being a setter, one of Miyagi's best at least. Although, being a first stringer, he still has a lot of growth ahead of him, and with the necessary tools, he'll become one of the best players in the world." Naruto had faith in Kageyama and Hinata. They were Karasuno's golden duo, and although they weren't well known yet, he had no doubt they'd be respected and feared by the other teams when they saw them play. He'd already seen the fear in Akawa's eyes when he'd first seen them play, in the way they moved, and in the way Hinata acted to finish a pass from Kageyama that should have been impossible for any other player, but which the boy had finished without too much difficulty or fear, even though he did it with his eyes closed. "If the boy manages to open his eyes, I have no doubt that this weapon will be enormous in our attack." Just as Kageyama had the enormous aura of a point guard, Hinata had the aura of a finisher. He wasn't Karasuno's ace or anything like that, but Naruto saw in the boy a potential that was too great, as if he were a wolf devouring everything in his path, devouring each of his teammates and rivals to grow above them, as if he were a simple newborn crow's chick that needed to grow at forced marches. There was potential, enthusiasm, and enormous willpower. But there was also a huge weakness that no one from Karasuno had taken into account, and which Naruto recognized by watching his two first-year teammates play. Both were so consumed with victory, with staying on the court, winning and winning. And that was a flaw too fatal for them to see, one they would only see when they lost a match, which was all too likely considering Hinata's inexperience and Kageyama's enormous pride. They're two opposing personalities who will eventually clash in a match. Kageyama is too focused on getting the ball to him, as it's the only tool they have, and he'll push it. But Hinata is someone who wants to grow and play for himself. Without a doubt, this team has a gaping hole that the captain hasn't seen because he's blind to the tremendous play of both of them. He sighed and stopped in his tracks, causing Daichi and Sugawara to stop and look at him, forcing the rest of the Karasuno boys to stop. The boys' blue eyes briefly focused on Akawa, who was waiting for them at the exit, but soon moved to Hinata and, briefly, glanced at Kageyama. "Captain," the voice came out firmly, giving him an unpleasant reminder of his own father's voice. "We're going to lose in the interscholastic competition." These were words no one had expected, much less from the player who had helped them beat Seijo in that practice match. Naruto knew he could handle any team, no matter how good they were, but he couldn't become the player who carried the team on his back, the pack mule for his teammates. He stared at them for the next few seconds and pressed his lips together. "Naruto. I want to run some tests so you can see what I mean, Captain. This week I can schedule a practice match with my old team. Please let me do it." Surprising his classmates, Naruto bowed somewhat stiffly, directing it only toward Daichi, all under the questioning gaze of the assistant coach, who looked at this with some doubt. The man knew little about volleyball, so he couldn't understand all of Naruto's words, and because he seemed too sure of them. Was a boy who had won against Seijo really now marking them as losers? That was inconceivable when they saw him play like a professional player. But the boys could see that Naruto was serious, that he was saying it with all the intention that his own eyes reflected. Daichi sighed at the boy's nod and looked at Sugawara. The third-year setter nodded, indicating that he should accept the Uzumaki's plan. When had Naruto ever been wrong about volleyball? "I understand that if you're mentioning that, it's because you observed something while we were playing. I think a practice match against another team wouldn't hurt us before the interscholastic games, especially as training camp time approaches." He allowed himself a small smile. The word training camp seemed to cheer Hinata up enough to turn him into a nervous wreck. "Good. Then, on Saturday, we could see exactly what you saw that made you make such a drastic decision after a win over Seijo, although I can sort of see why. It seems the first years are getting in the way, Ikawa mentioned, drawing Karasuno's attention. Though, of course, those receptions of yours are terrible. If it weren't for the mustachioed boy and your captain, I suppose victory wouldn't have been in your hands. And I'm not the only one on Seijo with the ability to throw serves like that. It was an all too obvious warning for the Karasuno teenagers. Ikawa was advising them about one of their weaknesses. Receiving. Only those with enough time in volleyball could see the importance of receiving and how difficult it became as they progressed. Sparks flew when the third year and Kageyama's eyes met. This caused Ikawa's face to turn mocking, showing a cynical, mocking, and amused smile at the first-year point guard's sharp eyes, as if he found his former junior's gaze amusing. "Tobio," he said, making it clear those words were only for him. "I'm really looking forward to the inter-school match. I'm sure we'll run into each other if that mustachioed kid keeps working so well." He gave the Uzumaki a mocking look. "And I'm going to crush you to prove that I'm the better setter of the two of us. I'm going to crush you, Tobio. Your senior is going to show you what volleyball is really like." Chapter 12. A strong team is only as strong as its weakest link can make it, and Karasuno High School, in Naruto's eyes, had one of its weakest players due to his inexperience. Hinata Shoyo, a young man who stood less than 5 feet tall, with astonishing physical potential and capable of following Kageyama's passes with his own reflexes. He might have sounded like a mean person, a bit self-centered, but Naruto saw through Shoyo's every move during the 3-on-3 match and the practice match against Aoba Josai. The boy was greener than the grass and was currently the weakest link on the entire team, despite his interest and his guts to overcome failures. Nevertheless, Naruto admired the boy for it. He demonstrated a fortitude and mental strength, which translated into a strong will that few players his age possessed, even many adults. However, he couldn't get his hopes up. They hadn't lost a single match yet. Shoyo hadn't felt the bitter taste of having missed a last-second touchdown, with the entire success depending on his action. Naruto wanted to see how the boy would perform at that point, as would the rest of the team as a whole. But Karasuno couldn't worry only about Shoyo, and Naruto knew that both Sugawara and Daichi knew of his intentions. That's why he'd been waiting in the park, cell phone in hand, for his former teammates to reappear if they ever did. He wasn't sure they would. They all went their separate ways, to different schools. Why meet again for a simple practice match with a mediocre team? But all his worries disappeared when he saw them approaching. His lips twisted when he saw Kiba, Rock Lee, Choji, Shikamaru and Kiba again, but he frowned at Sasuke's absence, although he wasn't surprised. The Uchiha had gotten into one of the best high schools in the prefecture, maybe even the country, and he couldn't just keep him for a game against a team that could be a potential rival, although he doubted that Shiratorizawa would see Karasuno as a possible threat to their position at the top. Naruto shook each of his friends' hands, accepting the snowy limb of the eldest Hyuga, who had replaced Sasuke for that match, and seemed to have accepted him. He had doubted that Neji would agree to play with him, given that he was a year older, but he was relieved that he did. "What are you dragging us into?" It was Shikamaru who asked that question. Staring with boredom-clouded eyes, the Nara kept his gaze on the messy-haired teenager. Today, Saturday, was a perfect day to relax and watch the clouds from the roof of his house, but he'd scrapped those plans for a training match against a team that always finished last. Although, he suspected that might soon change. "I want to find out some things with my teammates," said the Uzumaki, looking at all his friends. "I want to show my teammates my weaknesses and make them aware of what they would need to improve to win the interscholastic championship if they want to do it with all their heart." "Are you getting sentimental on me, Blondie?" Kiba sneered, crossing his arms. The Inyazuka's eyes flashed wildly, like a real dog's. "Or do you want to sink your fangs into your own companions?" "I don't usually use words referring to dogs, you mangy mutt," the blonde declared, showing the implicit mockery in his words. "That's what you're here for. I take it then, that you've seen something in their skills that you want them to discover or solve before the competition, is that correct?" "Yeah," he looked at the Nara, smiling. "These guys' receptions really suck." Receptions were a fundamental part of any volleyball team's defense, and that didn't exempt the members of Karasuno. While the captain and Naruto could be a strong defensive unit, they couldn't be relied upon, and the Uzumaki knew this better than anyone. They were a drain on balls because of it. Even with the support of the team's former ace and the libero, Naruto highly doubted they could build a good defense, especially if they relied on the first years. He was a special case, trained from a young age in every position, so that, as a whole, he could stand out from his teammates. But people like Shoyo didn't have that experience or training, so overcoming him on offense was actually quite simple if you knew where to throw the ball. And Naruto was an expert at throwing serves to a player's weak spot, as he demonstrated in the match against Aoba Josai, disarming the most important players behind Ikawa, placing the target they were meant to carry. It wouldn't be any different in the practice match with his Karasuno teammates. He already knew them, knew their patterns and weaknesses, and he was going to exploit them like a disrespectful bastard. That's going to be too much work. Shikamaru scratched his head deliberately and let out a loud yawn that almost seemed to make the place shake. Today was a good day for seeing clouds, and he couldn't take advantage of it for that delightful activity as he had planned, finding himself dragged into that place. If what you want is for me to see the path they have to travel, please don't let it be with a beating on the track, Naruto. You always get intense when it comes to these matters. That's not true. Shall I remind you what you did when the coach was absent one day and you took over? I think Chaoji's vomit is still there and they haven't been able to remove it permanently. Hey. Why are you bringing me in? You were the one who vomited. Oh, that's right. But that in mind, I have an option for you given the end of this practice. He turned to the blonde, his black eyes staring directly at him. Naruto felt a chill run down his spine and how Shikamaru wouldn't back down from any objection he brought up, no matter how justified. He understood, with just that look, that whatever he was going to propose, there wouldn't be a counteroffer he could make, no matter how much he wanted to. If you want us to play this practice match to show Karasuno its weaknesses, you're going to have to play setter, whether you like it or not. We both know you can play any position, and you do it just as well as being an ace for the team or an immovable defender who takes the opponent's serves. If you want us to play, Niji will take your place, and you will be the setter for this team. Even if you start crying like you do when we're eating your ramen, this will be the way it is, and you won't be able to change it. It's the best offer I can give you, and the only one I could think of to avoid hurting your colleague's pride. Does that seem like a good offer to you, or will we have to wait for you to accept it? I accept it. Naruto's eyes flashed with confidence, becoming as hard as two pieces of iron. Shikamaru was tempted to back down when he saw those eyes fixed on him, like two daggers ready to slice through his body. When his friend wanted to, he could transform into a serious cold person who frightened anyone around him, even them. This version of his teammate was the one that appeared during intense matches or when there was a proud and self-important player on the court who needed to face the reality of the world and step down from his pedestal. This was what his teammate was like when he stopped playing, when he became a serious, dedicated player with his focus solely on the game. Good, he nodded, letting out a sigh of relief that was inaudible to the others. Fighting with Naruto over who got the right positions could be exhausting for anyone and a huge waste of time. Shikamaru was sure that Karasuno mattered to him, that he'd found friends there, because if not, he wouldn't have given up the ace position so quickly as he had. Of course, I'll become the interim captain. I think it's only fair since you got me out of bed so early on a Saturday. Hey. It's a price to pay for your audacity, Naruto, and I won't give up my right to order you around just because you feel like it. You can take it, in which case we'll play or decline, and you'll have to play the practice match alone. Since when did you become such a blackmailer, my friend? Since he's been with Tamari. Hiba. Don't yell at me, Shikamaru, the boy growled, inserting one of his fingers into his ear and cleaning it of wax. It's true that since you started dating that second-year girl, you've been much more forward. Has she really put you in a bad mood? Stop, idiot. Haha. Let's put this idiotic conversation aside, the Nara growled, pushing Kiba aside, who was still laughing. The rest of the boys had also started laughing, albeit secretly, including Naruto. If you want me to help you, stop laughing. Okay. I'll stop laughing. Shikamaru nodded, letting out a low snort at the remaining laughter. Iba hadn't stopped, and Chaoji was still laughing heartily, despite the annoyed looks he was receiving for it. As the last chuckles died in the teens' throats, they returned their attention to what they were doing. They all formed a small circle of 6 people around a specific spot. There was no table, chart or notepad to keep track of the moves, not even a drawn sheet. They were bare-handed and wouldn't lower their voices, but that way everyone could see each other's faces. Karasuno's most powerful weapon right now is the quick attack of the first years, Shoyo and Tobio. The truth is, Shoyo's younger self has enormous physical power, which needs to be refined to reach his full potential. As for Tobio's setter ability, it's something that appears in a player every decade or so. If he's really good, he could be the setter of the century, though there are many he needs to surpass. But that comparison, I understand you see potential above Akawa or other similar players, right? You don't usually make mistakes when analyzing a player, and if Kageyama is that good, he could be the cornerstone of Karasuno's offense. They're already Karasuno's offense, he pointed out, emphasizing the plural. Kageyama and Shoyo were the best first-year offensive players currently, especially within Karasuno. Perhaps the team's ace might still be ahead in terms of experience, but Shoyo was a natural spiker, although he was too green and lacked the spiker's strategies in his head. Hinata and Kageyama. They're the future of Karasuno, the guys I want us to crush properly so they understand their own weaknesses, which are many. If pressed, Kageyama would probably relapse into his king attitude, and that would be detrimental, although given his lack of experience, it's normal. On the other hand, Hinata has physical potential, but he hasn't yet acquired the appropriate skills. He's like a fry, even much less than one if you ask me. So, we'll face a crow with a wounded wing. Wounded animals are the most dangerous, Shikamaru reasoned, looking at his friends. Naruto wants us to open our eyes to their mistakes, their weaknesses, and it's something we can do even with Naruto as our setter. I hope that won't really be a problem for practice. No, it isn't. I haven't been a setter in a while, Shika, but I can deal with it. I don't know if I'm as good as Kageyama, but I have better tricks up my sleeve than a first year with a huge ego to exploit. I repeat, you don't want to destroy them. And I'm not going to do that, but I will show them where they're going wrong and what barriers they need to overcome. As a Karasuno player, I plan to show them a level they need to reach before playing in the nationals, one they can't even touch with their fingertips. Chapter 13. The Karasuno High School gymnasium was packed with teenagers. The volleyball team and some guests were preparing the court for a practice match between Konoha High School students and the Karasuno boys volleyball team. A drill requested by one of the crows to show the boys their weaknesses and correct them. Of the teams entering the interscholastic tournament, Karasuno had the highest proportion of first-year players on the roster, playing as starters, which greatly diminished the team's quality, but not its potential. Kageyama, Hinata, and Tsukishima were players with enormous untapped potential, which could be achieved with proper training. While Kageyama and Tsukishima had already made their mark in lower-level competitions and official matches and were trained properly, Hinata hadn't had those privileges, and currently, only his physique mattered in his play. Receptions weren't important and his defense wasn't yet fully polished. All Hinata could do to help was follow Kageyama's passes as a setter and finish with a quick or super quick spike, surprising his opponents. But the players could adapt to those shots. The spiker or ace had to have the skills and mind of a predator, capable of executing a dunk in any manner they saw fit. A spiker's sole objective, in fact, was to spike and secure the point to continue their march toward victory. Hinata wanted to be an ace or a spiker, but he had no tools beyond his physique, and Karasuno didn't have the tools to be considered a team suitable for the nationals. They were a sprout in a forest full of trees. If Karasuno wanted to continue growing and earn official victories in competitions, they had to keep training and growing to surprise the teams in front of them. In the Interscholastic Championship, they faced Aoba Joshai, a team they defeated in a practice match. But in that match, the team's key player hadn't played until the final minutes, and when he did, he showed just how dangerous he was, highlighting Karasuno's shortcomings. Does that dwarf really hit the ball that hard? The opposing team in the practices with Karasuno was made up of 6 students from different schools, and on their team was one of Karasuno's first-year starting players, although on this occasion he would not be playing as a spiker or ace for his team, but rather he would take the setter position. Hinata has surprising power and physique for his size, Kiba. Kiba didn't seem surprised by his teammates' words and looked at the small Karasuno player as if he expected him to suddenly grow. From a distance and without a ball in play, the young Inyazuka couldn't understand his teammates' respect for someone who didn't look much taller than 5 feet. Don't judge him too much, Shikamaru's voice brought the Inyazuka out of his thoughts. He growled, almost like a dog, and finished putting his green vest on over his shirt. If Naruto says we have to be careful, then we will. The Konoha boys were forming a circle, waiting for the Nara's instructions. While the black-haired teen was thinking something, the boys had finished changing. Naruto will be the team setter, and Lee will take the spiker position. Niji and Kiba will be the defenders and Chaoji, and I will start in the back along with Lee. You want Niji, Kiba, and Naruto to be on the front lines, so they can be on par with Kageyama, Tsukishima, and Hinata. Fight fire with fire, right? Exactly, the Nara nodded at Chaoji's answer. The boy was eating from a bag of chips, letting some pieces fall to the floor. A match between Naruto and Kageyama and Hinata is what would give us the win. You and Chaoji, Lee, are good at receiving, and I have a good serve. We can hold our own while they use their strongest players up front and then respond with the firepower we have. What do you think, Naruto? The Uzumaki massaged the back of his neck as he felt the eyes of his companions on him, waiting for his approval. At this tentative spotlight placed upon him, Naruto sighed and drew himself up to his full height as he stretched. I see it perfectly. He moaned, feeling every bone and muscle fall into place. I think it's for the best. Taking care of Kageyama and Hinata's moves is what will give us victory. Of course, we must make them see their weaknesses. Receptions, right. You mentioned they were struggling defensively. And they're lacking an offense, Niji. They have Hinata's attacks along with Kageyama's, but what else? Karasuno is a growing team, like pieces fitting into a much more complex machine. You've seen the videos I sent you, right? Videos? I think I'm the only one who watched them, Naruto, Shikamaru admitted, interrupting Chaoji. Kiba, Chaoji, and Lee were probably busy. I was working out. Yosh. I was eating with my dad. I was busy with a woman. We don't need to know the indecent things that go through your mind, Niji murmured, stretching out his arms. You're like a dog. You do everything a dog does, but you're not even half as cute as one. Miss Hinata didn't stop until her father bought her one. Peace out, you two. Shikamaru pushed the two boys away, or rather, he pushed Kiba back, and before the Inyazuka could pounce, Naruto grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and threw him to the other side, placing him on his right. We all know about Kiba's tendency to chase after girls and then not even get a bite to eat. No need to rub it in, Niji. Only the truth comes out of my mouth. Are you a priest now? No. But it's the truth, isn't it? Naruto and Niji laughed lightly, and Kiba's screams only grew louder, causing Lee and Chaoji to join in the laughter, increasing Kiba's howls. Lendakyus-ai, Shikamaru muttered, shaking his head. I've hung around with some idiots. Naruto. Captain Daichi approached his junior teammates group, showing a grateful smile toward the Uzumaki's teammates. Are you ready? And, first of all, thank you for this practice match. We're ready, Captain, the blonde man nodded, smiling at the young man. Are you ready too? 6 against 6. Konoha's team. Kiba, Lee, Niji, Chaoji, Shikamaru, and Naruto were on the left side of the court in the formation Nara had suggested. Karasuno's team, on the other hand, had their strongest formation, with Kageyama as the setter, Tsukishima and Hinata as the middle blockers, Tanaka as one of the spikers, Daichi as the mainstay, and Narita as the other middle blocker for a three-man defense. Seeing this arrangement, Naruto allowed a small smile to appear. He was good as a spiker and receiver, something his teammates saw. Therefore, it seemed that Daichi had wanted to turn the team into a spear team with Hinata and Kageyama, and a shield team with Narita, Tsukishima, and Hinata, the latter thanks to his jumping power, which was far superior to average. They wanted to stop him. You've noticed, haven't you? Shikamaru's voice came from behind him, and Naruto just nodded, indicating that he had heard the small whisper. The Karasuno boys, his teammates, had been too obvious in their strategy to stop him and win. But this was a practice match, and he wasn't playing like a spiker. And if he wasn't playing like a spiker, he could be as cunning as a fox. They'll serve, he muttered, without looking at his teammates. Narita was going to be the first to serve, so he didn't have much information on the boy. I don't have any information on Narita, but he's usually a substitute. Because of that he shouldn't be that good at serving. The Uzumaki's deduction was correct. Narita was a substitute, and Naruto had played in the spot the boy was now occupying. He didn't seem to be as dedicated or fiery as Hinata and Kageyama, which probably didn't make him stand out. Therefore, when he served, it wasn't a surprise to Naruto when the ball landed perfectly on the serve, but without the malice or power of a seasoned server. Tight. Taoji's shout got Naruto to work. His eyes darted around his own half and then the opponent's, searching for open spaces. He was playing like a point guard and had to set up the play for his teammates. He couldn't be selfish. The Karasuno players had watched as their teammate Naruto jumped to set up the play, positioning his arms in a way that seemed ready to throw the ball upwards. But that was just a ploy. Naruto hit the ball softly, passing it over the net, catching Kageyama, Tsukishima and Hinata off guard, surprising them. I knew the idiot wouldn't be able to stop himself, the Nara admitted, laughing softly. Always with the spotlight on him. One point, Naruto looked over his shoulder, his usual foxy grin on. You wanted me to be the point guard, and I'll create the plays in my own eccentric way. Naruto is a setter. Hinata's eyes had turned into two twinkling stars. Awesome. However, despite Hinata's excited thought, a darker one was on Kageyama's mind as he looked at Naruto with slightly darkened eyes. Was the Uzumaki going to shine at all times? With that question, the first year decided to take the match seriously. He knew his partner's skill and experience, and he knew his capabilities better than Hinata or Daichi. Naruto had humiliated them a year ago. But he never expected the boy to have the skills of a setter. Naruto has good eyes, Little King Tsukishima's voice brought Kageyama out of his thoughts. Remember in 3-on-3? He was always observing everything. The court, the net, his teammates, and his opponents. I'd say he took note of the distance, even down to every inch of the court. He has the eyes of a setter. The ball went to Lee, who served for having taken the first point and caused a rotation, sending Kiba forward and making the rest move. Don't hold back, Lee. The Karasuno boys bent their knees, making their legs their fulcrums. Lee served, sending a floating serve that landed in the center of Karasuno, creating a barrier when Hinata tried to move, falling face first to the ground and causing the rest of the players to freeze. Still, even if they had moved, the point was guaranteed, right? Naruto's eyes flashed with intensity, knowing what might have happened. Floating serves ended at a certain point where the server wanted them to stop, and that usually caught a player off guard. He had used a few floating serves against Aoba and in practice matches, so his teammates would be familiar with them, but they were difficult to adapt to quickly. Another one. Rock Lee's vibrant shout seemed to intimidate the younger Karasuno players, like Yamaguchi and Hinata, the latter looking a little dejected. That was Karasuno's weak point, or one of them. The mentality of players as green as Hinata. The ball was back in Lee's hands, and the Karasuno players positioned themselves to receive the float serve, which was actually a normal serve that went straight to Tanaka, who received it with his chest, having been expecting a float serve. Shit. Sorry. Tight. Daichi hit the ball, sending it to Tsukishima, who sent it to the other side of the net with a shot that Lear himself met with a perfect reception, elevating the ball. Let's go. He took a deep breath after observing his teammates and opponents. When his mind was completely calm and he felt the ball brush his fingertips, Naruto pushed the ball. Probably people as inexperienced and green as Hinata had expected another feint. But the boy sent a nearly millimeter-perfect shot to his light-eyed teammate. Niji reacted at the same time Naruto hit the ball by sending it towards him with his back to him and jumped to receive the placement as if they had always played together. Tsukishima and Kageyama jumped, but the Hyuga saw the gap between the two taller boys and sent the ball through their arms, directly into the arms of Narita, who missed the ball and sent it out. Another point. The Karasuno boys saw their opponents. They had looked for a gap in the defense, and Niji's shot was perfect, literally passing through Kageyama and Tsukishima's arms and hitting Narita for the point. That boy. Kageyama had felt something when Niji looked at him and Tsukishima. It was as if the teenager had seen their souls, as if he had searched for every gap with his eyes alone and seen far beyond them. And it was eerie. They're a bunch of intense. Tsukishima groaned. He'd felt the impact of the ball, which had unsettled him on defense. Had the opponent intended exactly that when he sent the ball toward them? How did he do it? Did anyone exist with such precision to place the ball like that? It was eerie, terrifying that someone so young could do it. Not just a wide-eyed boy, Daichi shook his head, smiling broadly. Naruto can make almost millimetric placements, as if he knew his partner's tastes and placed the ball exactly where he wanted. I didn't expect him to hold back some things. Although maybe it's because he knows them better. You have points in favor of the Konoha team and 0 for the Karasuno High School team. Good. Another one. Naruto raised his arm and the Karasuno boys fell into place. Let's show them how we play in Konoha. Chapter 14. Sweat beaded on the foreheads of the Karasuno players, who were breathing more vigorously than expected. Everyone, including Captain Daichi, hadn't expected to wear themselves out this much in a practice match. But the Konoha boys were anything but lazy, as young Nara had given the impression. The 6 teenagers who had been in Konoha showed much more energy and drive than the Karasuno boys, even more so than the third and final year players. The first years were much more tired, feeling like their legs could barely take another leap, and Hinata nearly swallowed the net when he tried to connect with Kageyama's pass in one of their many quick plays, which was another resounding failure, although not due to any lack of coordination between the setter and the spiker. Hinata and Kageyama displayed good coordination, but they couldn't overcome Naruto's wall or Rock Lee's receptions, who proved capable of following Hinata's movements after a couple of errors, as if he had physically matched his opponent. From that moment on, Hinata couldn't continue scoring, and they disarmed Karasuno's spear. At the end of the first set, the Karasuno boys displayed immense happiness as they plopped down near or beside the bench, all of them letting out large gulps of air, trying to somehow catch their breath for the next set. Kageyama splashed some water on his head. Tsukishima vigorously wiped his glasses, feeling his eyes sting a little from the sweat and his hands tremble from hitting the ball. Hinata let Tanaka hand him a bottle of water, and the spiker himself wasted no time wiping his face with a wet towel, wiping away the remnants of sweat. Captain Daichi looked at his teammates with a small smile, a little happy that the boys, including Tsukishima, were taking this practice seriously because they were playing with a national level team. There were high school players who were at the level of being able to play in the nationals, and then there were those who were at the world level. Currently, among the students who played in the nationals, only one was known to be at the world level, with his place on the Japanese U20 volleyball team secured. That player was great, and a team full of world-class players would have destroyed a team like Karasuno, and Daichi knew that. Currently, Karasuno was barely ahead of a junior team, all because of the first-year players. But he had faith, a lot of faith, and he wasn't going to throw it away, as if he'd never had it before. You look a little thoughtful, Captain. Daichi raised his head and looked at Sugawara, handing him a bottle of water, giving him a calm smile. They were both third-year players, and soon they would no longer be playing with boys like Hinata, Kageyama, or Naruto. A match like that, although practical, was teaching them many things and filling them with hope that their desire to win a national championship could finally come to fruition and bring shine back to Karasuno. I was just thinking about how well our Kohai plays with the Konoha boys. Daichi's eyes shifted to Naruto, who was talking to Shikamaru while occasionally sipping from his water bottle. He's a completely different player. He's also playing a different position, Sugawara pointed out, sitting next to Daichi. He's playing like a setter and has managed to put his team ahead by taking the first set in his favor at 25-7, with plays as splendid as the spike from the light-eyed boy. In fact, that Niji managed to surprise Tsukishima and Kageyama by getting one of his spikes to go through their arms. And that Lee boy was able to keep up with Hinata's speed in just a couple of attempts, becoming a nuisance to our little Hinata. Naruto has guided his teammates to adapt to our weaknesses. Naruto knows all of our current moves and their weaknesses, as well as how his teammates play. And he's using all of that simply for this practice match, exposing every weakness of Karasuno, as if he were showing the scratches on a piece of iron. He's a great player, no doubt about it. Sugawara's eyes glittered slightly. I never expected him to be such an intense setter, to be able to place balls like that. Until now, Karasuno had seen a side of their teammate focused solely on serving, receiving, and spiking, things that all volleyball players should know before becoming an expert in one of the three. The one that had generated the most admiration for his teammates was Naruto's ability to receive Ikawa's serves, as well as his ability to recognize opposing players, as he did during the match against Aoba Josei, by going after the two most dangerous players on the court without the presence of Ikawa, who would surely always be in Naruto's sights, at all times, in every second of the match. But Naruto had already mentioned that he was an all-rounder, a player capable of playing any position and unafraid of being deployed as a mere blocker or receiver. Naruto was the kind of player every team desired. Completely versatile, capable of playing every position, of filling in for every teammate when needed. And he had proven it by playing the setter role as naturally as Kageyama or Sugawara, almost as if he had always been a setter and never played any other position. I think I know why he's been playing this game like a setter from the start. Daichi took another sip from his water bottle, breathing deeply to calm his muscles and mind. He's watching us all, looking for the weaknesses he needs to beat us or make us better. I'd say, on a soccer team, he'd be the perfect playmaker. And that's terrifying. Daichi admitted, with those words, that Naruto was way ahead of him and any other member of Karasuno. If this were a soccer team, Naruto would be the center of every play, the initiator of every counter-attack or attack, directing his teammates like a puppeteer moving puppets on thin strings. And with all that potential, he used it in volleyball. Hahaha. Daichi laughed heartily, patting his teammate and friend on the back. Admitting that a first year was better than them was harsh but necessary. As captain, Daichi knew that the mind was a very important factor in a player, one that had to be considered of real importance in matches. Sometimes a player's will and mind could determine victory or defeat in a match. Come on, Suga. We have to observe our Kohai and his teammates more closely. The two teams took to the court again, refreshed and ready for the second set. Hinata's eyes were filled with determination, while Kageyama's were focused on his blonde teammate on the other team, trying to analyze his movements, even if it was just walking onto the court, because the Uzumaki walked with overwhelming confidence, as if he were the king of the place, attracting all the attention. They're serving, the captain's voice brought Kageyama and Hinata back to reality, causing the first-year duo to see the wide-eyed man with the ball in his hand, ready to serve with all his power, but that sent the more powerful players to the back. Get ready. Niji Hyuga took a deep breath and sent the ball straight across the court, over the net, straight toward Tsukishima. The Karasuno player reacted in time, catching the ball with his shoulder and nearly falling backward, but he missed the point and was ruled out of the play. Tight. Kageyama responded by setting the ball and sending it forward to the spikers. Tanaka responded by finishing off his teammate's set, sending the ball into an egg on the court. It was met by an excited Lee, who received the ball by bending his legs in a slightly awkward manner, but sending it up the court. I'll put it on. Naruto responded to his teammate, reacting swiftly to the placement. Before Karasuno's eyes and without looking at his teammates, Naruto placed the ball as it fell, jumping slightly and using his fingertips. But he didn't throw it up or forward, but rather backward, without looking, his eyes fixed solely on the net to avoid hitting it. He had imitated Kageyama's placement. But Karasuno couldn't just stand by and watch. Reacting to Naruto's stance, Kiba responded with a powerful jump, not as much as Hinata's, but one that caught the defenders off guard as it soared above them. However, he didn't respond with a powerful spike because Karasuno's blockers were catching up to him. He outsmarted them. In a smooth manner, as if simply tapping the ball with his fingertips, Kiba sent a soft spike past the blockers in a smooth manner, almost as if the air was carrying the ball over the Karasuno players, but not far enough to go past the entire capo. After a few seconds, the ball began to fall, straight into the center of the crow's formation, into a gap where there seemed to be no one, until a figure reacted to the ball. It was surprising to see how Daichi responded, using his experience, and received the ball using the back of his hand, saving the point. That was great. Karasuno's players reacted by moving to their captain's save, allowing Narita to place the ball with a soft pass and Tanaka to finish, although not with the same power as before. They weren't able to react perfectly to Daichi's desperate defense and simply played with amateurish normality. Shikamaru received the ball and placed it for his setter. Naruto reacted to that pass and moved his eyes all over the rival court, calculating the best play to get the point. He took a deep breath and placed the ball, sending it directly towards Choji, who responded by spiking the ball with great power, with a straight shot right at the edge of the court, which caused Karasuno to barely respond, more confident that the ball was out of the field, and Hinata's reaction turned out to be too late and poorly executed, which caused the point to be recognized by the referee. Did that guy place the ball directly to go down the line or was it just luck? Tanaka's voice echoed through the gym, reaching the Konoha boys. Choji scratched his nose. It was completely executed with care. He replied, smiling now. I've had experience with straight finishes and extreme situations. 2 points to 0. The Karasuno boys looked at the Konoha boys with a certain admiration, especially among the first-year boys. All of the Konoha players, except for Niji, were first-year boys like them and were at a level far above them, as if they had played volleyball their entire lives, which could be true to a certain extent. Among the Konoha boys, Naruto was the only one who had played volleyball his entire life, while the others played almost casually, but enough to become experts in some things that could turn a match around. This isn't an official match, Shikamaru's voice drew the Karasuno boys' attention. Naruto asked us to test you, to show you your weaknesses and what you need to work on. And that's why we're going to use all our cards. So take this seriously and give it your all. Chapter 15. Sweat trickled down the faces of the 12 players on the court. Their breathing became labored as the ball once again hit the ground with a deafening force, and eventually, the boys fell flat on their butts as they struggled to get as much oxygen as possible to recover and get back on their feet. After 2 intense sets, the players were completely exhausted and their legs could barely keep them standing for a few more seconds, especially the younger ones. The result wasn't surprising for the Karasuno boys, who had been defeated in both sets, and the match ended in a crushing defeat, especially in the second set, where their receptions weren't the best and several weaknesses in their game were discovered. On the other hand, although the Konoha boys were still standing, they also seemed tired, panting, due to the intensity they had put into their plays to pressure the Karasuno boys and make them miss, revealing many of their weaknesses. And their receptions were the first weakness they showed, no matter how much the boys hadn't wanted to show that weakness. The Konoha players' serves were strong and intense enough to cause the Karasuno boys to start missing their receptions, receiving each spike as if they were kids who had just started playing, even Daichi himself. Daichi had been playing volleyball in high school for 3 years now. He had better reception than the first years and better stamina than both the first years and the second years. But his stamina and leg strength were surpassed by Konoha's players, first years who played better than them and could crush them in an official match. There was no longer any doubt as to why they were able to defeat Kageyama's former team in such a crushing fashion, even hurting Kageyama's own pride. And Naruto had demonstrated more experience than he had expected, which translated into his overwhelming plays. Despite being defeated by first-year boys, the Karasuno boys were not demotivated but saw in that match a way to learn and grow as players for future matches and tournaments, such as the Interscholastic, where they would face national-level teams like Aoba Josei, who had players of Ikawa's caliber, with much more experience and level than them, and with superior skill. However, Daichi had faith in the boys who had entered the team that year, as well as in the will they all had to reach and win the nationals for the first time in years. 3 years ago they were on the verge of victory, but they were defeated and misfortune arrived like an almost permanent illness, causing the best coach to leave and Karasuno to become known as the Wingless Crows. Karasuno's wings had now transformed into splendid first-year players. Hinata, Kageyama, Tsukishima, and Naruto. In the captain's eyes, these 4 boys were the backbone of the team, the ones who would help them grow as players and could lead them to the nationals. Daichi had no doubt about that, nor did his teammates. They still had to learn things, fit together like a machine, and evolve. But they would do that with matches, with losses, and with faith placed in the right people like Hinata and Kageyama, who were the spearhead, the crow's beak. In Daichi's eyes, Tsukishima was the iron wall that could reduce the points they would receive, and Naruto was the pillar on which they would have to stand to keep going, the central mast of the ship. For him, as the captain, Naruto was a prodigy of a leader, an undisputed next captain who could advance the team much more than he could himself, as much as he hated that. I guess you have to make way for the next one, even if you don't want to. Taking a deep breath, he finally stood up and accepted the water bottle and towel from Naruto, flashing that confident smile. He was like the sun. Always shining, always the center of attention, and there was no doubt in his mind that he would be the next leader of Karasuno. Thank you. You're welcome, Captain. Both boys looked at their respective teammates and friends. Hinata had approached Choji and Niji with that intense look he always had when he wanted something or something had caught his attention, which was clearly obvious. The two boys had performed spectacular spikes that even professionals would praise. Wasn't that interesting enough for a first year to want to learn? Hinata wanted to be the little giant, the ace of the new Karasuno, a position that only the trusted spiker occupied. And to be that spiker, he would have to do things like those Niji and Choji performed, or even the soft spike that was performed at one point in the match. Every spike counted, and boys with Hinata's lack of experience could learn them, especially with his physical power. What did you see? Daichi's question came out almost without thinking, in a direct manner, and shortly after putting down the bottle, when he already took a sip from it. Receptions are a crucial point in official matches, especially if they go long. Training the lower body, especially the legs, and the way you receive the ball are going to be crucial for us, especially with Hinata. The kid is even greener than the summer grass, but with untapped potential. And now that I mention Hinata, we have a problem with his duo with Kageyama. Problem? I've seen them in rapport. And they are. But Hinata is going to grow much faster than you expect. In his own way, he's a prodigy, not just a physical marvel. Although even subconsciously, our partner is capable of recreating certain plays that, if combined with his physique, could give us the victory. Naruto took a sip from his water bottle. That will cause friction with Kageyama's ego, as he's used to directing, and that will cause problems for other players. He doesn't place the ball the way the setter wants, but rather places it the way he thinks is best. And not only that. In Hinata's case, so much trust in Kageyama will break the duo up at some point when he opens his eyes and decides to make his decisions. Well, that's still a long way off, but we'll have to teach Hinata, and this will make Kageyama not want to pass to him. Our setter's ego will be a problem when Hinata wants to evolve and drag us behind him. Have you looked that far into the future? I've only observed. It's also obvious, like the fact that beating Aoba Josei in these conditions without the presence of experienced players would be like an ant lifting a piece of concrete. And personally, Captain, but we must look to the future and not the present. The interscholastic tournament isn't a national tournament and there's still the next tournament, the winter one I think. We should focus on the second tournament and use the interscholastic tournament as a test to improve. That doesn't mean they should know about it, just you and me, if you're okay with it. To grow, you have to play completely seriously. Daichi didn't respond immediately. In fact, he sipped from his bottle again as he considered his teammates' words. He had to admit he was right. Using Kageyama and Hinata as a raw spear. His first thought when he saw the two was that they would grow exponentially with them on the team, but now that Naruto mentioned the boys' problems. Are you planning something for us, Naruto? You look like a professional trainer. I'm a player with years of experience, Captain, and until we find a coach, I think there are exercises we can do to improve our physical condition and gain endurance. I think this team's physical potential is very high and we must tap into it, especially Hinata's. Endurance will be key in official matches, as will maintaining a well-organized mindset. Are you thinking about professional training? Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Guys like Ushijima follow strict professional training, as well as proper nutrition. I think we should see if we can implement some of those things here. You know the budget isn't going to come in, right? No one has faith in the volleyball team. Was I here 3 years ago? What do you mean? Naruto blinked and looked at his captain. Don't you know who I am? Naruto Uzumaki, right. Our teammate and schoolmate. My father is someone with money. Well, my family is someone with money, even without my father, although I don't go around giving that away because I prefer to be someone normal for all intents and purposes. And I know that coming to Karasuno isn't for rich kids, but my mother grew up in this prefecture, at her grandparents' house, and now I'm in this prefecture too, coming to this high school. The thing is, I could set up a fund for the volleyball team with my mother's support. I'm sure she'd be happy if I did that. Wait. That would be too much. Captain, I'm a guy who doesn't like money, who wants to be a professional volleyball player and little else. Naruto shrugged at Daichi's wide-eyed look. Donating money so we can win the nationals isn't even my maternal family's greatest feat. Or at least, according to great-grandmother Mito, they donated money to found some schools or something like that. I'd just be following my family's legacy by supporting Karasuno with more than just my presence on the field and giving them something we need that will help us. His words weren't mocking or a lie. The Uzumaki family had money, plenty of it for several generations, from businesses established throughout the Edo period onward that they continued to maintain, as well as others that were recently purchased by his maternal grandparents and that would be passed on to him as a gift upon coming of age. However, he wasn't interested in being a businessman, a surgeon, or any of the jobs his father currently considered suitable. He had the money, skills, and time to be a professional volleyball player, something Naruto was planning to pursue and his mother supported. And it was his duty to support his teammates so they could reach the nationals. Naruto. Don't worry, Captain. We're going straight to devour the teams at the nationals. Chapter 16. To be a competent and nationally renowned spiker, the player not only had to score points, the most important part of a match, but also had to know how to score them and what to do so effectively. This varied depending on the match, the situation, and the opposing players, as well as the skill of the spiker. Should he always hit powerful spikes? No, because these spikes could crash into an insurmountable wall, and it would be fruitless to force the wall to give way by hitting the ball. Should the spiker, then, devise plans to overcome the opposing defense? The setters sent the balls to the spikers, but it was the latter who had to choose how to score a point to lead the team to victory or bear the burden of not scoring the decisive point. The spiker needed to have the mentality to carry the weight of a defeat and the weapons to avoid falling to opponents and lead his team to victory. And these skills, in Naruto's eyes, were not currently in his first-year teammates' repertoire. Hinata possessed brutal physical power and a reaction speed that even some professionals would envy. But other than that, the boy had nothing remarkable about him, and without Kageyama's help, Hinata was nothing on the court, as he could only work with them by utilizing his quick spike, which could easily be broken up by players with the ability to adapt to his speed, thus leaving him without the opportunity to score. This had already been put to the test in Saturday's practice match, where the Konoha boys demonstrated the ineffectiveness of Hinata and Kageyama's quick spike, and, once it was taken down, the shorter boy could no longer play normally or score the points he wanted, which led him to a loop of frustration that made him increasingly unable to play well or react to his teammates' passes, becoming a dead weight. Mentality was important, and Hinata did not, at the moment, have the mentality of an ace or a national-level finisher. Though if I give him the right weapons. Clicking the mouse, the video of the match between Konoha and Karasuno stopped right at the point where Hinata was jumping to spike the ball again and be rejected by them again, and, if he remembered correctly, it would be Kiba who would block that shot with a perfect reception. Using Hinata as a decoy and a middle blocker is a mockery of our team, but very clever. I think if the teacher gets a coach, he'll definitely be the one to see that. Hinata can be a decoy, but he needs to have weapons so we don't lose matches, and he sinks into despair. Naruto stirred his chopsticks in the bowl and brought the noodles directly to his mouth. The dim light from the screen reflected off his face, the only light in his room, obscuring the mess. If he had the blinds open or the light on, you could see the clothes scattered on the floor and several containers of instant ramen tucked away in a garbage bag in a corner. If I give Hinata some tips, he could be a good spiker. He's able to adapt to Kageyama's crazy passes and keep up with each other's speed. Not only that. Among the first years, he's the most resilient kid I've seen in all these years and has truly amazing speed. He stretched his arms up to stretch his back and knocked over the fifth ramen container, which fell to the side of the bag, spilling some broth onto the floor. Oh, shit. Naruto grabbed a cloth that was next to the computer and started cleaning up the mess before it got any worse, and to do it properly, he had to turn on the room light, which forced him to blink repeatedly for his eyes to adjust to the change in light, and when they did, he saw the entire mess. And it was worse than I thought. Clothes were scattered on and around a chair. Several containers of instant ramen were accompanying the one out of the bag, increasing the number of ramen he'd eaten alone. As if that weren't enough, his bed was still unmade, with his gym bag hanging from the headboard and the sheet thrown to one side, almost like a small ball. It was a disaster. Yes, I've been up all night again, huh? Without thinking twice, Naruto began to clean up all the mess he had made. He started by collecting the instant ramen containers one by one, putting them in a slightly larger bag than the previous one, and wiping away any traces of broth or noodles that had remained under the pile of containers. Once he finished, he tied the bag and left it outside his room, moving directly to gathering his clothes, rolling them up, putting them directly into the washing machine, and then proceeding to put them directly in. When he finished with that, he moved on to making his bed and leaving it completely tidy, hanging his sports bag behind the door instead of the headboard. Now it looked like a normal teenager's room, but the Uzumaki knew it wouldn't last. Like his mother, he was completely messy, like a hurricane, and it didn't take long for him to create havoc wherever he walked, whether it was his room or not. That energy was the reason he'd been enrolled in volleyball, and while his hyperactivity had subsided, it hadn't completely subsided, and he was still messy and a slightly focused case of mind. He rubbed his eyes and looked at the time. It was 11 a.m. on Sunday, which told him that he had been studying his teammates and watching the video repeatedly since he got home yesterday afternoon after the practice game, which probably amounted to a 3-digit number. But he had discovered things. Tsukishima didn't give his all when he played. Thanks to his height, he was a truly amazing central defender, and while height wasn't everything, when combined with his mentality and analysis of the game, he became a true player with potential close to or greater than that of a national team player. And that analysis came to him when he saw him play against them. The other things he'd discovered playing that match, he'd already discussed with Daichi afterward, and they'd need to address them if they wanted to make it to the nationals. But how would they curb Kageyama's ego? Coaching Hinata wasn't complicated, but curbing a player's ego was much more complicated than giving another player the tools they needed to play well. Karasuno was like a car with poorly fitted parts that moved in fits that weren't working properly. Sometimes slow, sometimes fast, but still not without its flaws, due to having parts in the wrong places. To become a well-built car, the parts had to be polished, fitted in the right places, and made to move in perfect unison and coordination. But to do so, certain goals had to be achieved and certain skills taught to certain players, especially Hinata. Finally, after an hour of complete work, Naruto found his room completely clean and sparkling. To avoid any possible scolding, he had cleaned the windows, mopped the floor, and carefully wiped down his desk, leaving it sparkling, as if he had never sat down to watch hours of volleyball matches or any other nonsense on the internet. It almost looked like no one had used the room. At that precise moment, he heard the front doorbell ring and spun around, checking the nearby mirror to make sure he looked decent, even though he was wearing shorts and a tank top. But that was better than going out completely naked to greet visitors. Although, who was visiting? There were no volleyball team practices today, and he'd already been talking to his mom, so technically all his affairs were in order, and he should be able to rest today. Son. A man in his late 20s stood in the doorway, wearing a dark office suit that emphasized his blue eyes and golden hair, which was a riot on his head, with strands of hair sticking out in different directions. Two thick strands fell, framing a sharp, serious, light-skinned face, which stood out even more in the dark clothing. Father. Without asking permission, Namikaze Naruto entered his son's apartment and looked around, probably looking for any imperfections. He ran his thumb over the entryway furniture, his lips curling at the dust, and stopped when he reached the living room, where he stared at a painting of his wife, his son, and himself smiling at the camera. Now there were no smiles, but a frown. I see you inherited your mother's chaos. At least I don't always have a stick up my ass. They both looked at each other without speaking, letting the room temperature drop slightly. Do you want tea, father? No, thank you. This isn't a courtesy visit. Naruto reached inside his jacket and pulled out an envelope which he handed to Naruto, who looked at him blankly, raising one of his eyebrows in question. What is it? Money for support or something? My grandparents already help me, and sometimes I work with a friend when I want something extra. I don't need a handout from you. It's not money I'm giving you. Your mother is very ill, you know that, and that's why you moved here. Naruto frowned and clenched his fists, but kept his mind relaxed. I want to take care of you completely and not let you harm your mother any further. Focus on a career, make sports useless. Give this to your mother so she'll give you custody of me. Those words were like direct daggers, and Naruto glared at his father, feeling every letter reaching his ears. You're a. I'm your father, kid, and you should see that volleyball isn't going to get you anywhere in life. If not, look at your mother. If you'd at least chosen a sport like soccer, I might even support you minimally, but volleyball. Kid, when your mother signs these papers, he held them up in front of Naruto's face, you'll stop chasing futile dreams like the ones you have in your head. I had them too. We all do. But this is a real and cruel world. You have no right. I'm your father, and you're the heir to my company, kid. Of course I can. The envelope was shoved directly into Naruto's chest, who almost took a step back, but didn't. Father and son stared at each other, being the same height, the son being slightly stronger physically at first glance. Give this to your mother so she can sign it and stop worrying about you. It's the best thing for everyone, and your mother can rest easy knowing her son won't fall into a bottomless pit. My grandmother said you're a complete idiot, that you always were. I guess she was right, father. Chapter 17. The interscholastic volleyball tournament was getting closer, just a few weeks away, and the participating teams were training to reach the finals and then the nationals. It was the high school team's first opportunity to go to the nationals, and the next, likely, would be the winter tournament, giving young talent two chances to achieve their dream of making it to the nationals and playing in full view of the nation's public. Therefore, motivated, the volleyball teams from every district were training hard and focused on winning. And, of course, Karasuno was no different from the other teams. In fact, it was working even harder. Especially now that the team had two new players, or rather, two new ones who would soon join the starting lineup. The Ravens team had gotten back their current ace and libero, all after a practice match with the friends of the team's new coach, Coach Yukai's grandson. Yukai Kaisen, a man who was in charge of a grocery store and more that the boys on the team would stop by from time to feed themselves and hang out with each other. Aishin had taken over as head coach of the team after a match against their bitter rivals, Nikoma Tokyo, a formidable team that had proven superior to Karasuno, with far more experience and formidable players who would eventually become great players in the not-too-distant future. However, that hadn't sunk the team. Instead, it had filled the boys with a determination like a flame. Full of life, strength, and an intense glow that regenerated the boys after the practice match against Nikoma. Karasuno now had a coach, an A-team, and a libero, so the team could be considered a truly established team with all its players ready. However, the downside was the number of substitutes for Karasuno, who didn't have many players, and most of their star players were always on the court, leaving only 2 or 3 good players on the bench. Naruto. The Uzumaki teenager's blue eyes looked at his teammates and the 2 new acquisitions. Nishinoya Yu and Azumi Asahi, 2 boys who had previously been on the team and who were brought back thanks to Hinata, or at least the second of them, who felt again the fire that had been extinguished for him. "You've missed a few things," Daichi gave his younger teammate a small smile. "Is everything okay? We had a match with Nikoma, our team's old rivals, but we couldn't get a hold of you. According to the teachers, you were sick." "Yes," he cleared his throat, forcing a smile. "I was a little sick, but I'm better now. Migraines are devastating when they're really bad, Captain." "I'm glad you're feeling better," Daichi patted his partner on the back. "Come on, I'll introduce you to the new coach and we'll start training right away. Or rather, you'll join in." Lies have short legs, and that's what Naruto had always been told. He started walking behind Daichi, but he wasn't sure yet about discussing his personal problems. Should he talk to Daichi about his father and his attempt to gain custody? He wasn't comfortable with those questions, even if they were on his mind and he didn't see them as relevant. Daichi. The coach, a man with tied-back blonde hair and surfer-tanned skin, looked first at the team captain and then at the blonde man next to him. "Is this Uzumaki? The boy you told me was sick?" "It's a pleasure, Coach Yukai." Naruto bowed to the young man, who looked surprised at the boy's respectful gesture. He wasn't used to that kind of treatment, even though he had become the coach of a high school team and was the adult in charge. "Ah, good, good. Daichi spoke highly of you and your performance against Aoba Josei. I was hoping to count on you against Nikoma, but the coach mentioned you were sick. Migraines." "Yes sir. They come from my mother. She often gets migraines." Yoo-hoo, Kaisen scratched the back of his neck, a slightly nervous smile hidden from Daichi. "Well, I haven't decided on the lineup for the inter-school matches yet, so I'll be grading the matches and activities before making my decision. Of course, the teacher and Daichi will help me, giving me references of your game. I don't want to keep you any longer. Since you haven't worked with Nishinoya and Azumi before, you'll be teaming up with them against Sugawara, Tanaka, and Daichi. I want to see how well you play against more experienced players in a 3-on-3, while the rest of us, especially the first years, practice." Aishin's gaze was directed directly towards Hinata and Kageyama, who began to pass each other as Naruto proceeded to take off his tracksuit and put on his training suit, with a green vest covering his white shirt. "I hope you're feeling better now, Uzumaki-san." Sugawara smiled at Naruto's nod and the blonde took his place on the other side of the net. Coach Yukai had split the court in 2 and the 3-on-3 was being played on one half, across the court rather than across the length, so as not to interfere with the other teammates' practice sessions. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Uzumaki." Nishinoya smiled broadly and pointed at the blonde with 2 fingers forming a peace sign. "Daichi has already told us about you and your great match against Aoba Josei, where you left some good temptations. Since you missed some practices, I think the coach wants to see what you're capable of." "I have no objections, Nishinoya-senpai. I guess I'll have to be the setter." "Play sir." Noira's unremader. "I can play any position you see fit, Azumi-senpai. I have no problem being any position needed in a match, whether it's a setter, blocker, libero, or spiker. The important thing is to play." Nishinoya and Azumi looked at each other and raised an eyebrow, puzzled by their partner's response, but they each shrugged and smiled. The net fell between the 2 groups of 3 teenagers. Naruto became the linchpin of his team, with Nishinoya on his right and Azumi on his left, while Sugawara became the linchpin of his team, with Tanaka on his left and Daichi on his right. And the game began. The first to serve was Daichi, who sent the ball over the net to Nishinoya, who received it with a perfect arm stroke, lifting it towards the ceiling and pushing it forward, which was taken advantage of by Naruto. Positioning the ball is easy if you know the players. But I don't know Nishinoya or Azumi, which makes things more complicated. He bent his knees and quickly considered the best course of action. When the ball touched a player, they were disabled. Whatever tactics he could think of, he ruled out using Nishinoya as a decoy, as they knew he could only pass it to Azumi for a shot, which left him with 2 options. And I prefer the second one. Brash. Naruto took the initiative in that non-rotating match by scoring the first point. Like in the match between Konoha and Karasuno, the Uzumaki faked a set and weakly hit the ball, sending it straight to the ground, resulting in the first point of that short match. Shit. Tanaka shook his head. I forgot Naruto did this stuff. Well, we played him a week ago over the weekend, Tanaka Daichi sighed. It was obvious he would do it if you think about it. But our minds don't work as well as his, Kageyama's, or Tsukishima's when they want to. He has a pretty quick thought process and a very well-rounded view of the field. But those skills, I'm surprised he wasn't a professional setter, Sugawara admitted, giving a nervous smile. He has a lot of potential. That was amazing. Nishinoya looked amazed at the simple tape. The feint might be a simple move in the eyes of professional players, but knowing how to use it at the right moments had an effect on players, whether they were teammates or opponents. You can do more of those things. It was just a feint, Nishinoya-senpai. It wasn't a big deal. Any simple thing is a big deal to him, Uzumaki-san, Azumane chimed in. He always gets excited about anything, no matter how small. Little one. Did you see how he pulled that feint? Nishinoya and Azumane exchanged glances. The former's eyes flashed with excitement, while the latter's face, a quivering smile and a twitching eyebrow, were the perfect expression of someone who didn't want to engage in that kind of conversation. However, since the two teenagers knew each other and were best friends, it was a dynamic unique to them, from what Naruto could tell from watching the way they behaved and the way the other team's boys laughed. Can you do more amazing things? Anything to match my Rolling Thunder. Roll what? Yes. My Rolling Thunder, it's my ultimate receiving move that will stop any ball that tries to touch our side of the court. You'll see how awesome it is. Naruto didn't hold back and looked at Azumane with a raised eyebrow, but the third-year boy just shrugged, indicating that he didn't know what his friend and companion was talking about either, although the older boy had seen his companion rolling on the ground with strange movements. Let's keep going. Coach Yukai's shout brought the boys back to their 3-on-3 practice. It was Naruto's team's turn to serve, and it was his turn to serve. Since there was no rotation, the setters were the ones serving, per the coach's order. Naruto let the air escape through his mouth and opened his eyes, staring at Daichi, Tanaka, and Sugawara, who understood what he was going to do even before he did it. But could they read his serve? There were jump serves, flat serves, pump serves, powerful serves, less powerful serves, and he had practiced every possible serve and memorized them with his muscles, using his mind to execute the perfect serve for the occasion. He drew his arm back. He lifted the ball, gently tossing it toward the ceiling, and took 2 strides, jumping. This wasn't the time for floated serves. His instincts and his body were already telling him. If Coach Yukai wanted to see him at his full strength, he was going to throw a powerful serve that would pique the man's interest and reaffirm his position on the team as a complete player. Again. Ham. The ball went over the net in a direct, powerful manner and crashed onto the court behind Sugawara, Daichi and Tanaka, who were unable to react to their teammates' direct serve, and their ears were filled with the explosion of the ball hitting the ground. Well, Kaisen breathed deeply after letting out all the air in his lungs, still with his eyes wide open in shock, which turned into a cheeky smile. That was really unexpected, even for me. Akita Itetsu, the school counselor accompanying the Karasuno boys, adjusted his glasses and smiled a little. That's what I told you, Takeda began to answer without looking at Kaisen. This kid, Uzumaki, is a volleyball prodigy with a talent that Karasuno has never seen before. He can play any position, and I've yet to see him fail. He scored several points against Aoba with his serves, dismantling their key players. I wanted to see more of Ikawa to see what Uzumaki would do, but what they saw in that match, I'd say Uzumaki is better than Ikawa by a huge margin. So he's a kid with experience, huh? And not just high school experience. If I had to rate his experience, I'd say it's at the level of a professional. And of course, Professor, a kid like Uzumaki doesn't just fall from the sky twice in a row. We should take advantage of his experience, his training, and his tactics to improve ourselves. He sighed. The only problem is migraines, right? Maybe when Uzumaki-san has more confidence in his teammates, this team will be completely invincible. Chapter 18. The interscholastic tournament had finally arrived, and the teams from each region were excited to participate. It was their first step, with a ticket to the national tournament if they won, or at least a higher ranking for the national championships. All the teenagers participating in the tournament were filled with excitement, eager to compete against the best teams in their respective regions and advance toward a bright future, supported by family, friends, and teachers. However, one of the teams participating in the interscholastic tournament wasn't very popular among the other schools present, with a reputation that cast a shadow over them in a negative way. The Wingless Crows was the name Karasuno had received over the course of 3 years after their last appearance in the Nationals, and where they were able to shine and obtain their last victories before their fall from grace, almost as if a curse had been placed on them and it hadn't disappeared in all that time, earning them results that gave them the nickname of Wingless Crows because they couldn't fly over their rivals or score points like the Little Giant did some time ago. But now, when the Karasuno boys arrived at the sports hall where the inter-school matches would be held, some boys moved aside to let them pass and looked at them with some apprehension, trying not to mention the team's nickname or anything related to them. Reason for this new attitude? The practice match between Karasuno and Aoba Josai hadn't been a secret once it was over, and thanks to the students who came to watch it, the Ravens' victory over their rivals spread like wildfire, creating new murmurs and confusion among the volleyball players, who couldn't understand how a team like Karasuno could have beaten Aoba and their captain Ikawa, who was considered one of the best setters in the prefecture. But the victory had been legitimate and, to anyone who asked, it made it clear that Karasuno had shown better players than they had initially expected since Aoba Josai had accepted the match, or rather, requested it, to see the skills of the new first-year setter. And their plan had backfired. Now, the Karasuno boys walked straight to the registration counter, ready for their first inter-school match, with Hinata nervous as always when he was about to start a match, whether it was important to them or not, which demonstrated his lack of experience in official matches and tournaments. The match against Okanami is going to be one of the first, and if we win, we'll face the winner of the Date and Sakura Shida matches. The coach noticed the slight negativity among some of the players when he mentioned Date. Anything you'd like to comment on, Uzumaki? Just as Naruto was a good player on the field, he was also a good one off it, as he demonstrated in the match against Aoba Josai by studying each of his opponents. And now that they were in a tournament, he had learned everything he could about the teams they might play against, which had filled his head with possible plays, counterplays, and strategies to beat the opponents. However, after seeing the other teams and getting to know himself and his teammates, he focused his attention on the teams that could beat them. Date and Aoba Josai. There's no need to worry too much about any team other than Date or Aoba Josai. They're the only ones I've seen who could beat us with their skills. Date's read block is almost perfect and we'll have to work to overcome it and then we'll worry about Aoba Josai. I'm sorry if I'm being too long-winded, coach, but that's what I observed in the videos you provided. Aishin had been tasked with training one of the best players for the interscholastic tournament. After speaking with Professor Takeda, he decided to obtain match videos of teams that would be playing in the interscholastic tournament and give them to Naruto, the most intelligent boy on the team, something he had learned after watching some 3-on-3 matches they had held as training. That's a good analysis. I'd thought something similar. However, guys, this doesn't mean you should get complacent about the rest of the teams we might play against. They could spring a nasty surprise and we have to be completely focused. Do you understand that, guys? Yes, coach. The sports center was packed with people. Family members, teammates, and friends of the players, and if you looked closely, you could even spot the occasional scout from professional or even college teams. Although it might not seem like it, the interscholastic tournament not only attracted the players' families and friends, but also attracted the attention of scouts from various teams and sports professionals, especially those in the volleyball world. It may not have been as well known as the national tournament, but any sports tournament could attract the attention of the right people and change the lives of promising young people. You can feel the pressure, huh? Naruto patted Hinata's back lightly, causing his companion to nearly fall face first onto the ground. This caused the blonde to smile slightly, both nervous and amused, as the boy's panicked face was the same as the one he'd had during the practice match against Aoba Josai. This indicated that they would have to treat the boy calmly and prevent him from sinking into himself due to nerves. After the inter-school tournament, Naruto was sure the boy could grow upwards like a rocket with the proper training and sports education. We're going to be looked down on given our previous results, Daichi began as they set up the court and got ready. They're going to underestimate us as if we were simple elementary school players. The captain's words were a reality that the Karasuno boys knew perfectly well. For some years now, Karasuno hadn't excelled in tournaments or official matches, and they stopped taking volleyball so seriously, becoming a mid to lower tier team that few people wanted to belong to, as it offered few opportunities for a future in sports for anyone who wanted to continue playing. Aichi himself was amazed by the great players they had on the team that year and the enormous opportunity that had presented itself to them with those boys. They had the possibility, if they performed well, of reaching the nationals and achieving victory. It was a beautiful dream, no doubt, shared by all the boys participating in the interscholastic tournament. But Karasuno and its players lived it even more intensely. If anyone looked into the eyes of Hinata and Kageyama, these two first-year students demonstrated an almost unbreakable will and were an inspiration to their teammates. The odds are against us, huh? Kaishin looked up at the stands. No one was betting on the Karasuno boys, not even his classmates. But how could he blame them when the team hadn't performed well so far? Let's go all out against our rivals, guys. Hi, coach. Tempers were running high among the Karasuno boys. The formation was nearly unstoppable, with Hinata and Kageyama at the front, the little orange-haired boy serving as a decoy that would draw the opposing defense's attention. Of course, Hinata's height was another key factor, as was his reaction speed, his reflexes, and his almost supernatural body. Hinata was a weapon, and the coach was certain he would be a lethal blow to the opposition. You stay on the bench, Uzumaki. Naruto didn't argue with his coach or sulk. Faced with Kaishin's decision, his mind turned to finding the logical answer to the coach's approach. The opponents were below Karasuno's current standards, and using him as a card on the field would be a victory, ensuring a landslide victory. That was the logical thing to do, and what his coach was thinking, right? Honestly, I'm not surprised you're taking it so easy. The coach was watching the boys take their positions and greet their upcoming opponents. Everyone had warmed up. Still, I want to explain my reason for keeping you on the bench. Beyond being an ace up your sleeve for tough matches like against Ade or Aoba. That's part of it, I admit. However, Daichi and I have been talking about how to fit you into this team. Every position has been filled, and while you're capable of filling in at least as high as libero in some cases, it's not the position that's going to be needed from you in this growing Karasuno. So, you have real experience, from what I've seen. And if I have to classify your level, it could be professional, I'll give you that. You're better than the guys in front of us, with a body and skills that complement each other to fill any spot on the court. Your receptions and serves can turn a match around, and you'd surely be able to play at the professional level if you wanted to, with people much older and more experienced. Slowly, inside the boy's mind, a crazy idea formed, but an idea nonetheless. Both Daichi and I have made the decision to make you Karasuno's vice captain, and you'll become captain when Daichi isn't on the court or when he finally retires from the team. Maybe, just maybe, you could even take the spot at the nationals, where you'd really have to give it your all. I don't think there are many players like you, but the nationals bring together the best players in Japan to compete for the best team in the country. Which would lead me to face Ushijima at some point, and you don't think there's anyone on this team, other than me, who can stop the best Japanese teenage volleyball player, right coach? I'm not going to lie to you. That's exactly what Daichi and I have in mind. You're the best player by far and a promising coach, if I do say so myself. You've been working with Hinata most of the time, giving him workouts to improve his lower body so he can move better than he already does. You've even helped him with catches and planks, in case he needs to dive for a catch. The kid is the greenest player in Karasuno, coach, and few of his teammates realize that Hinata is the team's weak link. They could score a lot of points if he doesn't catch shots well, and that could sink him mentally. I don't deny that you're right. In fact, having realized that when your coach didn't argue, it frustrates me a little. I guess I'm just not used to meeting someone with your talent. Naruto and Kaishin had sat on the bench, the boy knowing that he was not going to play that game, since the rival team was at a lower level than Karasuno or one very similar to when they started training, and the man did it to direct the game. Thanks, I guess, coach. Kaishin's lips twisted into a rather mocking smile. They'll thank you when you leave the field, boy. Chapter 19. Karasuno's next opponent had already been chosen for the Date vs Akurashita match. The winner had turned out to be Date Technical High, a team Karasuno had faced the previous year and who were able to stop Karasuno's forwards and block the shots of the team's ace, which sent Azumane into a small slump that he seemed to have overcome, which is why the boy rejoined the team. But once again, Karasuno's forwards would have to face Dadaku's impregnable defense, which had already proven to have formidable players and had barely received any points in the first match of the Inter-School Championship. Dadaku's defense was centered around read blocking, which meant that Dadaku's blockers, and probably all players on the team, were able to read their opponents, see where and how they were going to hit, reacting to their opponent's movements to make the appropriate block. This type of blocking, if used properly, was capable of completely dismantling an attack, increasing the pressure on the opponents, and causing them to begin to despair at how they were constantly being blocked. And the blockers who used this type of blocking forced their opponents into a terrain that was covered by very thin ice. The psychological terrain. A year ago, Dadaku and its members demonstrated that a player's psychology and mindset were just as important as their skills. What could happen when a spiker couldn't get a shot off? Azumane was the epitome of what a reading block could do to an opponent. Destroying the player mentally until they become a mere memory of their former selves, also causing them to forget any desire to continue playing or trying to score a point in the match. These types of blocks turned the blockers who executed them into almost insurmountable walls. Tall, thick, extending their shadow over the players in front of them until they almost devoured them. Dadaku had some very strong players, one of whom stood out the most. And Takanobu, a tall albino-haired Dadaku freshman with a serious face and a quiet personality that heightened the fear of opponents facing Dadaku's middle blocker. He's a beast. The Karasuno boy stared at Ann in awe, admiring his enormous size and broad, strong body, a physique worthy of a middle blocker. The only member of the team who didn't seem surprised was Naruto, who whistled at the albino's broad back as he warmed up with the rest of the Dadaku boys. Is that kid really a first year? The teacher and the coach of Karasuno were just as surprised as the boys on the team, seeing with their own eyes that even first-year boys could be real monsters in the physical aspect, as was the case with Tsukishima and Ann, two enormous boys in terms of size. To face Aoba Josei, Karasuno would have to overcome the wall that was the Dadaku players, mainly their middle blockers, who would be in charge of stopping any Karasuno attacks and thus avoid receiving points against them. Then he plans to overcome that thing. Tanaka jerked his thumb at Ann. The boys had met with their respective coaches and Karasuno had already begun planning their strategy for that match. The team that's going onto the court will be the following rotation. Hinata, Kageyama, and Tsukishima up front. Nishinoya, Samura, and Azumane at the back. In the rotation, I'll switch Nishinoya for Tanaka. I want to have Samura and Nishinoya at the back for every possible block and counter by Dadaku, and I want to see what the guys we're facing are capable of. To do that, Hinata and Kageyama will be the spearheads that will hit Dadaku's wall. Testing opposing players was a strategy that could turn into a double-edged sword. At the same time that they were testing them, Dadaku was testing them, trying to discover the gaps in their defenses and snake through them like snake snaking through any crack. Despite this, it was the best they could do, not knowing the effectiveness of Dadaku's blockers and the overall level of their players, which could be superior to their own. Depending on how the match progresses, I'll make some changes. We're going to adjust to break down Dadaku's wall, and right now our best assets are the quick attack and the super quick attack. Coach Yukai Kaishin's words reached his boys with the intensity he'd intended to avoid unnerving them, but when he looked at the Dadaku boys his mind froze. Even though he had a strategy in mind, they first had to understand their opponent's cards and overcome them, something only the boys could do. As coach, he would give the guidelines for the match to try and bring it to a successful conclusion, but only the boys' minds and hard work could stop their opponents, who, in the eyes of any spectator, were completely unbeatable. Be prepared for any possible changes in the match, Uzumaki. I trust the boys, but having a better view of our opponents is better than nothing. Sitting on the bench, to Kaishin's left, Naruto kept his hands clasped, his elbows resting on his legs, his eyes fixed on the Dadaku players, so he could visualize any weaknesses in his opponents. That was his role within the team. To visualize any weaknesses in his opponents, learn those weaknesses, and exploit them whenever the coach deemed it necessary. In that match, he had to discover the movement patterns of the Dadaku players, as well as their reaction to shots. Unlike Hinata or Kageyama, he had studied his opponent's play. He had learned everything he could about read blocking and was determined to understand his opponent's real game in order to overcome the wall of the opposing team's middle blockers. They're going to move following the ball toward the spiker. Agility, jumping power, and leg strength. Dadaku's blockers are going to have to rely on all of that if they want to stop Hinata and Kageyama. The match had begun, and it was the turn of the Dadaku boys to serve, who started the serve strongly with the intention of scoring the first point. Nishinoya acted as expected of the libero. He reacted to the serve by receiving it with a perfect arm reception, sending the ball upwards almost perpendicular to the ground, pushing it forward slightly, towards the setter. Kageyama's dark eyes moved across the court. First, he scanned the Dadaku players, trying to spot any gap in the opposing team's defense and exploit it to create a massive hole in their wall. Having found the gap, he now analyzed a potential score, seeking confirmation with a single glance. Splash. Zoom. The eyes of the spectators and the Karasuno players widened. Kageyama had hoped to use Hinata with a quick attack to get past the Dadaku players, or at least use him as a decoy for Tsukishima to shoot over the defense, but the blocker's eyes followed the movements of each of the Karasuno players, including Kageyama, and caught his move, blocking it perfectly. Point for Date's technical school. What was that? That, Hinata, was a reading block. The Dadaku is famous for using them, and their blockers they move quickly, despite their size. Hinata glared daggers at Ann, the towering Dadaku first year who was taking it upon himself to shadow him. It seemed the coach had learned Karasuno's patterns and designated Ann as Hinata's blocker. To think that we alone would study our rivals would be a fatal mistake. Coach Yukai took a deep breath at his own words, feeling them like small stones on his shoulders. The Dadaku had studied Kageyama and Hinata's patterns, and the blockers acted in perfect synchronized fashion, blocking the number 10's potential point. The only way to beat Ann might be a much faster attack than usual, faster than a quick attack, and a super quick attack. Naruto's voice caught Kaishin's attention. If the Dadaku boys get used to Hinata's movements, then we'll have to make more professional plays. Have you seen any gaps? The read block is hard to beat. The blocker's eyes always follow the ball and wait to see who arrives to stop it. To be able to do that, the players have to be fast, with jumping power, strong legs, and the bigger they are, the better. And the Dadaku has players like that, and they are capable of using the read block much better than some professional teams, the blonde explained, watching as Anne blocked Hinata again, which caused frustration in the boy. But that doesn't make them invincible. The Kawa is capable of overcoming that by making better plays. Players like Uchiha can overcome them by using their finishing power. He took a deep breath, watching as the Dadaku blocked for the fourth time in a perfect manner, but the best way to overcome a read block is by using intelligence, by using your head. How would you surpass Anne? Naruto's blue eyes looked at the Dadaku first year and then at Hinata, observing that his classmate was getting more and more nervous, even though Anne and his classmates blocked Tsukishima, Azumane and Daichi as well. Outsmart Anne. I don't have my friend Niji's eyes, but I can be smart in a match if I put my mind to it. He turned his hands until his fingertips pointed toward the ceiling, revealing the blades. I'd use the fingertip shot. You don't need a powerful shot to break the date school or use Hinata's speed to do it in a crazy play. Use the intelligence of a spiker to outsmart Anne. That's what I do. Aishin didn't respond right away and looked at the score in favor of Dadaku, which amounted to 5 points against Karasuno's 0, something that was already starting to take its toll on the boys. Hahaha. I see, Uzumaki, the coach scratched his nose. Let's see if you can put those words into action, boy. The assistant referee looked at the Karasuno bench, nodded, and made the substitution. Naruto was holding a small paddle with a number 4 in his hand, indicating a substitution that would take Nishinoya out and bring on Uzumaki. Go for them, Naruto. The blonde and the libero shook hands, and Naruto took his position behind Hinata and to the left of Daichi, his captain. It was his first few minutes as a player in the interscholastic tournament, and his eyes had already assessed the situation before even entering. Kageyama. Naruto's voice reached the setter over the sounds of the crowd. Set it for me. That shout made the players look at him with some intensity and surprise, but Naruto stayed in his position, demonstrating the mentality of a player. Despite feeling like the focus of that moment, he did not retreat despite the intensity of the looks, some of them being really heavy, but instead stood there, with his legs slightly bent and his body slightly leaning forward. That's it, look at me. Dadaku served again, although this time the player serving was slightly directed towards the blue-eyed blonde number 23 of Karasuno, probably with the intention of disabling the player from whatever play he was planning. I'll take care of it. The Karasuno captain reacted to Dadaku's serve by receiving it with a near-perfect catch. Almost, because the ball bounced slightly off its shape and almost went wide, but Daichi managed to send it up with the catch. I'm sorry. Kageyama glanced briefly over his shoulder at Naruto and let a breath escape from between his lips, almost a sigh of protest for following the orders of someone other than the captain, but he did it. Using his fingertips, visualizing the pass, Kageyama placed the ball for Naruto as he had shouted for and soon saw him with his hand almost touching the ball. But there was a difference. Azumane, Daichi, and Hinata all used powerful spikes intended to tear through Dadaku's defense, clearly trying to outmaneuver Anne and his teammates. Naruto was different, using a softer spike directly at Anne's fingertips. Anne had positioned his hands like an umbrella, intending to make a full block. But the ball hit his fingers, surprising him, and the force behind the spike caused him to move his hands. Having aimed for his fingertips also caused Anne to give in. The Dadaku boys reacted late to Uzumaki's shot. Surprised by the change of pace in the shot, Anne's teammates were unable to react appropriately, and the point for Karasuno was a given. 1-5 in favor of Dadaku, but that didn't stop the stands from erupting in cheers, more for the play than for the team that had scored it, causing a stir and generating whispers between people who knew each other and those who didn't, who were looking for information about Karasuno's number 23, who had caused Dadaku's first breach. That's how it's done. Naruto and Hinata high-fived each other so hard that both boys blew on their hands afterwards, which began to sting and almost looked like 2 red Christmas lights. A soft fingertip finish. I hadn't thought of that. Daichi smiled, ruffling the Uzumaki's hair, who smiled foxily. And I have more of that hidden up my sleeves. Karasuno renewed their energy and their fire intensified. The rotation now placed Naruto in the direct attack zone, next to Hinata, who felt dwarfed by having Tsukishima on his right and Naruto on his left. This meant Kageyama would pass back and serve. If Naruto were the one serving, we could probably recover and catch the Dadaku on points. But, either way, I'll try to take a point or several before they respond. The intensity in the Karasuno setter's eyes grew even more intense and a fire appeared, dulling the dark color of his irises. He let the air leave his lungs. He lifted the ball upward in a fluid motion and served it as perfectly as he could, sending it to the other side of the net. Dadaku reacted to Karasuno's serve. Dadaku vice-captain Kamasaki Yasushi received the serve with a perfect trouble-free reception, sending the ball up the court to his captain, Manuwa, who placed it for his teammates to finish and score. Futakuchi Kenji responded to his captain's positioning and finished with intensity with the intention of scoring the point. Cloak. Futa 5 changed the score, and Futakuchi's eyes looked at the mocking and foxy smile of the Karasuno blocker, who had reacted to Dadaku's spike by performing a reading block, being the discordant piece with his fellow blockers. You can't beat a fox. The Dadaku boys stared daggers at Karasuno's number 23. The moment Naruto stepped onto the court, the dynamics of the match had taken a turn Dadaku hadn't expected. Many of the boys who had been there the previous year saw Karasuno buckle under the pressure of their wall in their read block. Karasuno doesn't have the experience to handle certain situations. I guess that's my contribution. The ball advanced towards Naruto's position, and the Dadaku players expected some kind of ordinary pass, but Karasuno's number 23 rose into the air and made a placement. Time. The ball hit the court directly, creating a bouncing sound that echoed screams back into the arena. Using his speed and unusual physique, Hinata automatically finished off his teammate's set, believing Kageyama was going to set it, but Naruto had beaten him to it. 3-6 par el Karasuno. Yee. Once again, Hinata and Naruto high-fived each other. In front of the audience and the Dadaku, it was clear that, at that moment, Karasuno currently had two setters on the court. Kageyama Tobio and Uzumaki Naruto, which gave the team a second set of possibilities. And they had proven it by having the gap between the two teams in the first set with just 3 moves. Point to point. The Karasuno captain's voice sounded renewed, stronger. We're catching up. Ham. Bingo. The ball hit the Dadaku court as Azumane's arm moved, hitting the ball with force, overcoming the opposing defense's read block and scoring the 4-6 for Karasuno, renewing the strength of the players in black. They only have 2 more than us. Naruto and Ann jumped simultaneously for a ball that was falling toward the edge of the net. The Uzumaki gripped the ball tightly, pushing Ann's arm away. The two first-years collided and the ball shot upward again. Pay attention. Ham. Free ball. Thump. Daichi caught the ball with his arms, slightly raising it. They couldn't make a good play with that ball. Passion. Kageyama hit the ball with a spike, but the opposing team's catchers stopped the ball, and the captain prepared again to mount an attack. Palmouse. Azumane received the ball, albeit weakly, but managed to lift it into the sky. Tight. Kageyama placed it almost without looking, on pure impulse, and the blockers emerged. 5-6 par el Karasuno. Using the same technique, Naruto sent the ball bouncing off the blocker's fingertips, causing it to bounce slightly above the Dadaku boys. As it landed, none of the teams were able to stop it, and the point was clear for Karasuno. They're catching us. They're within a bucking point. The Dadaku captain looked serious as he shouted that, scanning the scoreboard before looking at the person who had caused the upheaval. Cover number 23 and pressure him, guys. Don't let them score any more points. That was Naruto's strategy from the beginning, aside from renewing the strength of his companions. To have the Dadaku members focus on him as if he were a spotlight attracting the attention of flies. Ham. That way the crows behind him could reach new heights. 6-6. Karasuno has tied the pitch with a point from young Hinata Shoyo. Chapter 20. The scoreboard of the first set was a tight 16-15 in favor of the Karasuno High School team, who had managed to stay in the match thanks to the players' change of pace. However, despite the advantage they had maintained and were maintaining, Dadaku had shown why they were a great volleyball team, with an almost unbreakable defense that was difficult for the Karasuno players to overcome, since Dadaku's read block could be considered almost or in the same league as a professional block, which caused the Karasuno boys to work harder to keep up with the pace of the match. Or rather, Karasuno had to get creative in order to score points against Dadaku, relying on Hinata's speed, Kageyama's positioning, and Naruto's finishing instincts. With these 3 tools, Karasuno, which seemed like a newly formed team, had managed to stay ahead of Dadaku for almost the entire first set, reaching the current score, where the opposing coach decided to take a break to reorganize his players. Karasuno decided to take a break while the coach gave some brief instructions. In Kaishin's eyes, bringing Naruto on early in the first set was one of the best decisions he'd ever made. It freed up the rest of the players, relieved the stress on the newer players, Hinata, and gave them a better way to visualize their opportunities against Dadaku. Ever since Naruto came onto the court, Karasuno's scoring opportunities had grown, putting them ahead of their opponents, almost as if Dadaku didn't have any blockers. What Naruto had done, however, could be considered the work of a finisher. He took it upon himself to increase the scoring opportunities and open gaps in Dadaku's ironclad read block defense. Because of this, he'd had to work on his blocking and shutting down Karasuno's 23rd player, which couldn't be considered his best strategy. Having used his blockers against a single player had caused other Karasuno players to shine behind Naruto, appearing like crows behind their leader and swarming toward their prey. Of course, the Dadaku managed to shut down many of the Uzumaki's plays, which is why they kept scoring and keeping up with the match, but a volleyball team didn't rely on just one player, no matter how crucial that player was. They're focusing on Naruto like he's a honeypot surrounded by bears. Sugawara's definition of the situation was spot on. The Dadaku blockers focused on Naruto like bears around a pot of honey, or flies or mosquitoes around a bright light, or like almost any insect around a carnivorous plant. And the comparison could be made true. Naruto acted like both a mosquito trap and a carnivorous plant because he made everyone's eyes focus on him like a giant light before attacking. This is how it has to be. Coach Yukai spoke over his players' conversations. He looked at each of the boys who had come out onto the court, scanning for possible injuries. Inwardly, he was pleased to see that the starting lineup still had the energy to keep playing for the rest of their lives. Uzumaki was brought into the game as a change of pace, which was good for us to let off steam and figure out the patterns of the Dadaku blockers. Now, every player is pushing to cover plays Uzumaki is involved in, which opens up a huge number of possibilities. So take advantage of every possible opening and step out of Uzumaki's shadow to finish like you've been doing so far. Naruto's experience as a spiker was a tool that was being put to good use in the match, something Kaisen knew all too well. It was Naruto who had scored the first point and who had swirled the match around him like he was the center of a whirlpool. And taking advantage of that was what they were doing, following in the wake of the blonde who had broken through the Dadaku's read block with the intelligence of a true attacker. Of course, green kids like Hinata still had to continue developing, but seeing teammates like Naruto hit spikes from different positions and ways was an experience that would help him grow as a player and eventually reach the position of ace, which was his goal. But to do so they had to keep fighting that match against Dadaku. The only way the Dadaku can take advantage is by changing their style of play. Now that they've focused on me, the rest of you have a much better chance of attacking. Naruto drank from his water bottle and wiped the sweat from his face with a towel. The rotation we're in, with me up front alongside Daichi and Azumane, could give us an offensive advantage. It's possible that Dadaku could take advantage of our vulnerability in the receptions with Hinata and Tsukishima behind us, but we have to prevent the exchanges from dragging on. That's a good observation, the coach nodded. Seeing that, I think Dadaku, who will be serving, might try to disrupt us with stronger serves and disrupt our plays. We have to take advantage of Kageyama and Uzumaki as setters to generate different plays that Dadaku can't predict. Use feints, clever spikes, and remember, as Uzumaki said in training, that the whole body counts. At the sound of the whistle and the bell, both teams went to take their positions. However, this time, something was different about the Dadaku players, as one of their members was removed and another stood right in front of Naruto, flashing him a smile that was both amused and bored. Chouji. Looks like we meet again, Naruto. Dadaku served the ball directly to Kageyama, who received the ball with his arms, leaving him unequipped to set it up, so Naruto reacted and jumped, lightly pushing the ball upwards with his fingertips, looking at his possible spiker. Ham. 16-16. Dadaku blocks Azumane's spike. Naruto knew perfectly how his old friend Akimichi Chouji played. But his friend could see how he played as well, knowing all his possible tricks for the match. And Chouji had read his play with a perfection that could frighten players much less experienced than him. So Chouji has joined the Dadaku and is now blocking me. And, on the other hand, is blocking Hinata. Well. The ball was back in play, streaking across the sky of the sports center when Dadaku served to execute the same play. Disarming Kageyama and taking advantage of Chouji's knowledge of his opponent. But this play was already in Uzumaki's mind, so he executed it almost perfectly because he faked, lightly pushing the ball over the net and missed Kageyama's pass. 17-16. That move could only be used once against Chouji. His friend had already registered it, so he couldn't fake it again, as he was already ready to react to his feints. However, having marked. It's your turn to take out. Naruto caught the ball Kageyama tossed him and took a deep breath. Daichi was always in the center, he was on the right, and Azumane was on the left when they were in front. Behind them, Hinata was on Tsukishima's right and Kageyama was on his left. Now that they rotated, Kageyama would be in front and he would be in back at the service point so they wouldn't lose a setter in front. It's my turn to take out. Going all out on a serve could end in two ways. Either demoralizing the opposing team or demoralizing the team to which the server belongs. These two thoughts were always on Naruto's mind when he served, when his eyes watched the ball rise and fall so he could spike it. And to be able to execute perfect serves and outplay the Dadaku, he had to know the Dadaku players. It wasn't important to know them personally, just to know how they acted on each possible play. They're the Iron Wall, with a higher percentage of blocks even above Aoba Josei and Shiratorizawa. However, when someone knows the blocks perfectly, they can see the gaps the ball can pass through. And Dadaku has huge cracks I'm going to squeeze through. It was possible that Dadaku had thought about how to stop him when he attacked, when he organized the plays, but stopping him when he served was something that even Choji could barely see. Passion. Hunto para el Karasuno. 1816. The ball had hit Dadaku's hand squarely, colliding with his chest and shooting out to the right in such a way that it could not be stopped until it fell to the ground, causing the point for Karasuno and increasing the difference between both schools. Keep it up. Naruto caught the ball again and let the air out between his lips in a way that resembled a slight whistling sound, almost as if it were the wind, but it was his own breath. And again he took out. He swung his arm, elevating the ball. He took 2 strides and jumped, propelling himself. He struck the ball with his palm in a smooth, perfect manner for a float serve that would surprise the Dadaku boys. But he had made the mistake of relying on his own level, of being above the opposing players and surpassing them with his own skills. Dadaku reacted to the floater, or rather, Akimichi Choji did, signaling to his teammates that he was taking Naruto's serve. And he did. He reacted to the floater and received it perfectly, taking the perfect distance to receive the serve and setting up a play. This caused the Dadaku setter to react and to finish, towering over his teammates. Point for Dadaku. 1817. Wait, Naruto's serve didn't score a point. The surprise in Hinata's voice was genuine. The first year had hoped his teammate would score another point, but the opposing team had blocked Naruto's serve and scored a point, so now they were making the rotation. At ready to receive. The serve went straight to a point free of Karasuno players. Naruto reacted and shouted loudly, heard above the shouts of the stands and his teammates. He dived and received the ball, lifting it high with the fingertips of his right hand, which prevented the point. Tight. It was a complicated play. Kageyama's eyes scanned all the possible plays, all the points he'd have to take to score. Hinata wasn't in front, but he could make a play with the team's ace, Azumane. Pam. Another Daidyoku block ties the match 18-18. Since Naruto's friend has entered, the Dadaku seems to have a much more solid defense capable of stopping us, because now they don't have to block only Uzumaki. From the bench, the Karasuno coach had analyzed the change in pace in the opposing team since the new player's arrival. The Dadaku boys were no longer focusing solely on Naruto and had begun to cut off Karasuno's moves much more easily. Having Naruto now wasn't. Uzumaki. Naruto's intense blue eyes had shone with a certain intensity and his position had changed. He had bent his legs slightly more, letting his body slump even more. He had relaxed his arms and back, so he didn't seem tense at all. In fact, he seemed much more focused, or at least that was the feeling that Karasuno's number 23 sent to the Dadaku, who looked at the boy in confusion. I see. A smile appeared on Choji's lips when he saw his old friend and companion in that position, with those eyes that seemed to be burning with 2 blue flames, which sent an uncomfortable sensation to the most inexperienced. Another play was made. Dadaku's serve sailed over the net, directly toward Tsukishima. Karasuno's tallest player reacted with a late reception, but managed to keep the ball from falling to the ground and score for Dadaku. Who do I pass it to? Hinata. Azuma. Kageyama felt it. A chill, a predator upon him ready to devour him. And, feeling that sensation, he simply moved his hands, using his fingertips to push the ball. Dadaku reacted. Choji leaped, followed by his team's blockers. They were poised to raise Dadaku's iron wall and stop the point. But they couldn't. It was swift, powerful, and the shot echoed over the cheers of the Dadaku fans, generating an almost deafening silence. 1918. Punto para el Karasuno de la mano de Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto's feet touched the soft floor of the court. When he lifted his head, the atmosphere of the match changed completely, as the pressure on the Dadaku boys increased slightly, once again turning the blonde into the figure to be covered, the enormous beacon they had to look up to in order to stay in the match. Holy crap. Did you see how he overcame the Dadaku wall with pure power? Only the ace of Shiratorizawa could have done that. What's that boy's name? Uzumaki Naruto, number 23 of Karasuno. Murmurs of surprise filled the stands. There weren't many people, and most were fans of other teams and Dadaku, as well as players who had finished their matches and decided to watch the game between the two teams. Despite this, everyone was talking about the event that surprised them. Naruto cleared the Dadaku wall with a powerful shot, without any unnecessary strategy or planning, shattering the Dadaku iron wall, as if it had been a cannon shot. The boy with the mustache is certainly surprising, huh? Iwazumi and Akawa were watching Karasuno's match from the stands. They had finished their match, were selected for the next match, and had to see their next opponents. "He didn't act like that in our practice match," the Aoba Josei star declared, watching Naruto take a direct serve from Dadaku without even flinching. "He's playing better." The score quickly changed again. 2018 in favor of Karasuno after a spike by Azumane. "I suppose Whisker Boy hasn't used all his weapons against us. He looks like a pivot from which his companion strings hang, and when he turns, the others turn." 21-18 in favor of Karasuno. The wingless crows team began to take off, flapping their wings with every jump, with every spike, filling the stands with awe. A team that had previously lost to Dadaku was now gaining more and more advantage over them, placing the score at 22-18 in favor of Karasuno, and it didn't look like the boys in black and orange were willing to stop now that they had regained strength. 4 points and they'll take the set, Iwazumi declared, as Karasuno made the first set score 22-18. "Are you sure that guy isn't Ushijima's brother or relative? He has less face to have a stick stuck in him." Hunto para el Karasuno. In a brilliant display, Kageyama had coordinated an attack using both Naruto and Hinata as spikers, thus creating a screen for Dadaku's blockers, allowing Karasuno to overcome the reed block and score the 23rd point of the match under the watchful eyes of the crowd, consisting of players, scouts, family, friends and volleyball fans. Phew. The air escaped from the Uzumaki's mouth, forming almost a puff of air. Sweat trickled down his face, soaking his dark t-shirt as his chest heaved frantically. His eyes never left the Dadaku boys, and his mind already had all the possible routes and necessary combinations. "I think I've got it. I'm going to overheat if I keep pushing the Dadaku's defense, but there's a very clear path ahead of us." Blue eyes flashed and looked at Kageyama. "It's time to unleash a super fast attack like never before." Wait. Hey. I don't think that brat and I are ready for that yet. Who are you calling a guy? The Dadaku's reed blocks are getting more and more precise, closing the gap created by my powerful spike. Naruto looked at his hand for a few moments. His skin was slightly reddish due to the constant hits against the ball, and closed it. "If we keep pushing my game, then we'll have trouble in the second set. It's time to change the pace to a faster one." "Do you want to sentence the being with a super fast attack?" "That's right, Captain." Daichi took a deep breath and shook his head before looking at the Dadaku with his dark eyes. In front of them, some of those boys had been the cause of their defeat the previous year, as well as Azumane's depression for almost a year. Should he feel pity for the boys who defeated them? "Alright." Daichi looked at Karasuno's number 9 and 10. "It's time to finish the set." At Kaishin's command, Naruto left the field and Nishinoya came in to replace him, allowing the Uzumaki to take a seat on the bench next to Coach Yukai. Yukai placed a towel over Naruto's head, allowing the teenager to close his eyes in the momentary darkness before removing the towel. "I think that will do, coach. How are you feeling?" "Okay, don't worry. It's been a while since I've pushed myself in an official match and my body has been feeling a little rusty. Some old niggles." "I see." They both looked at the next 2 points, which followed one another in a quick and almost instantaneous manner. As Naruto had requested and as Daichi, the captain, had accepted, Kageyama and Hinata performed their best combination to score the 2 points and surpass the Dadaku's iron wall, maintaining the gaps they had tried to close, because Naruto had been right when he said that they were getting used to his speed and reflexes, probably thanks to the addition of Choji to the team. Which had been a surprise. If they're going to play in these matches or future games, just like Sasuke, it means I'll have to go back to training to recover. In this form. The boy took a deep breath and took a sip from the bottle of water Shimizu gave him. Karasuno had won the first set and Dadaku had nothing left to lose. Chapter 21. The cold water coming out of the tap was a sensation the young blonde man was grateful for as his own hand, soaked in water, caressed the back of his own neck, which comforted him and even made him let out a sigh of satisfaction, as if he had taken a drink of water after having been in the desert for an hour, which wasn't entirely far-fetched. Maybe he hadn't been in the desert, but it had heated his own head enough to have become almost a walking furnace. The fault had lain in his own mind, which overheated when he began to visualize all the possible moves to overcome the Dadaku's iron wall, and he had done it all in barely a second, in less time than it takes to blink. That was his strong suit. Niji had eyes that could see gaps between players. Shikamaru had the ability to discover players' weaknesses in just a few minutes. Kiba had reflexes that could overcome some of the best read blocks that professional players could do. Rock Lee had the stamina that could last for hours running. Choji could make any block and make centered spikes. And Sasuke had the eyes and the mind that could make him create the best plays possible, surpassing professional setters if he wanted to. And that was why he had signed for Shiratorizawa. All of his friends had their own gifts, their unique abilities that together made them nearly unstoppable. And he had no doubt that he would have to play against the others, like he was playing against Choji right now, which would force him to use himself much more than he had currently. After a few moments, Naruto poked his head out of the sink, feeling the strands of his hair, completely soaked, stick to his forehead. Water dripped from the tips of his hair, wetting the top of his shirt, which bore the number 23 on the back, a deep white. Sigh. He shook his head, causing his hair to move and scatter water all over the sink. He stepped away, turning off the water a few moments later. His head felt like it was about to burst, like an overinflated balloon about to pop. His brain was burning almost as much as his eyes. He'd used his brain, his mind, and every single neuron he possessed at that moment. He turned his head into a computer to get through everything in front of him, and that had caused him to overheat to the point where he needed to cool his head and eyes, which were burning. Were they red? A glance in the mirror over the sink gave Naruto the answer. They were white, or about as white as someone could get if they hadn't blinked for an extended period of time. But he had to do it. Dadaku specialized in defense and the read block, a tool used by blockers that would put any spiker in serious trouble. And he had to deal with Choji and the other members of the opposing team's plays. Not only was he forced to look for every gap in the defense, every mistake in the blocks, and the wall that was the opposing players, but he was also forced to cover the gaps that his former teammate and friend was looking for in his team, in him, and in his teammates. It was double duty that had pushed him to the brink of collapse in the first set and had left his mind overheating, almost like a computer without cooling. And I hadn't trained for a long time. Choji seems to have improved, even for someone who only thinks with his stomach. Sasuke will undoubtedly be much better since he's at Shiratorizawa, becoming a better setter than he already was. But my body. Instinctively, Naruto massaged his stomach and left abdominal area, almost as if he'd been pricked. He trained for as long as he could remember, for both his father and mother, but after what happened with his mother, he'd abandoned training, or even performed completely. He attended matches, played in tournaments, but it wasn't like it had been before he discovered his mother was sick and had been in that car accident. And his father's refusal to support him didn't make things any better, even with the two of them separated. Those things don't matter on the track. What matters is getting over the iron wall of Dadaku again, even if my head is burning out. Naruto took the towel hanging around his neck and lightly dried his face, feeling its roughness. That small action had refreshed his head, mind, and eyes. His vision was back to normal, and his body didn't feel heavy or his mind dull. He wasn't what he'd been at the start of the match, but his current state was in no way enviable to that of his teammates and rivals. However, Choji was much better prepared than he was, and Naruto was already imagining his contingency plan against his former teammate. However, contingency plans were the last defense for any strategist, and Naruto wasn't planning on using that plan against Choji just yet. No, he was counting on Shoyo and Kageyama and his super fast to get past the iron wall. He had to get the two boys moving and synchronize them until their movement was even better than it already was, much better. If Shoyo opened his eyes. Shoyo always relied on Kageyama's movements and passes, giving the setter too much credit. It almost seemed as if he lacked the skills, and only Kageyama was the good one of the two, the one who made the plays. However, Naruto saw something that even many would overlook, and not just Shoyo's physique. The boy was a diamond in the rough that Coach Yukai wasn't polishing, and that others would see as a simple kid who didn't know what he was doing. Shoyo needs the tools the rest of us have. With that, we'll be able to reach the nationals with almost no gaps to fill. But first the Dadaku. He let out all the air he'd been holding in his lungs and walked out of the bathroom with much more confident steps. He didn't feel the pressure of 3 tons on his shoulders, and his legs supported him without any problem, as if he hadn't been playing intensely. But Naruto wasn't fooled. Choji's presence on the court had taken a toll on him physically and mentally, as his mind wasn't completely right after the first set's rallies. He was worn out. If this were a video game, a potion would revitalize me. But they weren't in any RPG where he could get recovery items, so the only thing the boy could get from Shimizu were drinks and a little water on his face to completely clear his head. And he had managed to clear his head a little, though not much. But he was ready to play. Naruto. The boy stopped near his Karasuno teammates. Shoyo had his towel hanging around his neck. Kageyama was still drinking from his bottle with his name on it. Daichi was talking to Sugawara and Coach Yukai, probably looking for the Dadaku's weaknesses. Tanaka and Nishinoya seemed to be busy staring at Shimizu, and Ace Azumane was standing a little apart but not far from Tsukishima and Yamaguchi. The latter seemed to be talking to the blocker about something. "I'm sorry I came out like this. I needed a little rest." He hadn't lied, and he didn't back down when everyone's eyes were fixed on him for a few moments, perhaps searching for some clue as to how he was feeling or if he had any injuries. "You know you don't have to carry everything, right?" Aishin's lips revealed the teeth hidden in a smile. The Karasuno coach had taken it upon himself to learn everything about his students, including their medical history. He knew about Naruto's situation and didn't want the boy to overexert himself as he seemed to have been doing. That could lead to the Uzumaki getting injured and he didn't want that with one of his players. Sorry coach. In the second set, you won't be participating from the start, Uzumaki. You'll sit on the bench with me and analyze your opponent's moves, as well as Akimichi's. Yes, coach. It was the best option they had, and Naruto knew it. The coach had placed him on the bench to rest and recover, but he wouldn't sit idly by. He would use his eyes to see the Dadaku's patterns, learn them, and break them when the time was right to win the match. The low-risk strategy that benefited everyone. With Uzumaki sitting on the bench, we won't have anyone who can match Akimichi with the ease he was doing. The Dadaku could become a huge thorn in your side until your partner is recovered, do you understand? Don't slow down, though, guys. If you keep working just as hard, no matter what your opponents do, you'll win. Yes, coach. The second set began a minute after each coach gave instructions to their players. Unlike the other Karasuno players, Naruto sat back on the bench to Kaishin's right, lightly covering his head with the same towel the coach had given him. But he didn't take his eyes off the track. His eyes moved and followed Dadaku's movements and how they tried to cover the gaps in his defense, how they tried to block the plays coordinated by Kageyama as the setter, and how they tried to stop Karasuno's super fast attack between the 9 and 10. Although they were slowly achieving the latter, step by step, guided by the expert defense of Choji, who seemed to have learned Kageyama and Shoyo's movements. What do you think of Akimichi, Uzumaki? Choji is an experienced blocker capable of stopping many plays even from professional players, and he's capable of scoring points, even though that's not typical of a blocker. As a person, he's overly kind. But as a player I'd love to have him alongside Tsukishima on our defense. Not that I'm looking down on Shoyo, but Choji is better at defending than him, much better. Naruto's words proved true. Dadaku had begun to recover and score points, whether through constant blocking or through the players' spikes, and soon the scoreboard read 3-7 in favor of Dadaku, which filled the players of this team with renewed energy and caused the Karasuno boys to find themselves in a difficult situation. I see, the coach massaged his chin as he looked at Choji, the boy they'd mentioned. The Akimichi had reorganized Dadaku's defense and had viciously battered Karasuno's by directing his teammates like they were his sword, almost as if he were the captain. He's pretty good. He's not as smart as Shika, Naruto declared, lowering his head slightly. Shika is the smartest of all of us, even smarter than the coaches Urikawa. He's a mental monster and could destroy any play. However, Choji has stamina and can be a leader of the defense. I would even trust him with the protection of a country, if I may exaggerate, coach. So what do we do, Uzumaki? Naruto stared down at the floor for the next few seconds. The score had changed to 5-12 in favor of Dadaku, who seemed to have taken a downward slope due to the speed with which they were scoring points against Karasuno. But the boy knew that wasn't it. It was all about Choji. His friend was a blocker and could see the entire field including Karasuno's defense. Choji already knew the gaps and was going to exploit them without anyone being able to stop him. Guess I'll have to overheat again, coach. The towel fell to the floor. The blue eyes shone with a certain firmness as hard as steel. Fists clenched, back relaxed, and arms extended at his sides. Naruto was standing. He had left his seat on the bench and was waiting. 5:13. We'll make a change. Naruto started walking toward the track. He felt the gaze of his teammates and the spectators. He could feel Choji's eyes and the look of pleasure in his eyes. Forward. They both high-fived. Of course, Nishinoya. Leave it to me. Chapter 22. The atmosphere on the court changed when Naruto stepped onto it. From the moment his feet touched the inter's boundary line, from the moment he bumped fists with Nishinoya, everything felt heavy and dense, like a huge slab of sand on his shoulders. It was the pressure of being behind, of playing in a qualifier and not a friendly, where points didn't count toward advancing to the final. Naruto shook off the pressure with a second step that seemed to echo around the stadium. He stepped hard, firmly, and looked at his Karasuno teammates. They were nervous, a little clumsy, especially Shoyo. The boy looked like he was about to collapse and couldn't take his eyes off the uneven scoreboard. But it was normal. Naruto hadn't been able to overcome his nerves until he'd played many professional matches, in many competitions. Shoyo was participating in those interscholastic matches for the first time, and his other competitive match had been with a beginner's team. It was normal and logical for him to be nervous, to see himself losing in that match. His mission was to relax him. Before taking his position, he walked over to the first year and patted him on the back. That simple gesture made Shoyo blink just as a drop of sweat fell from his chin. He seemed to be breathing again, given the heaving of his chest, and Naruto took up his position in front of his former teammate and friend. Choji was a big, broad boy with a speed that seemed unbecoming of his body proportions. He reacted and guided Dadaku's defense to the point of putting the team ahead and putting Karasuno almost 10 points ahead in the set. If they increased those points, they wouldn't have a chance. And Naruto knew it. He knew the feeling of being behind on the scoreboard. Of being pressured by the stares, the whispers, and the nerves that plagued his teammates until their confidence was undermined. He had to embody that confidence, rooted in Karasuno like a huge thick oak tree. He flexed his legs, letting his torso slump until his back stopped on its own. He extended his arms and his eyes moved over the opposing players. Dadaku was about to serve and score the 14th point if they found the gap in his defense. Shoyo was nervous, and his receptions got worse when he was nervous. Taking a deep breath, Naruto scanned the entire field with his eyes in just a second. He looked at every member of the Dadaku wall, at every one of his own teammates. I knew how they played. The Dadaku took a quick, effective shot straight into a gap in Karasuno's backcourt. Naruto had seen the gap, but he wasn't the only one who saw the rival team's movement. Tight. The experience forced the Karasuno captain to move, to dive for the ball and catch it. Extending his arms, clasping his hands, Samura received the ball. He felt a touch on his forearms, but he didn't flinch and only fell to his left knee after the impact. The ball was in the air. Dadaku had an 8-point lead over them, and they had to act, react. They had to score points and close the gap. Kageyama read his teammates and Samura's moves simultaneously with a glance. He was the team's point guard and had to be able to move and analyze with his eyes. That's what he did. He created the ball's trajectory in his mind and brought it to life. He stretched his arms upward. He used his fingertips and gently pushed the ball toward the ceiling. 5. Naruto didn't approach the net or try to throw off Dadaku's blockers. Neither did he with his friend Choji, making the image unforgettable. His right arm moved almost in slow motion. His hand became flat, perfect for hitting a ball. In a split second, leaping up and arching his back as he leaped, Naruto hit the ball with such force that it blew past the blockers, knocking them off their feet and hitting the court. El Karasuno Anoda. The point was added to the scoreboard while the ball mark remained fresh on the court, a reminder of the masterfully scored point. Another point. Samura raised a finger and smiled when Naruto looked at him. The Uzumaki smiled back as they rotated. They were only 7 points away from catching the Dadaku and within contention of reaching the finals. That point meant nothing to Dadaku. But to Karasuno, it was like a shot in the arm. You could see it by looking at the teenagers, who went from being defeated to displaying an intense glow that could be identified with a renewed will. There was no resignation or fatigue in their expressions or movements. As expected of a professional team, Karasuno reacted, propelled forward by Naruto's point. The boy charged at his teammates. What the captain hadn't managed, Naruto achieved with that point that could have been decisive for that set, as the Karasuno coach realized, smiling slightly. Another point. Naruto's loud shout echoed throughout the arena as the ball hit the ground. It was Kageyama's turn to serve, who stared at his teammates' back before turning his gaze to the other side of the net, where the opposing players were. The Dadaku was a defender, red blocker, and could stop his serve. So why was his heart pounding so hard? He looked back at Naruto, and he gave him a thumbs up, a crooked smile on his lips. Kageyama reacted and served powerfully, just as Akawa would have done if he were playing that hedge. He mimicked his powerful serve, his analytical vision, and looked for the egg on the Dadaku's defense, on the blockers. They were going to jump, they were going to stop his serve. Passion. Kageyama's thoughts came true. Dadaku's blockers jumped and blocked his serve, sending the ball crashing to the ground, scoring. Pam. They didn't score, they just blocked. He's free. Naruto's right leg had been even faster than its owner, stretching out and stopping the ball, preventing the Dadaku scorer from scoring 14 points in that set, something that caught the blockers off guard. I'm not good at placing. Tsukishima declared, pushing the ball up a bit, sighing at having to stretch over the opponents, because he scored by pushing the ball over the net, not placing the ball for one of his fellow spikers. Karasuno scores again. There were only 6 points left until Karasuno would be back in contention for a spot in the inter-school finals, where they could face Aoba Josai and Akawa again. They just had to overcome Dadaku's defense 6 more times. Another point, guys. 2. Kageyama served again, but this time he didn't do it directly or towards the blockers. He sought to elevate the ball, forcing Dadaku to move and receive his serve, not to block it as they had done before, and allow his teammates to put together a complete play to score the point. Dadaku received Kageyama's serve, preventing Karasuno from scoring, but that was exactly what Kageyama was looking for with the play. When Dadaku's spiker swung his hand at the ball, Naruto and Tsukishima blocked the ball, surprising him, and scored on the block. Another point. Karasuno has scored 3 points in a row. You haven't fallen asleep, Naruto. Never, the blue eyes stared at Choji intensely, shining. I've entered the game again, friend. The Karasuno players were refreshed, their energy completely renewed. Naruto wiped the sweat from his chin with his thumb. Kageyama sighed, his eyes fixed on the other side of the court. Shoyo frowned, his eyes shining brighter. Samura smiled, clapping loudly. Another play for Karasuno. Another point for the team, this time with Naruto's positioning and Tanaka's shot, which sent the ball soaring over the net with the power of a true finisher. Once again they narrowed the gap in the score, putting pressure on the Daidaku players, as if a slab had fallen on them. Another point, guys. The next point came from Kageyama's positioning and Azumane's shot, who overcame Daidaku's defense with a well-placed and powerful shot, breaking down their opponent's iron wall and shortening the gap again. The team dynamic has changed, the professor declared, readjusting his glasses with a push of his fingers. When Uzumaki-san came in, he changed everything like a strategist. Naruto is a strategist, with a vision that could be put to good use in soccer, Kaisen admitted, sighing. His men lowered themselves and he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his legs. That kid should be playing on a professional soccer team, basketball team, or any team that would make him stand out more than he does here. Uzumaki Naruto. He has eyes that see everything and everyone on the field. For Coach Yukai, Naruto was a player with too much promise to be a future that he was wasting by only playing on a high school team, a team in a sport as little known as volleyball. Why hadn't the boy gone on to a professional team? Why had he held back, as if afraid to give his all? Kaisen looked at the boy from his seat, his right foot trembling. That boy, he'll give us the national, professor. Another point. Karasuno ties with Daidaku after Uzumaki's shoot. 13-13. Karasuno had managed to tie Daidaku after closing the gap in a consistent, direct and sustained manner, overcoming the opposing team's blockers 8 times, breaking through their reed blocks and shattering the iron wall that had blocked and stopped them last year. The thin rays of sunlight now shone more intensely through the cracks in the wall of the blockers, giving Karasuno more opportunities. And they had taken advantage of those opportunities. Come on. Another point. Taoji, Naruto addressed his old friend and teammate. The latter looked at him, confused. Watch the wings that will propel us to the nationals in this match, friend. Kageyama served again, but the serve was easily received by one of Daidaku's receivers. The setter placed the ball, and Taoji spiked it past Karasuno's blockers. Pam. The ball was easily received by Azumane, who fell on his backside from the power of the shot. Free. Tight. Kageyama moved and placed the ball, but he didn't send it towards Hinata or Tanaka, he sent the ball directly towards Naruto's hand, who hit the ball hard, shattering the iron wall with force. Now the sun was passing completely through, illuminating the shattered pieces scattered across the ground. 14-13 a favor of Karasuno. The duel between Naruto and Taoji had ended with the latter on the ground, on his butt, watching his friend standing there, his shadow falling over him, as if he had a huge sun shining brightly behind him. Were those wings? Let's keep playing like this, guys. The points renewed the strength and spirit of the Cuervos, and they followed their captain's instructions. They moved in coordination, like cogs in a well-oiled machine, but improving with each play, with each point. Now, the iron wall couldn't reach the Raven spikes, which sailed over them with speed and power. The spikers had proven capable of destroying the wall, passing directly over the blockers, and this was a direct blow to the mentality of the Daidaku players, who seemed unable to coordinate with their teammates, even for a positioning, leaving them exposed in front of other teams, their teammates, and coaches. Naruto smiled. That was what they were looking for. To destroy Daidaku by breaking down their defense, shattering their confidence as well. Now, they couldn't stop them, block their shots, or follow their plays, no matter how hard they tried. The reed block no longer worked to stop them, nor could Daidaku execute such a block properly, leaving many more gaps in their defense, through which Karasuno scored the necessary points. The Crows were in the lead. 20-13. In the blink of an eye, Karasuno had completely turned the score around and built a 7-point lead over their rivals without them even being able to react. They had seized the momentum and didn't let up or give the Daidaku boys any respite. Any concession could give their rivals the opportunity to score the point that could change everything. No one at Karasuno wanted that. They didn't stop, no matter how hard they saw their opponents trying to keep up. They just kept pushing, driven by the momentum of the points they'd earned up to that point. Another point for Karasuno. A general sigh escaped from the mouths of the Karasuno players. Keep it up. Naruto shifted his right shoulder slightly and looked toward the Daidaku, seeing their sweaty faces, their heavy breathing. They were physically exhausted, tired of trying to stop them, of blocking their spikes, feeling impossible to stop them, turning their game into a constant loop. And they couldn't escape the loop without scoring a point that would push them up. I won't let them. He shook his head and ran parallel to the net, following the ball Kageyama had placed. He flexed his legs, and Naruto jumped at the same time as Taoji and 2 other Daidaku players. All 4 were going for the same ball, to score the same point. But it was Naruto who stopped and pushed the ball with his fingers, just the pads of his fingers, away from his opponent's. Point. The number 24 shown on the scoreboard associated with Karasuno, while the number 13 remained on the Dadaku scoreboard as a constant reminder, like a burden hanging over the players, and this affected them psychologically and, ultimately, physically, as they tried to stop the Karasuno players without success. Just one more point. Hajiyama served again, sweat already dripping from his face, showing fatigue. The ball sailed over the net directly into the hands of one of Dadaku's receivers, who received the ball and sent it to the setter. The setter pushed it with the tips of his dice, performing a jump set toward Chouji. Akamichi's right arm moved swiftly, and his hand struck the ball. 5. Free. Samura had received it, falling on his right knee, but his teammates were already moving to place that free ball, with the intention of ending the set and the match. Salted. Detonedlos. It was Naruto who placed that ball using only his fingertips, and the ball rose a few more centimeters, but it didn't go over the net, but instead went to the left. Miaya. Azumane spiked, and the Dadaku blockers jumped as hard as they could, with all the strength they had, but they couldn't stop the spike and the last point of the match. The ball hit Chouji and An's slightly separated arms, causing them to fall onto their backs. Hunto. El Karasuno Ganea. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown in left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.